368, 15,000-word chapter. After waiting for a while, Du Mao still didn't show up. Looking at the ancestor mountain, Zuoxiu laughed. Still not showing up? As expected of an Ascendant Realm cultivator, I guess even my flying sword can't pierce your face. However, they suddenly noticed something strange. There was an immortal pavilion on the mountainside of Ancestral Master Mountain. It was an immortal land, and there was an old cultivator in the unpolished Jade Realm. He seemed to be protecting a young girl with a good constitution. At this moment, everyone looked at the girl strangely. She was a very young cultivator in the Dragon Gate realm. When she found that Zuoxiu was looking at her, she immediately lowered her head in fear. Zuoxiu frowned. Because many disciples of the Tongyi sect looked at the mountainside of the Ancestor Mountain almost at the same time, as if they were looking for her. The old Jade Realm cultivator beside the girl, who might be her protector, was so angry that his face turned green, but he didn't dare to provoke the sword cultivator with infinite killing power. The girl was timid and suffered a great grievance, so she began to cry silently. If a sect on a mountain wanted to gain a foothold and even look down on the mountains, it was actually very simple. That was, they had to be able to fight. In the past, they had accumulated family property, passed down incense, and had magic skills that could reach the upper 5 realms. They could be deeply rooted and then spread their branches and leaves. Now they had those who smashed the place. If they could beat them, they could go and smash other people's places. They could at least defeat them and support the sect and protect the younger generation. In the future, they would be more arrogant and despotic now. When the time came, what would they do in the future? Would they still want the Ancestor Hall? After all, in the cultivation on the mountain, revenge was not particular. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. There were those who deliberately waited for 100 years, or even 1,000 years. Then, this reincarnated girl who was in the Jade Primitive Realm in her previous life, after a cultivator who was good at divination in the Tongyi school pointed out the general direction, the school spent nearly 30 years painstakingly finding the place. Then, some people deliberately hid their names and waited for her for decades. Several years after she was born, they successfully brought her back to the mountain after a series of fights. Therefore, this girl who was brought back to the Tongyi sect belonged to the category of people who could fight in the future. It was similar to Taiping Mountain's female crown princess Huang Ting. However, she was still far from Huang Ting's cultivation and aura. The latter was especially important as it involved the heart of the Great Tao. The Lord of Heaven of Mount Taiping and Song Mao must have scolded Huang Ting many times for stirring up trouble, but in their hearts they must be overjoyed. The only regret of this young girl whom the Tongyi sect had placed high hopes on was that although her aptitude was good, her temperament was too soft. She had left the mountain several times to temper her Tao heart, and the sect's evaluation was always that she had extraordinary talent and a refreshing temperament. There were hundreds of words of praise and appreciation, but every time at the end, they would add 1 or 2 sentences, such as that she had a mellow temperament and was slightly less decisive to kill. However, due to her special status, no one dared to say anything harsh to her. The Du clan, which was the largest clan in the Tongyi sect, treated her as their favorite. The reason was simple. Besides the fact that she was an unpolished jade cultivator in her past life, there was an even more important identity. She was indeed the mother of the ancestor of resurgence, Du Mao. He was looking for the reincarnated person to renew his good karma. Generally, only the immortals on the mountain with the word sect had such a background and means. He was stunned for a moment, holding the sword with one hand and scratching his head with the other. Probably because he didn't want to scare an innocent girl, he explained, "It's just a joke. Don't take it seriously. We scholars like to use puns." It was fine if he didn't say it. Anyway, the girl was already scared out of her wits. This explanation. The girl with a pale face began to wrinkle her small face little by little. She had just secretly wiped her tears away, and she struggled not to show her timid side in front of this big villain. Otherwise, according to her temperament in the past, she would have been so aggrieved that her eyeballs would have fallen down. He was in a dilemma. However, he didn't want to say anything more. Xiaoqi was not good at dealing with girls, but Cui? That bastard was a little better. He always felt that a girl's mind was more difficult to understand than a teacher's knowledge. In short, it was more difficult than reading. As for whether Xiaoqi's knowledge was great or not, compared to Qi Jingxuan's orthodox and Cui, his crooked mind was indeed much worse. Since he was young, he didn't like to read. He was forced to read by the old scholar, so he naturally had some knowledge. Ordinary scholars of the academy were not qualified to discuss the Tao with Xiaoqi. One had to know where Xiaoqi came from when he practiced the sword. The earliest was from books, from innumerable cliff stone carvings, from innumerable tablet rubbings. Shao Qi had accompanied him through countless mountains and rivers in order to help him practice the sword smoothly. Shao Qi sighed softly, and looked in the direction of the central divine continent. He retracted his gaze and found that beside the girl, there was a youth with innate sword embryo aptitude. His eyes were sharp and stubborn, staring straight at him. Even if his eyes were burned by his sword qi, he was still unwilling to turn his head. Shao Qi glanced at a certain place in the ancestral mountain. "Dumao, I know what you want to do. Why don't you try? I'll wait for you." After that, Shao Qi casually slashed with his sword, and another large door appeared in the formation barrier behind him. He turned and walked out. Shao Qi was at the border of the Tongyi sect. He hovered in the air and closed his eyes to rest. When the sun rose from the east, he started to use the purest sword qi and sword intent to shatter some solidified fate of the mountains and rivers. For example, a certain mountain, a certain river, a certain towering tree that had the potential to become a demon, a certain pavilion that suppressed the evil aura, or a powerful object buried underground. A small amount of spirit qi leaked out. Generally speaking, it didn't seem like much was lost. In reality, the consequences were very serious. The fate of the mountains and rivers was about hiding wind and gathering water. Where it was hidden and where it gathered was very particular. Who would dare to carelessly take in such a chaotic fate? Fortune and disaster were unpredictable. This sword cultivator blocked the entrance of the Tongyi sect. Like an old farmer, he started to dig up the foundation of the Tongyi sect. Because it was at the border, it was inevitable that there would be waves of spirit qi flowing into the fields of others. At first, the Tongyi sect didn't dare to come out and collect the spirit qi back into the sect. Later on, the Tongyi sect was really distressed about the spirit qi. They sent an old golden core cultivator to his death and used a magic treasure to capture the spirit qi. Unexpectedly, the sword cultivator didn't even look at the little golden core. He just landed on the surface of a large river. The fine strands of spirit qi nurtured by the river water beneath his feet instantly shattered. Another gold core cultivator mustered up his courage and flew out of the mountain, following behind the sword cultivator from a distance of several dozen miles. He carefully gathered the scattered spiritual aura and tried his best to put it back into the river, helping to sort out and stabilize the water circulation. After 10 days, the sword cultivator and the badly battered earth immortal cultivators of the Tongyi continent coexisted peacefully. They each did their own things. After another 10 days, the sect released the ban. Some cultivators of the middle 5 realms below the golden core stage began to secretly approach the sword cultivator. They were separated by a distance of 30 to 50 miles. They had different feelings and were extremely complicated. After another 10 days, even many young cultivators of the lower 5 realms began to join in the fun and admire this person. As for the sword cultivator named Left and Right, he never paid attention to the Tongyi sect cultivators except for an occasional glance at the peak of the ancestral Master Mountain. After the Great Cold, the New Year was not far away. There was a saying in the market below the mountain that the New Year was hard to pass every year. The disciples of the Tongyi sect, who had been flaunting their prowess in the continent for countless years, only knew that their sect would also face difficulties. Then one day the Tongyi sect deliberately set up an ambush, using 2 Jade Realm cultivators and nearly 10 Earth Immortals. Left and Right broke through with a sword. Then they changed their route and went to the vicinity of the ancestral Master Mountain. From the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain, a forbidden mountain that was supposed to be gifted to a future Jade Realm cultivator as a residence for immortals was split open with a sword, creating a huge canyon. They left in a carefree manner. After that, they continued to block the door and poach people. After such a big commotion, there was no wall in the world that didn't have a crack. The Tongyi sect and the Earth Immortals of the nascent Soul Realm had already known about it. But the Academy didn't come out to stop them, so no one dared to come and watch the show. Except for one person. Jiang Shangzhen, the Jade sect cultivator of the Jade sect, whose natal item was a willow leaf, was the head of the Jiang family. After bowing and apologizing to his left and right, he looked at them with a straight face for a long time, and then suddenly burst out laughing that shook the sky. When he rushed to the north and returned to the south, he traveled with the wind twice, deliberately very slowly and swaggeringly swinging his 2 sleeves. As a result, he was almost split in half by the left and right swords. However, Jiang Shangzhen was still laughing happily even as he was fleeing in a sorry state. One day, a young girl stood timidly in the distance and asked in a trembling voice, "Why did you destroy the fate of my sect for no reason?" Since he was now familiar with the Tongyi sect, Some of the disciples of the Tong Yi sect thought that he couldn't hear them whispering, but he heard them clearly. So after thinking about it, he replied, "How can such a prodigal be the ancestor of resurgence? I think he is the ancestor of destruction, so you shouldn't have given birth to Du Mao." The delicate young girl's face was full of shame and indignation. The young man who accompanied the young girl here was also the hope of the Tong Yi sect for the next 1,000 years. Compared to his soft peers, the young man's personality was full of sharpness. He carried a long sword personally bestowed by ancestor Du Mao on his back, his eyes full of hatred. "Sooner or later, you will die under my sword." Left and right laughed. "Since that's the case, then I will do as the Romans do." The sect master of the Tong Yi sect, who had yet to fully recover from his injuries, a purple-robed sword cultivator, descended from the sky, blocking in front of the young boy and girl, protecting them behind him. He actually apologized to left and right. "Child's words carry no harm, I implore Sword Immortal not to take them to heart." Left and right sat cross-legged outside the cliff of a mountain peak, saying, "I heard that your Tong Yi sect has always liked to throw flying swords and smash arcane treasures at the slightest disagreement. If you can't beat them, you will announce your name, return to the mountain, and complain a few times to your elders. In the end, you will rush down the mountain to chop people. Is it like this?" The purple-robed sword cultivator smiled bitterly and said nothing. Left and right laughed. "Are you saying, 'So what if I am,' in your heart?" The purple-robed sword cultivator's expression changed greatly, ruthlessly slapping the young man's face, saying angrily, "Kneel and kowtow, apologize to the Sword Immortal. Kowtow until the Sword Immortal is satisfied." A trace of blood seeped out from the corner of the young man's mouth. "I won't kowtow even if I die." Left and right smiled. "I really have no interest in teaching these arrogant Khanate sword embryos how to be reasonable. If a child is not taught properly, it is the fault of the father, and if a teacher is not strict enough, it is the laziness of the teacher. As an elder, take another blow from my sword." The purple-robed sword cultivator's abdomen was pierced by a sword, once again smashing through the mountain peak behind him, tragically falling to the ground. As for whether or not he had deliberately suppressed his realm, allowing left and right to appease his anger, only the heavens and earth would know. Left and right looked at the young man. "Not going to say anything more? Perhaps Du Mao will come out to protect you." The young man's face was pale. Left and right said, "You will die if you don't say anything. If you say something more, perhaps someone will help you block a blow. What will you choose at this time?" The young man with the sword on his back was conflicted. The young girl suddenly stood in front of the young man, heartbroken, crying, "Don't force him anymore, his sword heart will shatter. You are so powerful, why lower yourself to his level?" Left and right smiled. "Ask your son." The young girl cried until her vision blurred. She only felt that how could there be such an unreasonable person in the world? Left and right stood up. "Previously, you didn't want to kowtow for the sake of face, to sell yourself to some elders of the sect, wanting to leave a good impression. Now you don't even dare to say anything even if you die because you truly cherish your life. Khanate sword embryos like you." Left and right looked to the north, mocking himself. Why did I only begin to realize the good of little junior brother after returning to this world? Left and right once obtained that sword by chance. Left and right once joked that he had obtained a 3-foot sword, crossing the sea to kill a whale, sheathing it and hanging it on the wall, still making clanging sounds. Left and right later left the central divine continent, far away from the human world, traveling on the sea and never studying again. Left and right said to the girl, "Let's not talk about Du Mao and your past relationship with Du Mao. Let's just talk about this visit. I have indeed implicated you and made you a laughingstock. It was my fault first. You can make a reasonable request." The young girl wiped away her tears, half believing and half doubting. "Really?" Left and right nodded. "You only have one chance, it must be reasonable." The young girl mustered her courage. "Then please let him go, don't suppress his sword heart anymore." Left and right nodded. "All right." As expected, he deliberately retracted the sword chi that naturally flowed outside. Actually, the young girl didn't know that left and right didn't target the young genius sword heart, but that this person's sword heart wasn't pure enough. Otherwise, having a sword cultivator by his side was not a small blessing. It could be said to be entering a room of orchids. The young girl smiled through her tears, but probably because she felt that smiling at this big enemy was no different from a despicable act of deceiving her master and betraying her sect. She hurriedly put on a straight face. Left and right turned around, preparing to continue to slash the mountains and disperse the chi of this Tong Yi sect. Turning his head, he said, "Du Mao is really a wastrel, you will know soon." The young girl was at a loss. Behind her, the young man trembled, his body was unstable, and his sword heart was even more unstable. Left and right swept far away the sword chi like a rainbow. At the ancestral master mountain, the strange phenomenon of the small grotto heaven of Wutong was becoming more and more obvious. Want to ascend? You have to ask my sword if it agrees. A cross-continent ferry from the North Continent had already arrived above the territory of the Eastern Aquarius continent. The speed was extremely fast and countless immortal money had been spent. The passengers were naturally happy to see it, who wouldn't want to reach their destination earlier. It was said that a rich old nascent soul cultivator had spent a large sum of money to make this ferry so fast. A short and strong man lived in the cheapest house at the bottom, living in seclusion. He should be a pure martial artist, but it was impossible to tell what realm he was at. In fact, even if one couldn't tell, it was enough to make the smarter chi refinement warriors wary. The legendary 10th realm of martial arts, the ultimate martial artist, had 3 levels: vigorous, pure, and divine. After Li Er left the top of the Lion Peak, his aura rose all the way, inexplicably entering the realm of pure. Li Er felt that it was quite good. Tearing down the ancestral hall, one's fist had to be hard. Undercurrents were surging in Old Dragon City. The Fan family had been biding their time. Of course, in the eyes of most people in the ancestral hall of the Fan family, this was called waiting for death. The Sun family also did not make a big move. Although they had long chosen to rely on the Fu family, they were not in a hurry to submit any proof of allegiance. The dusty medicine shop was still a lively little place that no one disturbed. Qin Pingan sat behind the counter. On the table, there was the smallest piece of the dragon-slaying platform, which was the size of a ruler. Chu Yi and 15 were sharpening their swords. The 2 of them flew past the dragon-slaying platform, sparks flying everywhere. They were excited and happy. Qin Pingan was calculating for himself. The golden jade pendant with the words, "I am good at nurturing the Great Spirit," could absorb the spirit energy of heaven and earth on its own. It was a small cave that could be hung around the waist. It was a pity that he couldn't hang it now because it conflicted with the array of the dusty medicine shop and the evil spirit of the Zhao family's Yin spirit. When he reached a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters, he could take it out. Pei Chen liked it very much. Previously he couldn't put it down at the counter. He touched it for a long time, but in the end he was too embarrassed to borrow it from Qin Pingan. Unable to solve the urgent problem, Qin Pingan could only temporarily hide this jade pendant. However, what he cared about the most and hurt the most at the moment was the yang spirit body of the great cultivator of the Ascendant Realm. This was the real slew of an immortal. Young Cui? Or Cui Dongshan's current appearance was like this. However, there was a lot of knowledge in how to use this slew. If he was not careful, he would lose everything. If he used it well, he would make a lot of money. It was more difficult than refining the natal item. Socialite Chun first, he had to open the door. The slew of an immortal was a veritable invincible golden body. The natal flying sword of a sword cultivator in the middle 5 realms might not be able to stab anything with all its strength. Secondly, like Cui Dongshan who took over the nest, it meant that the soul that entered the door had to be complete and strong enough, and it had to be a person with a strong will. Otherwise, in the end, it might be the end of Du Mao's resurgence. Once he took the opportunity to return to the Tongye sect, the Yang spirit would return. The consequences would be unimaginable. Thirdly, how to nourish it. If the slew of an immortal was put aside, it would not be a problem for thousands of years. However, once there was a new owner, he would have to spend money. Fourthly, how the new Du Mao grew up and how to choose the cultivation path. Otherwise, it would be a waste of God's gift. There was a saying in the secular dynasty to praise officials called the prime minister's character. However, there was still a long way to go before he could truly become an official of the dynasty, and he even had to rely on luck. Qin Pingan asked the Yin spirit surnamed Zhao about this matter in detail, but the latter was vague because it involved a lot of inside stories, so he didn't dare to say much. He owed the Fan family or Fan Junmao 50 grains of grain rain money. There were only a few coins left in his bag of gold essence copper coins. Spending money like running water and not being able to make ends meet was the current awkward situation Qin Pingan was in. Pei Chen's thoughts were always bold and unconstrained. He said that time was like a flying sword passing by with a whoosh. He couldn't even see the tail. Qin Pingan felt that the silver in his pocket was running faster than the flying sword. He sighed and put away the jade pendant. However, the medicine shop was destined to have no customers, so he let Chu Yi and Shiwu continue to sharpen their swords. This time he had brought Chu Yi and Shiwu along with him to fight non-stop. Their swords had been blunted by a lot. According to the Yin spirit Zhao, if they continued to expend their energy like this, once a crack appeared on the flying sword, it would be a disaster. However, if he ate the dragon beheading platform, he could repair it. Such a small piece of the dragon beheading platform was the dream of all the sword cultivators in the world. It could be sold for a lot of grain rain money. It was not without reason that ordinary sword cultivators were almost paupers. Even Alliance, when he roamed the pugilistic world of the Central Plains, before he went to the inverted mountain, he owed a huge debt. Although he did not use all of it to nurture his swords, the main thing was that every time he fought, he had to fork out money to help those pitiful sects repair their mountains. This cost took up most of his expenses. However, it was already an unwritten rule that it was the hardest for sword cultivators to earn money. The reason was simple but also not simple. The simple reason was that only the sword needed to burn money. There was no need to be distracted or greedy for other Dharma treasures. What was not simple was that this item was already harder to nurture than other Qi refinement warriors. If Qi refinement warriors were really short of money, they could at least sell some of their family assets for money. They could tear down the east wall to pay the west wall and raise the rank of a Dharma treasure that was suitable for the current cultivation. What did sword cultivators sell? Their own natal flying swords. Although Pei Qian could not bear the pain of opening her tendons, bones, and joints, she still hoped that she could practice martial arts. As long as it was the kind that did not cause her pain, she was willing. For example, today she was asking Xiaobai for advice on martial arts. Old Wei did not like to talk about these and was annoyed by her. He ran into the house, rolled up his blanket and fell asleep. Pei Qian was so angry that she used her walking stick to poke at the blanket. Old Wei did not care and snored thunderously. Pei Qian could only settle for the next best thing. She asked Lu Baixiang, who was the second closest to her, for advice. Lu Baixiang walked to the courtyard. After thinking for a while, he began to imitate Qin Pingan's six-step pile walking. It had a unique charm and was very freehand. As he walked, he turned and smiled at Pei Qian. If you teach a fist, don't teach the steps. If you teach the steps, hit the master. This is an excellent foundation of fist theory. Among the four of us, Zhu Lian's stance is the most open and the most compact. He is the most in line with the saying of retracting and releasing at will. After the six-step pile walking, he lightly punched out with a bang. Lu Baixiang continued, only by exerting strength in 8 directions can you be half asleep and half awake. If there is any movement, your hair will be like a halberd and your fist will shake. Lu Baixiang landed on the ground with a whip kick. A person's spine is like the dragon veins of heaven and earth. Therefore, in martial arts, there is a saying called the Great Dragon Spine. It is not very profound, but it is extremely important. The spine is penetrated section by section, like a flood dragon swaying its body. In an instant it exerts strength. A pure stream of true qi suddenly flows through the qifu and meridians for hundreds of li, even thousands of li. Zhu Lian was sitting on a bench under the eaves. He was reading a novel that described the right amount of fat and thin, but not greasy, scholars and beauties. After hearing Lu Baixiang's words of praise, he laughed happily. Lu Baixiang was very patient. He asked with a smile, "Can you roughly understand? If not, I can break it down and explain it to you in detail." Pei Qian nodded vigorously. "I understand, but I don't want to learn how to walk." Lu Baixiang laughed. "If you don't learn how to walk first, how will you run or fly in the future?" Pei Qian glanced at the narrow saber at Lu Baixiang's waist. "But I want to learn the most powerful sword arts. If I can't, then saber arts are fine too." Lu Baixiang turned to look at Qin Pingan, who was quietly sitting on a bench. He said helplessly, "I don't know what to do." When Pei Qian saw Qin Pingan, he was like a mouse seeing a cat. He immediately changed his tone and said seriously, "Then I'll learn how to walk first." Zhu Lian clicked his tongue. "Stubborn fence-sitters. You're just a money-losing commodity." Pei Qian held his mountain traveling staff and said angrily, "Don't think that you're so great just because you can cook well. If you have the ability, then come out and fight." Zhu Lian exclaimed. He closed the book and stood up with his back bent. "I don't believe in heresy. Today I must compare notes with you. Otherwise, you wouldn't know that I'm the best at fighting out of all the cooks in the dusty medicine shop." Pei Qian was not afraid at all. "Okay, let's start copying books." Zhu Lian sat back on the bench and continued reading. Qin Pingan did not pay any attention to these quarrels. Qin Pingan never restricted Pei Qian in these matters. Qin Pingan stood up with a smile. It was rare for him to be in such a leisurely mood. He stepped lightly into the center of the courtyard. His complexion was still not very good, but Qin Pingan's spirit was not bad at this moment. He walked slowly with the 6-step walking stance. His hands, however, were holding the drumming stance of a deity. The walking stance had nothing to do with one's cultivation level. If one were to describe the feeling of the fist intent, it could only be described as natural. Pei Qian only felt that the same walking stance after Qin Pingan became serious, even just looking at it made him feel comfortable. Zhu Lian raised his head and smiled in amazement. The meaning is a bit heavy. Lu Baixiang nodded. I'm far from it. After Qin Pingan stopped, he looked around and said with a smile, Sui Yuyu Wei Xian, it's your turn. Sui Yuyu, who had been standing silently by the window, turned around and sat back down at the table. Wei Xian's muffled voice came out of the room. Domineering beyond compare. Pei Qian squatted on the ground and laughed wildly. These guys still have the nerve to call me a fence-sitter? Zheng Dafeng actually walked to the door of the main room. He leaned against the door frame and looked up at the sun. He narrowed his eyes. I've finally come back to life. If I lie down any longer, I'll go moldy. Pei Qian was surprised. Zheng Dafeng, you can walk now? Don't try to be brave. If you fall on your face, you'll have to lie down for 10 days to half a month. Zheng Dafeng smiled. My little grand, I beg you to think of me a little better. Pei Qian rolled his eyes. You're taking my kindness for granted. After Qin Pingan nodded to Zheng Dafeng, he sat back down on the bench. Pei Qian brought over some melon seeds and sat down on the bench. She opened her small palm full of melon seeds and placed it in front of Qin Pingan. Zheng Dafeng walked very slowly and with small steps. He strolled under the eaves of the main room. He was not acting on impulse and forcing himself to get out of bed. It was just that this man's back was always hunched. No one seemed to see this scene and did their own things. Lu Baixiang took the chess set and chess box to play chess with Sui Yuyu. Zhu Lian flipped through the book and Wei Xian slept. Pei Qian accompanied Qin Pingan to eat melon seeds. The small medicine shop was a little more festive. One day at noon, a guest other than Fan Junmao and the Fan siblings came to the dusty medicine shop. A real guest. It was an old man with a foreign accent. He bought a lot of medicinal materials in the medicine shop, but complained that the price was a little expensive. The Yin spirit of the Zhao family could only secretly signal Qin Pingan. He could only see that this person's cultivation was quite condensed in the Dragon Gate realm. Qin Pingan's state of mind was calm. He had even fought with Du Mao, who was in the Ascendant realm. In any case, he had seen great storms and waves, so he still had this kind of composure. The sword spirit told Qin Pingan the words of Lord Sheng, which made him think about some things again. The truth of the world had always been there. Some people picked it up and regarded it as a standard, as a treasure. Some people disdained it, and even some people would step on it. It was not that the truth was wrong or bad. It was that there was a problem with people's hearts. The sword spirit especially said a few more words about the old Confucian who was in charge of the northern sky screen of the Tongya continent. He said that his end was not very good. According to the old scholar, he might lose the qualification to eat cold pig's head meat. After Qin Pingan pondered, he could not help but sigh at the complexity of the battle of the great Tao. Even Lord Sheng had to admit that the Tao De chapter was well written, and he was full of knowledge in the temple. Didn't he also do such an unreasonable and rude thing? But then again, this was one of the 72 sages of the temple. Didn't his truth and knowledge contribute to the education of the vast world? Of course it did, and it was definitely not small. Then, did it mean that for the so-called great cause of 1,000 years and 10,000 years of prosperity, he targeted Qin Pingan this time? He must have taken the wrong path on his great Tao. Did he not go high enough or far enough? Also not. Pei Qian, Wei Xian, and Sui Yuyu went to buy New Year goods together. Hidden marriage chairman, wife, let's remarry, it was Pei Qian's pleading Sui Yuyu. Then there was the old man who came to the small alley outside the medicine shop to chat with Zhu Lian every day. Today he was sitting in the corner. He was like an otherworldly expert looking down. These days Zhu Lian read more and more diligently. Most of the books were brand new. They were all gifted to him by that old senior. He would read almost every night under the light. On the night that Pei Qian and the others returned with a full load, Qin Pingan closed the medicine shop. He sat on a long bench and drank a little medicinal wine from the blade-strengthening gourd. Pei Qian played outside for a day and went to bed early. Of course she did not dare not copy books. Lu Baixiang walked over and sat beside him. He talked about some interesting stories of this world. Lu Baixiang felt that it was very interesting. He said that the Jianghu of Lotus Flower Blessed Land should learn from the actions of the sects here. For example, the vengeful killings of the cultivators here were very straightforward. There were a few unwritten rules on the mountain that were widely spread. First, when dealing with enemies that did not have the possibility of reconciliation, cut the weeds and eliminate the roots. Second, those young disciples with low cultivation but good luck should not send their heads or treasures to others. Once they surrounded and killed someone, they would usually form a group. A disciple of the same cultivation level or the same level would be used to train their Tao. Once they were caught and killed in a fight, there was a possibility that they could absorb the fate energy of the unseen world. A temporary Tao protector was at least 1 or 2 realms higher than the person they killed. A cultivator with the highest cultivation level would secretly deal with all kinds of unexpected situations. Third, if they still suffered a big loss at a critical moment that involved the survival of the sect, they could no longer care about face. They should give money and treasures. Fourth, no matter how high the cultivation level of the cultivators in the mountains was, it did not matter if they provoked them. These people without any backing were walking treasures. Once they dared to cause trouble, it would be a waste not to kill them. At the end, Lu Baixiang sighed from the bottom of his heart. It's really a different world. Also, the disciples here are too particular. Lotus Blossom Paradise can't compare at all. Then he turned his head and smiled. For example, how you treat Pei Qian. Qin Pingan grunted. It's very difficult to take in a disciple. It's not like I have to teach them everything. Pei Qian, at first I was unwilling to teach. Later I had the idea but I didn't dare to teach. Now I don't know how to teach. Qin Pingan raised his head and looked at the night sky. Zhu Lian joked that Pei Qian was a stubborn fence-sitter. Actually, I don't think it's that bad. A child, a teenager, and an adult. I think there are roughly 3 stages. The grass is weak, but its roots must be firmly rooted. When the wind blows, the grass moves. Actually, this is nothing. The grass is swaying back and forth. Next is the green bamboo in the mountains. Some people hate it and threaten to cut down 10,000 bamboo poles, but there are also scholars who like bamboo very much. In this world, there's even a bamboo grotto heaven and a green immortal mountain which is very famous. After that, it's the tall and straight pine trees. In the past, there was a very, very powerful swordsman who traveled with me. Now that I think about it, the way he looked at me was the same as the way I looked at Pei Qian. We were both asking each other questions. It was a silent test. At that time, I had just started to practice boxing. Couldn't he teach me high-level sword arts? Couldn't he give me a mouthful of medicinal wine soaked in demon cores? Couldn't he teach me a high-quality physique tempering technique? Couldn't he give me artifacts and artifacts? Anything was fine. He could do it casually without batting an eye. But he didn't. What? I never thought about it before. Later I thought about it, but I didn't understand. It wasn't until I had Pei Qian by my side that I somewhat understood. Old Master Sheng said that the world we live in is always so complicated. As we walked, weeds grew and the temples were in ruins. As we walked, willows rustled and peach blossoms bloomed. As we walked, the mountains were barren and the rivers were unruly. The night was deep. As we walked, the jade palaces shone brightly. Qin Pingan drank the last mouthful of medicinal wine for the night. Instantly his face flushed red. The alcohol was really strong. Qin Pingan rarely talked about these things with outsiders. Today was an exception. Because Lu Baixiang, Qin Pingan felt that he was a kindred spirit. He couldn't explain it clearly. It was just a feeling. Just like Old Man Yao and Saint Ruan Cheng, they were unwilling to take Qin Pingan as a disciple. Qin Pingan put away the blade-strengthening gourd and rubbed his face with both hands. Then he exhaled. White mist filled the air. He said softly, "When I look at this world, I always want to see the good and the bad clearly. For some people and things that aren't so important, I try to see the good in them. It's not that others don't like me, Qin Pingan, and don't think highly of me, Qin Pingan. Even if there was a dispute, you must be wrong. In your lotus flower-blessed land, there's a martial arts master called Lu Zong, the sharpener. He said something very interesting. The road under our feet is so wide. There's nothing wrong with us going our own way. I think there's nothing wrong with this sentence. It's just that, how can there be no good and bad people in life? Besides the major right and wrong, it's a little vague. It said that human life is precious. This is considered a major right and wrong. For example, that Ascendant Realm cultivator, Du Mao, must have done a lot of bad things in his life. He must have done some good things. Even in Tong Yi sect, he's a well-deserved ancestor of revitalization. Countless disciples are willing to do the heroic deed that they think is sacrificing themselves for him. Lu Baixiang gently put his hands on his knees and said with a smile, "Do you think everyone is willing to be like you, looking for trouble? Going around in circles in your heart all day long, tangling with right and wrong? Why bother? Practicing martial arts, learning swordsmanship, and becoming an immortal, many people just want to be happy for themselves. Being chivalrous and righteous for the sake of friends, killing the whole family of people they don't know, and being regarded as a hero in Jianghu. In the days when I was proud of the kings and marquises, people in the martial arts world, whether they were righteous or evil, liked to have a nice name. I don't think there's anything strange about that. If they wanted a name, they should just call it the Devil Sect. Then they would do more righteous things than the righteous sections. By the way, Qin Pingan doesn't need to tell me. I know what the Devil Sect is like. After reading many history books, you will find that history goes in circles. The imperial court in Jianghu are all the same. They all draw circles. Occasionally, a moral saint or a martial arts genius will appear. Then they will go out a little and the circle will be bigger. The people behind them will continue to go in circles. Qin Pingan thought for a while and said, "Sometimes they will go in circles. There's no end." Lu Baixiang nodded and said, "Then it's a sign of chaos. People are like chickens and dogs and their lives are like grass." They were silent for a long time. Lu Baixiang asked, "By the way, I'm curious. Why are you so obsessed with reading and reasoning?" "Inferiority complex." "What do you mean?" "I want what I lack." Father and mother can leave. It's hard to be scolded or praised for living alone. I just hope that I do everything right and don't let the neighbors criticize me behind my back. After scolding me, they'll scold my father and mother. Or I'm so poor that I can't even make a sound. I'm afraid of being poor. That's why I like to listen to people's reasoning and I like money. I don't like to owe people money, but I also don't like people to owe me money. Lu Baixiang was silent for a long time before he said, "You're really honest." While the two were chatting, Julien moved a stool to read under the eaves. As the number one person in Lotus Flower blessed land in the past, he still had a discerning eye. Sui Yuyu stood at the door with his hands behind his back. After hearing Qin Pingan's words about owing people money, Sui Yuyu snorted and walked back to his room. Julien chuckled and continued to read. Lu Baixiang bid farewell and left. After he got up, he clasped his fist and said, "I've learned something." Qin Pingan waved his hand and said with a smile, "You can forget about it." He suddenly thought of something. Why don't I just treat a dead horse like a living one? Should he try teaching Pei Qian the 18 halts of sword chi tomorrow? But Qin Pingan was a little hesitant. After thinking carefully, he decided to take another look. In that unknown inn, the old man who claimed to be an otherworldly expert sat upright at the table after bathing and changing his clothes. He took out a large pile of scrolls. There were at least 23 of them. There were also large and small bowls with varying depths of water. There was also a large pile of other messy items. They were all objects that carried the supernatural power of the immortal sect on the mountain, Mirror Flower, Water Moon. If Qin Pingan was present, he would have discovered that on that snowy night, the little boy in green carefully brought out the bowl of water and then drooled while observing the fairy Sujia's immortal grace of riding on the sword. Presumably, if the little boy in green met this old man, he would probably cry and call him ancestor. In fact, the nickname that the little boy in green gave himself, Yu Jiang Langjun, was inspired by a senior. That senior's nickname was Jade Face Langjun, and the unknown guest on the mountain who called himself 1-Foot Spear were the top two in their mountain. They were definitely the kind of seniors who were of virtue and prestige. These two seniors were heroic. The first time they fought was to argue about who was the number one fairy of the Aquarius continent, Su Jia of the Xinjiang mountain and He Xiaoyang of the Shinho sect who rarely showed her face. The jade-faced Langjun called himself Su Jia, but he was full of immortal aura. He Xiaoyang was beautiful, but she lacked a bit of human aura and was not perfect. 1-Foot Spear angrily retorted, and then both sides began to throw small coins into the white bowl of water, just to say a sentence and refute the other party. After the small refinement, the snow money could also be thrown into various kinds of mirror flower, water moon artifacts, but there was insufficient spiritual energy and it could not transmit words. Then, it would become the spiritual energy of the mountains and rivers of the fairies. Don't underestimate the small amount of money spent. Many a little makes a mickle. Some small mountains, because the fairies were beautiful and good at winning over guests, caused the spiritual energy of the mountains and rivers to increase greatly. As for the small amount of money, it was enough to support the person who threw the money to say a sentence or two. 1-Foot Spear and the jade-faced Langjun, in that quarrel, each threw 70 to 80 small amount of money. That was 7 to 8 small amount of grain rain money each. They became famous in one battle. Countless fairies of small sects hoped that the two old immortals would grace our humble abode, and throw away a lot of money for them. 1-Foot Spear did not speak much and only threw money silently. On the other hand, the jade-faced Langjun was carefree and liked to speak loudly after throwing money. He liked the kind of fairy who acted coquettishly and flattered him passionately. The old man looked at the table for a long time and finally chose a picture scroll. After opening it and waiting for a moment, mist rose from the mountains and rivers and spread out. Soon, a simple and elegant house appeared. A young fairy walked out slowly with a pipa in her arms. Behind her, an old-fashioned maid silently followed and finally stood obediently in the corner. After the fairy played a piece of pipa, no one spoke in the house. This meant that there were still no guests who threw a small amount of money, or threw it and did not speak, but the possibility of the latter was extremely small. The fairy forced a smile and said some dry words. In the end, she was not a brothel girl in the secular world. Moreover, she had just been asked by her sect to do this kind of shady business, so her hands and feet were still tied. At this moment, someone suddenly asked with a smile, "Langjun, are you here?" Almost instantly, someone said coldly, "No." The fairy was pleasantly surprised. She quickly got up and bowed to the front. Greetings to the two immortal seniors, Little Ascension and Martial 10 Realms. This was the nickname of One-Foot Spear and Jade-Faced Langjun. The fairy calmed her excitement of catching two big fish and sat back in her original position. She was about to play a piece of pipa to reward the two rich people who were especially shocking when they threw money. From the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of the wooden maid. Her eyes were slightly cold, but she smiled and said, "Shirchio, why aren't you thanking the two old immortals?" The maidservant then performed a Buddhist salute. After the fairy finished playing a song, the old man in the inn threw in a small amount of money and asked, "Langjun, I've arrived at Old Dragon City. I'll look for you later. Let's have a few drinks." The young man's reply was quite concise. "Get lost." The old man threw in a small amount of money again. "Why are you like this? I'm the one who came to visit. You don't have to move. It won't take you a few days." The young man said, "I'm not free." The old man was anxious. There's always time for a meal?" The young man said, "No." The old man in the inn said angrily, "Martial 10 Realms. You're just a chi refinement warrior. Do you really think you're an expert of the Martial 10 Realms?" The young man said, "Aren't you also called Little Facian? Why don't you go to the sky to shit and pee? If you have the ability, I'll definitely open my mouth wide to receive it from the top of the mountain." The old man in the inn began to change his strategy. "Langjun, you're such a heroic man. Do you have the heart to let me come all the way here for nothing?" The young man was silent for a moment. The old man nervously waited for an answer. Finally, the young man said lightly, "Then get over here." The old man in the inn did not care about embarrassing himself in front of the fairy. He said happily, Thank you. Then it's a deal. When we arrive at the mountain gate of your gang, I'll give you a secret signal." The young man said, "Shut up." The old man was very happy. "Got it? When we meet later we'll have a good chat." If the disciples of the second largest immortal sect in the Tongya continent, Yugui sect, were here and saw the old sect master's shameless and flattering side, their eyes would probably pop out. They would probably throw them to the ground and not be able to pick them up. In a few days it would be New Year's Eve. That night after dinner, Pei Qian helped Zhu Lian clean up the table. After copying the book, she went to the shop in front of the inn to find Chen Pingan. Chen Pingan had already poured the pot of wine that Fan Junmao had bet into the blade-strengthening gourd. He could only drink 2 or 3 mouthfuls a day at most. If he drank more than that, it would be harmful to his body and mind. Everything in the world was like that. Too much was as bad as too little. There was only a difference between cherishing and coveting fortune. Chen Pingan had just finished drinking a mouthful of small refinement wine, and his face was slightly red. Pei Qian was at the other side of the counter, standing on his tiptoes. He had been quietly watching Chen Pingan drinking with his eyes wide open. Chen Pingan put down the blade-strengthening gourd and asked casually, "Do you miss the lotus flower-blessed land?" Pei Qian shook her head. Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "Don't you miss your parents?" Pei Qian hesitated for a moment and shook her head. She asked, "Are you angry?" Chen Pingan didn't give a yes or no answer. Instead he asked, "Why not?" Pei Qian looked calm. She curled her lips and said, "I just don't want to think about it." She saw that Chen Pingan didn't seem to be angry. The skinny little girl leaned on the counter and put the talisman on her forehead. She pressed it against her forehead and was silent for a long time before she slowly said, "My hometown met with a disaster. When we were fleeing, my mother starved to death on the road. It was my father who brought me to the outskirts of Nanyuan Kingdom's capital. Along the way, my mother was forced by my father to find another man in exchange for a few mouthfuls of food. At first, my mother was unwilling, but my father pulled her hair and beat her to death. At that time, I only knew how to cry and wanted to stop him, but I was also beaten to the ground by my father. He was a man, so he had a lot of strength. Later, my mother exchanged for food. My father ate the most, my mother less, and I ate the least. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and found my mother sneaking out. Behind my back, she was eating a black steamed bun alone. I went back to sleep. Later, my mother seemed to be sick. My father didn't care. At first, he carried me on his back. Later, he told me that my mother starved to death. After that, my father found someone, but he couldn't sell me, so he made me steal from other people. After being beaten a few times, he scolded me for being stupid. Just like that, we walked all the way until we reached the outskirts of the capital. My father's fortune was better. Outside the city, there was a rich person who opened a porridge shop. There were also big white steamed buns. My father ate very quickly or something like that. It seemed like he ate too much steamed buns and died. I just looked at him like that. I don't know why, but there was only one thought in my mind. I don't know if my father could catch up with my mother in the afterlife, and if he could be her companion. Chen Pingan leaned forward and reached out to touch the little girl's head. Go to bed early. Pei Qian smiled, sighed, and skipped to sleep. He even blindly yelled, I have a talisman? Demons and ghosts, leave quickly. Chen Pingan sat there alone. After that day, Chen Pingan became more and more strict with Pei Qian. He even sat beside Pei Qian every day and watched her copy word by word. 369. Resume updating. 13,000 words. When the Flying Swords number 1 and number 15 were about to finish the long dragon-slaying platform, it was already the 29th day of the 12th lunar month. Pei Qian, Wei Xian, and Sui Yuyu bought a lot of New Year goods for the dusty medicine shop. After 5 or 6 trips, Pei Qian begged Sui Yuyu to go with them. It was not without reason. As long as Sui Yuyu stood near the shops, Pei Qian and Wei Xian didn't even need to bargain with the shopkeeper. Every time they went out early and came back late, the old man would read a book under the old pagoda tree at the corner of the street. At first he was a little reserved, but later he would greet them. For the last 2 trips, Wei Xian didn't go with them. Sui Yuyu carried Qin Pingan's green bamboo box and returned to the alley with Pei Qian today. The old man greeted them again. Pei Qian answered sweetly, but Sui Yuyu didn't say anything. After walking into the alley, Pei Qian laughed and said that the old scholar who looked like a scholar really had a lot of books. He read until he was old, but he was a little old. Sui Yuyu pulled Pei Qian's ear and said with a smile, Did the old man promise to give you a thick red envelope? Pei Qian pretended to be stupid and said that it hurt. After crossing the threshold and entering the medicine shop, Qin Pingan was still sitting behind the counter. When Sui Yuyu let go of Pei Qian's ear, Pei Qian began to recite the time, place, which shop they went to, the original price, and what they bought at what price. Qin Pingan was calculating on the abacus. When Pei Qian's voice settled, the crisp and melodious sound of the beads on the abacus suddenly stopped. Qin Pingan gave Sui Yuyu a thumbs up. Just for the document, it is cheaper by about 100 taels of silver. Pei Qian helped Sui Yuyu lift the bamboo curtain. Sui Yuyu went to the back of the shop to unload the New Year goods. Pei Qian tiptoed back to the counter, stood on her tiptoes and put her chin on the table. She was full of smiles. Qin Pingan glanced at the bamboo curtain and secretly took out 7 or 8 copper coins. This is your bonus. Hurry up and keep it. If she sees it, both of us will be in trouble. Pei Qian carefully put away the small belongings and ran to the backyard. She hurriedly put them away and put them in her treasure grid. Qin Pingan reminded Pei Qian, remember to help unload the goods. Remember to say thank you for your hard work. Okay. Pei Qian agreed loudly. Looking at the swaying bamboo curtain, Qin Pingan smiled knowingly. New Year's Eve, New Year's Eve, the New Year's Eve, the New Year's Eve. The first few trips to buy New Year goods, Sui Yuyu was unwilling. Later Wei Xian was too lazy to go. On the contrary, Sui Yuyu became addicted. She dragged Pei Qian along and went shopping. At first, Julien talked to Pei Qian in private. He said that as long as Sui Yuyu was willing to go out, he would give her a set of the 4 treasures of the study and a set of New Year's money. Pei Qian said she would think about it. Then she went to find Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan felt that Sui Yuyu should walk around more. It was good to be exposed to the smoke and fire of the marketplace. So he asked Pei Qian to agree. Sui Yuyu couldn't stand Pei Qian buzzing around like a fly and disturbing her practice of the sword furnace stance. She could only go out with her and Wei Xian to relax. Later, Sui Yuyu took the green bamboo box in the corner of her and Pei Qian's room and dragged Pei Qian out to shop. Chen Pingan and Pei Qian secretly agreed that as long as Sui Yu bargained with the shopkeeper, Pei Qian would get a copper coin as a bonus. Chen Pingan turned to look outside the medicine shop. The light in the alleyway instantly darkened. The yin qi was eerie. The light seemed to carry weight, appearing somewhat heavy. A green robe descended from the sky. It was Fan Junmao. Chen Pingan went around the counter and crossed the threshold. Fan Junmao asked, "Have you thought it through?" Chen Pingan nodded. "I hope this year can end well." Fan Junmao reminded the yin spirit surnamed Zhao, who was surrounded by black smoke and drifting yin qi. "Don't do anything unnecessary. If you secretly spy on the movements above the sea of clouds, the one who will suffer will be Chen Pingan." The yin spirit nodded. If it borrowed the power of the medicine shop's formation and had the cultivation of the pure jade state, it could indeed observe the sea of clouds above Old Dragon City. However, the spiritual qi of the sea of clouds was pure and clean. The yin spirit and the formation were filthy and evil qi. If the two clashed, it could easily cause chaos in the sea of clouds. Chen Pingan, who was refining the natal item, would fail at the last step and damage the foundation of the Great Way. Fan Junmao reached out and pressed Chen Pingan down. He was about to ride the cloud above him. Chen Pingan suddenly asked, "It is recorded in the book that before immortals refine elixirs, after choosing an auspicious day and the shape of the mountains and rivers, shouldn't they fast, bathe, change clothes, kneel, hold the furnace, and pray to the four directions of heaven and earth?" Fan Junmao sneered. "I am above the sea of clouds. The mountain master is in the academy, the immortal is in the Taoist temple, and the arhat is in the temple. I am the saint of this small world in the sea of clouds. Who do I worship? Worship myself? If you, Chen Pingan, are willing to kneel and kowtow, causing me to take another sword strike and drop another realm, I don't care. The lost realm can be repaired. I'm afraid there won't be many chances for you to kowtow." Chen Pingan understood. It seemed that although Lu Yong of the Green Tiger Palace was an old nascent soul cultivator in Qingjing Mountain, he was still not a saint. He could not use the geographical advantage of the mountains and rivers at will. After being dragged into the sea of clouds by Fan Junmao, Chen Pingan stood still and gently stepped on the sea of clouds under his feet. It did not collapse and dissipate. It was no different from an ordinary mud road. It felt good to be able to stand on the blue waves when the yin spirit left its body and traveled to the water god temple. Fan Junmao flicked his sleeve, and a snow-white table condensed by the essence of clouds appeared in front of Chen Pingan out of thin air. The table was as smooth as a mirror. Auspicious clouds floated, and the air was ethereal. Chen Pingan controlled the flying sword 15 inches long. The white jade token hovered over the table and took out the items needed to refine the 5 elements of water one by one. His movements were slow. Other than the 5-colored golden stove that Lu Yong of the Green Tiger Palace sold to Chen Pingan for 50 grains of grain rain money, there were also the exotic minerals and earthly treasures that Fan Junmao exchanged for the golden elixir of the old nascent soul cultivator Jiao Longo for Chen Pingan. There were more than 40 kinds of exotic minerals and earthly treasures. There were 12 kinds of cinnabar alone. They were used to adjust the water, fire, neutralization and 5 elements at different times and under different temperatures. Chen Pingan was not in a hurry, which made Fan Junmao a little annoyed. Why was he dawdling? Fan Junmao slapped the old dragon rain pendant on the table. "You want to refine the water word seal. As the most important supplementary material, the quality of the water essence must be up to par. Otherwise it will drag you down. This old dragon pendant is the best water essence that I can find. It is about the same age as old Longqing. It has absorbed a lot of water essence from the sea of clouds. Don't talk to me about money. It is the same as the medicinal wine of the small refined old nascent soul cultivator Jiao Longo. It is my bet. If you want to talk about money, fine. I will sell this jade pendant to you cheaply. 30 grains of grain rain money." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "You are the one who has been talking to me about money, okay?" Fan Junmao's expression was weird. For the first time, he lacked confidence and said, "Do you really have no qualms about accepting such a precious old dragon rain pendant? This is an old item in the ancestral hall of the Fu family that has been worshipped for 1,000 years. It is very valuable. It is only 30 grains of grain rain money. It is also related to the quality of the natal item that you refine. You are not willing to pay?" Chen Pingan glanced at him. "This is only one of the sky-high compensations from the Fu family. You are just helping to resell it. You want to earn 30 grains of grain rain money? It seems that you are having a hard time in the new year. I guess that your fall in cultivation level is not as simple as falling from Yuanying back to Jindan. What? Is it the same as me being hurt by the sword-swallowing boat? Fan Jun Mao, the effect of swallowing the sea of clouds to heal your injuries should not be obvious. But to replenish the water essence that is lost to your Qi residence, it is very expensive, right? Fan Jun Mao said angrily, Qin Pingan, you are really not stupid. Qin Pingan finally took out the water word seal and placed it gently on the table. Fan Jun Mao looked deeply at the small private seal. You really want to refine this item? In the future, our natal items will be connected. If you use it to seal the water essence of the river again, it will hurt your own cultivation. Of course, if you don't do such a stupid thing and use this seal as the natal item of water of the 5 elements, it will be of great benefit to you when you open up the mansion. Ordinary people can dig a well, but at most it will be a pond. But you have a chance to open up a small lake. You can indeed easily solve the dangerous situation of the spiritual aura pouring into your body, plundering your acupoints, and eroding your pure vital energy. Qin Pingan nodded and said, It is this water word seal. Qin Pingan stretched out his finger and gently rubbed the old dragon rain pendant. He felt that it was a little familiar. He frowned and looked up at Fan Jun Mao. This is the water essence? The essence of the water essence that condenses the water essence of the world? Fan Jun Mao's eyes were cold. He sneered, Why, are you afraid that I will trick you? Qin Pingan shook his head. He hesitated for a moment and took out the jade scroll given to him by the goddess of the buried river. He held it in his hand. This item is also the water essence. When this item was taken out, the sea of clouds and the surroundings seemed to have a spirit. They all jumped up and down like a group of children eyeing candies. Fan Jun Mao's expression became serious. He did not give an answer. Instead he asked, Where did you get it? Qin Pingan smiled. That's it. It seems to be even better than the old dragon rain pendant in the Fu family's ancestral hall. Fan Jun Mao's eyes became hot again. This was the second time. The first time was when she heard that Qin Pingan had the 12th level demon Jindan. She lingered in front of the medicine shop. But this time Fan Jun Mao quickly suppressed the desire in her heart. She didn't dare to force a deal. She moved closer and carefully looked at the jade scroll whose seal characters were mostly covered by Qin Pingan. It was sparkling and translucent, flowing with brilliance. She just needed to look at it. Qin Pingan did not know what it was, but she did. It must be the water essence condensed from a big water vein in the Great Blasphemy Dragon Palace. It was a lucky item from the ancient ruins. Compared to the old dragon rain pendant that the old ancestor of the Fu family had hung for many years, the difference was like heaven and earth. There was a huge gap between an innate spiritual treasure and an acquired item. The reason why Fan Jun Mao was so envious was that if she refined this jade scroll, it would make up for the loss of the Sea of Clouds and help her to return to the nascent soul stage. She would have a surplus and then easily enter the upper 5 states. It would only take 30 to 40 years. After that, Fan Jun Mao would have to spend time and effort to find opportunities in various broken grotto heavens and secret realms. It would just be revisiting old places. It was a world of difference compared to the murderous aura of an ordinary Qi cultivator. Qin Pingan asked, Can I use this item as the water essence to refine my natal water character seal? Fan Jun Mao gritted her teeth and said, Yes. Very good. You really step on dog shit every day. Such a rare item can be found in 1,000 years. You can even get it. Do you know that such an innate spiritual treasure can only be found by chance? I'm afraid that in those unknown grotto heavens where there are no saints squatting in the toilet, a large group of Jindan and nascent soul stage earth immortals will fight for it. Maybe some people will die in it. It is very likely that they will have to compete with the cultivators of the unpolished jade stage for the opportunity of the great Tao. Qin Pingan interrupted Fan Jun Mao's complaints, and said with a smile, Everyone has their own fate. If I was born and raised in the old dragon city, I might not have the chance to come to the Sea of Clouds for a while even if I stayed for 1,000 years. But you, Fan Jun Mao, can't get this jade scroll even if you go to the water god temple for 10,000 years. Fan Jun Mao nodded, That's right. Let's cut the crap and start refining. Fan Jun Mao put away the Sea of Clouds array and shrank the ground into inches. She came to Qin Pingan's side and said, You don't look like the Rain Master. In terms of character you are far inferior to that sissy. Then, how did you make those little people of the Water Fortune sect willingly submit to you? Qin Pingan ignored the mysterious Fan Jun Mao and put away all the items. He stood up and asked with a smile, How do I go back? Fan Junmao snapped her fingers and the sea of clouds under Qin Pingan's feet slowly dispersed. A cloud ladder appeared and went straight to the dusty medicine shop in Old Dragon City. However, there were waves of glazed lights around the cloud ladder. Qin Pingan knew that this was the unique light emitted by the surging of the two flowing waters of heaven and earth. Therefore, if he walked down the cloud ladder, no one in Old Dragon City would be able to see him unless they were cultivators of the upper 5 realms. Qin Pingan thanked Fan Junmao and walked down the cloud ladder alone. On the way down the mountain, he looked down and admired the magnificent scenery of Old Dragon City. Qin Pingan thought that he could engrave this scene on a bamboo slip and tell her about it in the future. On the morning of the eve of the new year, the celebration of the ordinary people in Old Dragon City was not affected by the stagnant atmosphere of the big clans. The Fu family had already removed the city restrictions. The streets and alleys were very lively. At the dusty medicine shop, the moment Qin Pingan's feet landed on the alley, the cloud ladder disappeared. Yin Shinzhao was relieved and asked, "Have you finished refining your natal item?" Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled, "I only refined one water essence item. But the next time I refine my natal item, the success rate will be much higher." Yin Shin nodded, "Very good." Qin Pingan returned to the counter of the medicine shop. He had already put away the golden jade token last night. Otherwise, if it was still hanging on his waist, it would mean that the sea of clouds and water essence would be eaten away. Fan Junmao would definitely fight with him. Zheng Dafeng had already started to move around. Early in the morning, she asked Pei Qian to help her move a small stool and went under the locust tree to look for her friend. As expected, she met the rich old man early in the morning. The rich old man was reading a book. Zhu Lian even woke up early in the morning to accompany the old man who had worked hard on the book. After Zheng Dafeng sat down, she wanted Pei Qian to go back to the medicine shop. Of course, Pei Qian refused. She reached out her hand and asked for the promised reward. 1 copper coin, 1 copper coin, 1 copper coin. Even if Qin Pingan knew about it, he would not scold her. Therefore, Pei Qian was very confident. Zheng Dafeng had a headache and said that he would just give her an extra copper coin for the New Year's money. Pei Qian said that she did not like people to owe her money. However, what puzzled them the most was that apart from the first appearance of the sect master, who was either assassinating or stopping the sword cultivator, the ancestor of resurgence, Du Mao, who was higher than the sky in the hearts of all the cultivators of the Tongyi sect, did not show up from the beginning to the end. He completely ignored the sword cultivator's provocation. Even when the sect was in danger and its foundation was shaken, the ancestor who suppressed the Qi cultivators of the entire continent still did not make any move. However, most of the Qi cultivators of the Tongyi continent were still willing to believe that the ancestor would not make a move. Otherwise, the sword cultivator would not be able to be arrogant for more than a few days. Almost all the mountains, dynasties, and magnates of the Tongyi continent were paying attention to the Tongyi sect. After Jiang Shangzhen of the Jade Medallion sect swaggered over to join in the fun, more and more Earth Immortal cultivators from all over the world who tried their best to conceal their auras came over to watch from afar. Using the mountain and river observation technique, they each brought out their special abilities to observe the flow of feng shui, the depth of fate, the thickness of fortune, and various other clues of the Tongyi sect. In the beginning, no one dared to believe that a single sword cultivator could affect the flow of spiritual energy of a colossus like the Tongyi sect. When two armies were fighting on the battlefield under the mountain, if one side was injured or killed to this extent, it would mean that the other side was defeated. That sword cultivator did not kill anyone. Other than breaking the barrier and besieging the enemy, the sword cultivator almost did not even use his sword. However, even the most clumsy Earth Immortals from other sects could see that the spirit of the disciples of the Tongyi sect was going downhill. For 1,000 years, whether the disciples of the Tongyi sect were cultivating on the mountain or going down the mountain to gain experience, whether they bullied others or faced difficulties head-on, they all had a valiant spirit that supported their Taoist heart. Therefore, compared to other Qi refinement warriors who climbed the mountain, the disciples of the Tongyi sect were the most spirited and vigorous. When there was a conflict and the Qi refinement warriors of a higher realm had the upper hand, as long as they reported the name of the Tongyi sect, they could freely insult the Qi refinement warriors of other sections. When they encountered or heard that their fellow disciples were bullied, they did not say anything and rushed over 1,000 miles on their swords or the wind, beheading the enemy with a single strike. In some life-and-death situations, the disciples of the Tongyi sect with a strong temperament were willing to die together with the enemy cultivators with a smile. There were countless people in history who were willing to die with a smile. If the sword cultivator broke into the mountain on the first day, the Zhongxing ancestor Du Mao or the disciples who were willing to die for the Tongyi sect under the sect master's command, then at least half of the Qi refinement warriors of other sects within 1,000 miles would have the first thought of facing death with equanimity. They came in an endless stream and did not hesitate to die like moths to a flame. Once those impassioned Qi refinement warriors were like that, they would probably think that their deaths were worthwhile and that the sword cultivator was in the wrong. However, it was now the eve of the new year. Deep in everyone's heart, apart from hoping that the Zhongxing ancestor of the Ascendant Realm could show up and kill the enemy, they were more uncertain. What exactly did their sect do outside to provoke this aggressive sword cultivator who did not kill indiscriminately and forced the Zhongxing ancestor to close the door in the small cave of the Wudong tree? When did the Tongyi sect fall to such a state? Could it be that they could not be unreasonable in their own territory? They could not even suppress others with the strength that they were best at? In fact, Jiang Shangzhen had not completely left. On a mountain 1,000 miles away, he was drinking wine with an old nascent soul realm sword cultivator who had a good relationship with him. The latter shook his head and smiled. The backbone of the Tongyi sect has collapsed. Jiang Shangzhen did not seem to be the master of the Jiang family of the Jade Gui sect, but the consecrator of the Tongyi sect. He chuckled and said, "Don't say that. Du Mao is an Ascendant Realm cultivator after all. As long as we deal with this great sword immortal, we still have a chance of survival. Maybe we can benefit from this disaster and our reputation will soar." Jiang Shangzhen suddenly laughed. "Deal with my ass. Du Mao the old turtle is really unlucky. Our old master sent me a message saying that Du Mao is in luck. His natal immortal weapon, the sword-swallowing boat, seems to have been destroyed in the old dragon city, and his yang spirit body has also become an immortal's remains in someone else's bag. Now, his realm is not so stable in the immortal realm. I've made a lot of money this time." The old master is very happy and said that in the next 500 years, the sect's commission for the blessed land of the Cloud Cave will be reduced by another 10%. "Oh hey, great sword immortal left and right, little sword immortal Chin, it's a good thing that you two are not here. Otherwise I, Jiang Shangzhen, would immediately kneel down and kowtow to you two great benefactors 500 times to express my gratitude." "Thank you so much." Jiang Shangzhen laughed wildly as he punched the stone table, taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. In fact, at his realm, it was not common to see people gloating. The old nascent soul stage sword cultivator with white hair and a ruddy complexion asked softly, "Dare I ask Mr. Jiang, how should the Tongya sect deal with this?" Jiang Shangzhen reached out to wipe the tears from the corners of his eyes and waved his hand saying, "Let me laugh for a while more. I can't stop." The old sword cultivator smiled helplessly. He, Jiang Shangzhen, and Lu Fang were old friends who had known each other for a long time at the foot of the mountain. Jiang Shangzhen restrained his laughter with great difficulty. "What else can we do? Du Mao can only stake everything on this one throw. Logically, he definitely can't win against that sword immortal. Fight? How can he fight with those few pure Jade Realm cultivators? To put it bluntly, as long as left and right were determined to fight the Tongya sect to the end, the Tongya sect would be finished in about a year, let alone 30 to 40% of the spiritual Qi turbulence. In the past, even if there was no Ascendant Realm cultivator like Du Mao on a mountain, the Confucian Academy would have appeared after such a big disturbance. But this time, the Academy obviously would not come out to uphold justice. What does this mean? The Tongya sect was in the wrong first, and even if left and right broke into the territory of the Tongya sect, they never crossed the line in the slightest and acted on the basis of reason. This made the Tongya sect's academy and even a certain Central Earth Academy helpless. The old sword cultivator nodded and said, "The knife of a scholar to kill is not stained with blood. Nothing could be better than this." Jiang Shangzhen turned his head and looked towards the direction of the Tongya sect in the north. Even thousands of miles away, he could faintly see the signs of turbidity in the mountains and rivers beginning to appear. Apart from wanting to see the world in chaos, Jiang Shangzhen was also horrified and introspective, as well as a trace of inevitable sadness. His expression was indifferent as he said, "Du Mao has no other choice but to drain all the spiritual qi of the Wudong Grotto heaven in one go to help himself forcibly ascend. As long as he succeeds in ascending no matter what, he will have gained some merit. According to the rules set by the Sage of Rites, the Confucian Academy will have to help look after the Tongya sect for a long time. At that time, unless he is willing to challenge the entire Confucian orthodoxy, he will have no choice but to stop while he is ahead." Jiang Shangzhen put his palms together and raised them high above his head. He closed his eyes and prayed, "Sword Immortal Master Zhuo, please continue to work hard. You must kill that old turtle Do. The old nascent soul cultivator stroked his beard and smiled. Du Mao, aren't you the most hostile sword cultivators in the world? Do you like to humiliate those sword cultivators who unfortunately fall into your hands? What about now? If you have the ability, why don't you try to poke your head out of your turtle shell? On this day in the twilight of New Year's Eve, the Wutong Grotto heaven that had been controlled by the Tongya sect for countless years first revealed a part of its true form on the summit of the ancestral Master Mountain. It was a magnificent scene like a mirage. Then, it drifted erratically and finally shattered. The fragments of the grotto heaven turned into comets and scattered all over the vast world. Some disappeared directly, while others broke through the void and disappeared without a trace. Then, on the summit of the mountain, Du Mao's physical body gradually disappeared with the wind. Only the Yin spirit had transformed into a golden body. After absorbing most of the spiritual energy in the small cave of the Wudong tree, it became extremely majestic. This golden body was thousands of feet tall. It stood on the peak of the Master's Mountain. Although it was still in the category of the golden body of a Qi cultivator, its body was already glowing with a colorful glaze and was changing unpredictably. The golden body stretched out its arms and spread its fingers over its head. Then it suddenly pulled outwards. It was as if it was tearing apart a part of the vast sky. At the place where the sky was torn apart, thunder rumbled and purple lightning surged. Various figures as huge as mountains flashed and disappeared, like the skeletons of flood dragons dragging their tails as fast as lightning. There was a huge golden corpse sitting cross-legged, and a huge scarlet claw trying to tear the sky bigger. Without exception, all of them were terrifying phenomena that could not be seen in the vast world. The sword cultivator on the left and right, with one hand behind his back and the other holding a sword in front of him, slowly rose into the sky. Compared to Du Mao, who gave up his physical body and used his Yin spirit to devour the almost endless spiritual energy of the grotto heaven to create this five-colored glazed dharma of ascension, the man and the sword on the left and right were as small as a mustard seed. The sword slowly swept across the left and right. That was all. The left and right had always believed that the peak of swordsmanship in the world was only in two swords. One of the swords was the most proud sword of the scholar in the central region, which split the Yellow River Grotto heaven. The other sword had always been kept in his scabbard. It was this time. A moment later. The huge glazed dharma of ascension that had risen thousands of feet above the ground. In the mountainside of the huge mountain-like dharma of ascension, an extremely thin and imperceptible snow-white thread appeared. It was as thin as the ordinary hair of a woman in the human world. When it was getting closer and closer to the sky, the five-colored glazed body was broken into two parts. The upper half of the body still rose up in grief and indignation, reaching out to grab the roll of the gap in the sky, wanting to climb out. The lower half of the body shattered with a bang, and the spiritual energy returned to the world. There were also more than 10 pieces of glaze left behind by the remains of many Ascension Realm cultivators. They sputtered in all directions and became an opportunity for others on the path of cultivation. The left and right had already sheathed their swords. The glazed deity with the upper half of the body returned to the vast world in disappointment. Like a dazzling meteor, it dissipated in mid-air. The left and right looked up at the sky that had not yet closed. The left and right retracted his gaze and turned into a rainbow to the vast sea between the Tongya continent and the Aquarius continent. Not long after he went out to sea, the left and right stopped. The old scholar asked, "Why didn't you ascend and leave?" The left and right were silent. The two of them were only 4 or 5 steps apart. The old scholar reached out and pointed to the gap in the sky that Du Mao had forcibly torn open by his ascension. He said angrily, "Why didn't you take the opportunity to leave this world? Do you really want to verify that bastard's words? Do you really want to die left and right?" The left and right lowered their heads. Only this time the old scholar did not jump up and slap him. He said dejectedly, "Go, I know you have always wanted to go to the inverted mountain, to the great wall of sword Qi. Go, if the sky wants to rain, if the mother wants to get married, if I want to hurt the teacher's heart, it can't be stopped." The left and right bowed and said, "Disciple left and right, goodbye teacher." The old scholar waved his hand, speechless. The left and right turned back as if he was reluctant to part. He did not turn into a rainbow and left, but walked step by step. The left and right said, "The little brother that teacher took in is not bad." The old scholar said unhappily, "Get lost, get lost." The old scholar also turned back. Teacher and disciple, the two of them stood back to back, one standing in the same place while the other went off into the distance. The old scholar suddenly scratched his head, as if he had remembered many things in the past. At that time he was still a poor scholar and did not have a good reputation, so he took in his first disciple, Cui. He was the child of a rich family. He was a poor elementary scholar, so he had no money. His second and third disciples were not so rich. At that time the three disciples got along well, and he was the most comfortable as a teacher. Later on they grew up one by one. The old scholar turned his back to the disciple who had never been carefree in his life. He suddenly smiled and said, "When you go to the Great Wall of Sword Chi, you must be carefree." After a short pause the old man said softly, "The left and right, actually you are good at swordsmanship, but you are even better at studying." The sword cultivator strode away, leaving behind one last sentence in this chaotic world that he disliked very much. "It is the teacher who taught me well." She hoped that Xiaobai could become better at chess and strive to become the 100th player in the world. She hoped that the elder sister on the right would become younger and not have wrinkles for the rest of her life. She hoped that Julien could make better food this year. She hoped that Grandpa Inga Zhao's realm would soar, and he would bring her to play in the sky in the future. She hoped that Jing Dafeng's shop would prosper. Pei Qian hoped that Qin Pingan's money would come rolling in the new year. She could not stop it. She could not even stuff all the gold, silver and treasures into it. It was obvious that she did not want to be a money loser in the new year. It was unknown if Pei Qian's luck had changed. She had changed from a little crow's mouth that even Julien was afraid of, to a mouth of gold and jade that was effective on the day. On the first day of the first lunar month, according to the customs of the Baoping continent, one would not welcome guests, travel far, or work. They only cared about eating, drinking and playing. However, Fan Junmao still came to Dusty Medicine Shop in the morning. Other than asking Qin Pingan when he would go to Yunhai to refine his natal item, he brought 3 bags of gold fine copper coins for Qin Pingan. There were 3 bags of gold fine copper coins, one for victory, one for offering and one for welcoming spring. There were more than 30 coins in total. They were all from the Song clan's emperor's own pocket. He also promised that there would be more in the future. As the Dali cavalry went south, they could even break the golden bodies of some mountain gods who did not know what was good for them, not to mention the forbidden temples of various countries. The fragments could be used to make gold fine copper coins. Qin Pingan looked at Jing Dafeng. The latter was also confused. It's similar to Liju Grotto Heaven's natal porcelain. Aren't the gold fine copper coins no longer made? Fan Junmao sneered. So this is where the Song clan's sincerity lies. Otherwise, how can they appear to be generous? Jing Dafeng thought for a while. Unless the old man is pressuring the Song clan's emperor, the Dali dynasty would not cut their flesh like this. These fragments of the golden bodies are kept and used to paint the golden bodies of the other 3 mountain gods in the future. It's more cost-effective. Qin Pingan nodded in agreement. Jing Dafeng was a little confused. It doesn't seem like the old man's style. Fan Junmao said in annoyance. Previously, there was a cross-continent ferry that was heading south from the North Continent. Originally, it would not stop at the Dragon Spring Ferry. In the end, a man fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Now, there are so many powerhouses in the West Mountains. They are building mansions. There are so many people. This news has already spread to the north of the Aquarius continent. Everyone knows that other than Song Jianqiang, the Aquarius continent also has a legendary martial artist of the 10th level. Jing Dafeng wiped his face and said, "There's no doubt about it. It's just that we don't know when he will reach our old Dragon City." Fan Junmao had an idea. According to the Dragon Spring Ferry's journey, if he is willing to spend money, he should reach Old Dragon City in the next few days. Jing Dafeng counted with his fingers and laughed. From the North Continent to the Dali dynasty in the north of the Aquarius continent, and then to the southernmost here. It's quite a rush. But I think the old man stopped him. Jing Dafeng asked softly, "What about the Tongyi sect?" Fan Junmao sneered. Those trashy Earth immortals in Old Dragon City, how would they dare to cross the sea to Tongyi continent to scout for information? Originally, the Aquarius continent is inferior. Tongyi sect is also the most domineering mountain in Tongyi continent. No one wants to provoke them. Some of the inside stories, at most only the Fu clan knows a little. The other clans regarding the movements of the Tongyi sect are like blind people. However, I think there is a big problem at the Tongyi sect. Otherwise, the Fu clan would not take out 3 bags of gold essence copper coins in the Dali dynasty. Other than the old dragon cloth rain pendant, Fu Qi also took out something that I did not expect. He wanted me to pass it to Qin Pingan. But Fu Qi also said that he still needs to discuss this matter with the Fu clan's ancestral hall. but he will try to pass the agenda. When will Qin Pingan leave Old Dragon City and arrive? Why don't the two of you guess? Qin Pingan quickly called Pei Qian, who was in the courtyard, to his side. He roughly explained the situation of the Fu clan and then said earnestly, "You guess. Guess if the item is good." Pei Qian thought carefully and said timidly, "Could it be a half-immortal weapon?" Fan Junmao was speechless. Qin Pingan and Zheng Dafeng looked at each other and laughed. On the 5th day of the first lunar month. Other than the old man who stayed in the dusty medicine shop and ate melon seeds and chatted, Pei Qian accompanied him and talked like a chicken and a duck. One old and one young each bragged. Today the medicine shop had another customer. A short and strong man walked into the alley. The old man sitting on the bench could not help but take a few more glances. Indeed, the man in front of him was much rarer than the jade unpolished realm cultivators on the mountain. Although the four people in the painting did not see this person with their own eyes, they were almost scared at the same time. It was a kind of feeling between pure martial artists. In the backyard, Wei Xian, Zhu Lian and the other three people, when the man walked slowly to the medicine shop, they saw a huge dragon forcibly squeezing into a stream ditch. There was actually such a martial artist in the world? After seeing that Qin Pingan and Zheng Dafeng were not nervous, the four people in the painting finally relaxed. Wei Xian rubbed his chin with his palm and Zhu Lian's eyes were burning. Lu Baixiang and Sui Yuyu stopped playing chess. Sui Yuyu's finger gently tapped an idle chess piece in front of him. Qin Pingan and Zheng Dafeng walked to the front of the shop together. Zheng Dafeng bent over and looked left and right. The first thing he said was, "Why didn't sister-in-law come?" The man looked at Zheng Dafeng. There was not much expression on his wooden face. "If master did not ask me to wait, I would have been at the top of the Tongyi sect's mountain." Zheng Dafeng scratched his head and did not speak. Then the man looked at Qin Pingan and cupped his fists. "Qin Pingan, on that long trip, Li Huai has become much more sensible. Moreover, it is not something that can be learned from books. I Lier have to thank you. Back then Mr. Qi taught Li Huai well. Now that Mr. Qi has left, you have taught him well." 371. After Li Er arrived at Old Dragon City, the situation in Old Dragon City became clear. Although this 10th realm martial artist only showed his face in the dusty medicine shop, it could be said that he had decided everything. Maybe the four great families, including the Sun family, still did not know, but the development of the situation was just following the prescribed order. The abacuses and account books in Old Dragon City would continue to move north, getting closer and closer to the Song clan's cavalry that was already stationed in the middle of the Aquarius continent. Regarding this, the Fu family, the Fan family and the Dusty Medicine Shop were the first three to know the answer. On the day that Li Er left, the Fan family swaggered over to pay a New Year's visit. They were all Qin Pingan's acquaintances. Fan Junmao and Fan Er were not mentioned. There was also Osmanthus Island's Aunt Gui and her only direct disciple, Jin Su, who served Qin Pingan when he went to the Inverted Mountain. Lastly, the old Jindan sword cultivator, Ma Ji, who fed Qin Pingan his sword for a period of time. Aunt Gui almost never went ashore. Osmanthus Island's trip to Old Dragon City and the Inverted Mountain twice a year, but even many old people in the Fan family's ancestral hall had never seen her in their entire lives. In Julien's eyes, the foreign old man who was very knowledgeable, originally thought that today would be another boring day, and he would not even see the woman surnamed Sui. He did not expect to see so many women at once. The old man who sat in front of the medicine shop and ate melon seeds almost said that he was the shop assistant of the dusty medicine shop. He was very busy and attentive. After crossing the door of the medicine shop, Aunt Gui looked at the strange old man, and the old man happened to look at her. Aunt Gui suppressed the doubts in her heart and smiled slightly. The old man thought that although this lady had an ordinary appearance, she had a gentle temperament. She was the first choice of an ordinary man to marry and bring home a wife and children. No wonder Jiang Shangzhen's eldest son, who only cared about giving birth, wanted to use the name of his sect to pressure her, hoping to buy Osmanthus Island's ferry route from the Fan family. Aunt Gui could not see the depth of the old man's background, but she vaguely felt that the old man's body was clean, his chi was light, and his spirit was full. If he was temporarily an earth immortal, he would definitely have the talent of the upper five realms in the future. After all, there were differences among the earth immortals. Qin Pingan jogged out to welcome Aunt Gui. Towards this senior, Qin Pingan had always been grateful. It had nothing to do with Aunt Gui's status or cultivation. Back then, when he took Osmanthus Island to the Inverted Mountain, he passed by Jiao Long Gully and encountered a great calamity. Qin Pingan entered a state of emptiness for a moment, as if he was a Buddhist. Chen Pingan was caught off guard and felt that the world was full of evil intentions. After that, he was depressed for a period of time in the small courtyard. After that, when he thought of Osmanthus Island, there were only two sources of warmth. One was the painter from the Fan family who helped Chen Pingan draw 3 paintings, and the other was Aunt Gue, who had seen all kinds of things in the world and always had a peaceful state of mind. Fan Air pretended to go to Zheng Dafeng's residence, only to find that the exquisite portrait wasn't hanging on the wall. Chen Pingan and Aunt Gue were chatting in the hall outside. Inside the room, Zheng Dafeng coughed and said without batting an eyelid, "Conserve your energy and cultivate your character. In the future, don't do such immoral things." At first, Fan Air thought it sounded like Sir Fan's tone, but the more he listened, the more he felt it wasn't right. The sachet itself exuded wisps of snow-white spiritual energy, and it also exuded bits and pieces of tender green radiance, fragrant and pleasant. Chen Pingan roughly guessed that it was the natal osmanthus leaf of the ancestral osmanthus tree on Osmanthus Island, so he didn't dare to accept it. Pei Qian's observation skills weren't bad, and when he saw that Chen Pingan wasn't willing to accept this New Year's money, he could only laugh foolishly and shake his head. Madame Gue insisted on giving a meeting gift to Pei Qian, and Chen Pingan couldn't dissuade her, so he could only let Pei Qian accept it. Naturally, he would keep it for him. Pei Qian didn't need Chen Pingan to say anything. He respectfully accepted the sachet with both hands and bowed to express his thanks. He even started to say some pleasing words, such as wishing Madame Gue good fortune, good health, and eternal youth. Madame Gue was quite pleased when she heard it, and she rubbed Pei Qian's head, saying that his master Chen Pingan already had a house on Osmanthus Island under his name, and there was also a small house on the ferry called Toad Hall, so he might as well give it to him. Pei Qian's eyes widened. He was really shocked. What, all the madams in the world were so generous when giving gifts? Giving a house as soon as they met? Could it be that all the women in the world became more generous when they got older? Chen Pingan smiled bitterly. "Aunt Gue, you really can't accept this house, you can't." Madame Gue stared at him. "What does me giving Pei Qian a house have to do with you?" Chen Pingan coughed. "Pei Qian?" Pei Qian immediately straightened his back and said in a childish voice, "A master for a day is a father for life. I don't dare to go against my master's orders, or else I would be unfilial." Madame Gue felt that it was interesting and she glanced at Chen Pingan, smiled and asked, "You taught her?" Chen Pingan was ashamed. "I probably taught her to read and copy every day, so she taught herself from the books, right?" Pei Qian flattered, "It's master who taught her well." Chen Pingan smiled and knocked Pei Qian's head. Pei Qian hugged his head, feeling wronged and confused. After sending Madame Gue and her group off, Chen Pingan and the old Oris core sword cultivator, Ma Ji, walked side by side on their last journey. Chen Pingan asked the Fan family for some advice on sword nurturing and sword refining techniques, and Ma Ji naturally answered honestly. 9th day of the first month. Old Dragon City had a custom, which was called the birth of the Heavenly Duke. Every family had to prepare candles and vegetarian dishes, and pray to the heavens in the courtyards and alleys. However, there were no people from Old Dragon City in the dusty medicine shop, but Zheng Dafeng was even more particular than the people of Old Dragon City. He was a man who did not care much about the new year, but he personally prepared candles and fruits as well as vegetarian dishes, and set up 3 incense tables in the courtyard. Finally, he lit 3 incense sticks and bowed 3 times and 9 times. Such a ceremony was smaller than when the monarch of a dynasty worshipped the heavens, but it was much bigger than when the people worshipped the heavens. The Yin spirit of the Zhao family was even more respectful. It did not burn any incense, but it was meticulous in kneeling and bowing. Pei Qian squatted under the eaves and watched with great interest, but Chen Pingan did not look much. In fact, this was already related to the secret of Zheng Dafeng and the Yin spirit, but Zheng Dafeng did not hide it, so Chen Pingan pretended that he did not see it. He went to the counter and continued to be the temporary shopkeeper and accountant. Chen Pingan was ready to go to the Sea of Clouds to officially refine the water seal. As for which half-immortal weapon Fu Li would take out, it was worth looking forward to. After all, this time it was Du Mao and the Tong Yi sect who implicated Emperor Dali. The latter was ambitious to go north of Old Dragon City, so he would not take the initiative to provoke Chen Pingan and Zheng Dafeng. It was just that the Dali dynasty obviously underestimated the cost of an ascendant cultivator and the reward that he needed to pay to leave the mountain illegally. Therefore, no matter how much gold and copper coins Emperor Dali gave, Chen Pingan would only take too little. The bag of gold and copper coins that Zheng Dafeng gave at the beginning had all been eaten by the golden Li robe. The golden dragon embroidered in the middle of the robe and the pearl, of unknown material contained more and more Reiki. Not only was it repaired but the quality of the robe was also improved. According to the Yin spirit of the Zhao family, as long as it kept eating the gold and copper coins, this goldenly robe would definitely become a half-immortal weapon robe. Qin Pingan was not very happy. On one hand he felt sorry for the hard-earned gold and copper coins. On the other hand, Zheng Dafeng had already said that once a martial artist entered the three realms of spirit refining, golden body, long travel, and the top of the mountain, the worldly possessions of the immortals on the mountain would become more and more useless and even become a burden. On the 10th day of the first lunar month, in Old Dragon City, there was also a local folk named Immovable Rock, and the story of a mouse marrying a girl. Although Pei Qian was very afraid of ghosts, she liked to listen to these stories the most. Pei Qian had learned to copy books early every day and no longer dawdled until bedtime. This probably had something to do with Qin Pingan watching her copy books every day. Today, when she was taking a break while copying books, Pei Qian suddenly asked Qin Pingan a question. In the book, it was advised not to eat the march fish and advised not to hit the three-spring bird. Then would it be impossible to fish in the spring? Qin Pingan did not give an answer at that time. He smiled and let Pei Qian finish copying the book first. When Pei Qian finished writing the last word, Qin Pingan, who had been silently thinking for a long time, told Pei Qian that this was a very good sentence to persuade people to do good. However, when a person still needed to work hard to survive, he could not care about this and should not care about this. However, when a person did not have to worry about food and clothing and believed in Buddha, with this kind of compassionate heart, he could do it. However, if you saw other people catching fish and birds to fill their stomachs when they were hungry in the spring, it would be wrong to go and tell them about this principle. If you did not even have compassion for people, how could you have compassion for the evils of the world? Therefore, in the end, the principle was still the same but the priority was different. Pei Qian nodded and said that she understood. In terms of looks, Huang Ting, who returned to the world with the appearance of a banished immortal from the Lotus Blossom-blessed land, was more outstanding than Sui Yuyu, Fan Junmao and Jin Su. Qin Pingan asked Huang Ting about her future plans. She said that she originally wanted to travel to the central divine continent, but the old heaven lord did not agree. He said that if she dared to go, he would dare to hang himself. She only needed to choose between the Aquarius continent and the North continent. Huang Ting did not mince her words. She told Qin Pingan that she felt that the Aquarius continent was too small. The North continent was filled with sword cultivators. She could go there to sharpen her sword. She might be able to reach the jade unpolished realm. She could not let a sword cultivator from a small place like the Aquarius continent embarrass all the sword cultivators of the Tongyi continent. Huang Ting was swift and decisive. After finishing the discussion, she prepared to fly on her sword to the north. However, when Huang Ting accidentally saw Pei Qian practicing her peerless swordsmanship in the courtyard, he thought about how he still owed Qin Pingan and couldn't help but feel unhappy. After learning that Pei Qian was Qin Pingan's first disciple, he asked the little girl if she wanted to learn the fastest swordsmanship and saber techniques in Tong Yezhou. Pei Qian asked if it hurt. Huang Ting laughed and said it did not hurt. Pei Qian turned to look at Qin Pingan. The latter smiled and nodded. Huang Ting stayed for one more day and taught Pei Qian a set of sword technique and saber technique. White ape back sword technique, white ape dragging saber technique. Before he left, Huang Ting patted Pei Qian's little head, then stretched out his fingers to pinch Charcoal's cheeks. He shook his head and said regretfully, "What a smart child, why is she so ugly?" In the end, Pei Qian was heartbroken. She was unhappy the whole day. Was it because of that yellow paper talisman? Her forehead was still listless. Qin Pingan looked at Pei Qian and thought of the little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket who liked to call him Little Martial Uncle. In the eyes of everyone in the Cliff Academy, that little girl in the red cotton-padded jacket was a little strange. She was always in a hurry by herself and liked to carry a small bamboo box. She went to the academy alone and left alone. She climbed mountains, trees, roofs, up and down. Otherwise, she would squat by the lake and stare at the fish, watching them swim around with their tails wagging. Whenever she had the chance, she would leave the academy and wander around the streets of the capital. The little girl was always alone inside and outside the academy. People who looked at her for a long time felt a little lonely. However, although it was strange, the little girl's etiquette was good enough. As long as she saw the teachers and teachers of the academy on the way, she would always stop abruptly, salute and greet them, and then run away as fast as lightning. In the beginning, the teachers and teachers would still stop and smile and say a few words of advice. But the red figure was already gone. Later they got used to it and smiled in response. In the end, they would shake their heads with a smile and continue walking without stopping. Li Baoping felt that she was doing okay in the Cliff Academy. Although she rarely saw Li Huai and Lin Shui, and she rarely saw Yu Lu and Xiesia. Even if she saw them, there was nothing to talk about. She didn't think much of these things after talking to Cui Dongshan on the tree branch on the mountain peak. They didn't miss her little martial uncle that much anymore. It didn't matter. She would just make up for their share. She would think more about her little martial uncle. Just like that, the days passed one by one. After the new year, even the first month of the lunar calendar was almost over. Soon it would be the Lantern Festival with big red lanterns hanging high. The little girl was a little homesick. Her parents, her grandfather, her eldest brother and second brother. And of course her little martial uncle. Little martial uncle hadn't sent a letter to the academy for a long time. This made Li Baoping a little sad. 372. It was the Lantern Festival on the 15th day of the first lunar month. Every household in Old Dragon City was decorated with lanterns and streamers. The streets and alleys were crowded with tourists. According to the customs, each of the 5 major surnames created a long dragon of lanterns to parade through the streets. If one were to look down from the sea of clouds at the richest city in the Aquarius continent, one would discover that there were 5 fire dragons roaming along a fixed route. Qin Pingan asked the 4 of them to bring Pei Qian out to enjoy the lanterns. The Yin spirit surnamed Zhao followed them secretly in case of any accidents. Yi and Jing Dafeng guarded the shop. The 2 of them stood at the counter. There was a pot of wine, 2 small white porcelain wine cups that were as thin as wings, and a few dishes to accompany the wine. They drank, ate, and chatted. Jing Dafeng always had some strange rules. Before drinking, he found a willow branch from somewhere and stuck it beside the dusty door of the medicine shop. He even placed a pair of bowls and chopsticks outside the door. Qin Pingan glanced at the door and asked, "Is it to worship the gods and Buddha or to entertain the wandering ghosts that pass by?" Jing Dafeng smiled and said, "It's just something that the old man passed down. The old man has never explained the specific rules. As his disciples, we can only follow his instructions. There are no demons or ghosts in Old Dragon City. With so many Qi refinement warriors gathered together, the yang energy is too strong. Even if there are a few kittens and puppies with old Zhao the Yin spirit in the medicine shop, they would not dare to come over. Ghosts and otherworldly items, not to mention those malicious ghosts who have lost their minds, most of us know more about rules and etiquette." Qin Pingan nodded and took a sip of wine. It was the osmanthus wine sent by the Fan family. He suddenly said, "I plan to ask Fan Junmao for help tomorrow to refine my first natal item by the Sea of Clouds. If it succeeds, I will leave Old Dragon City and head north." Although Old Master Sheng said that I can go anywhere in the future without any taboos, I thought about it. Anyway, there is nothing important that I have to do now. I will still follow Old Senior Yang's original plan and not return to Longquan County for the time being. I will probably go to 3 or 4 places in the Aquarius continent. I estimate that it will take me more than a year to travel. After I finish my tour, I can almost go back. Zheng Dafeng leaned against the counter and looked at the small alley outside the door. He casually asked, "Have you ever thought of establishing a sect in Longquan County?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "Just by looking at Master Ruan's behavior, you can roughly guess how troublesome it is. It's difficult. Furthermore, I don't have the qualifications to establish a sect." Zheng Dafeng took a sip of the wine with an intoxicated look on his face. It was only half a cup of osmanthus wine, but it seemed to have given him the intoxication of a few large jugs of fine wine. He chuckled and said, "If we can reclaim the mountains to the west of Longquan County one by one, we'll have over 10 connected mountains, and we'll have the foundation of natural energy to establish an immortal sect. However, it would not be easy for those forces to spit out the meat in their mouths. Previously, Dali only offered such a low price to make friends with the mountain immortals and the dynasty's tycoons. If it weren't for your relationship with Yuan Qing, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to buy a Jinju mountain, let alone Luapa mountain." Qin Pingan couldn't agree more. Although Black Pearl Grotto Heaven was not famous for its abundant natural energy, it was the opposite of the other 35 Grotto Heavens. 4 ordinary gold core and nascent soul earth immortals, it was a wonderful thing that they could only dream of if they could own a Luapa mountain all by themselves. Qin Pingan said that it was difficult to establish a sect, but deep in his heart, he really hoped that there would be such a day. Just like when he chatted with Lu Tai in the Eagle Castle, he had already thought about the people and things he should do in his own mountain. Otherwise, why would Qin Pingan want to ask the old Taoist Lord of Heaven in Taiping Mountain how much it would cost to set up a mountain defense array? Zhong Kuei told him that the old Taoist Lord of Heaven was guarding Taiping Mountain, showed his golden body, held the bright moon mirror, and drove 3 swords to hunt down the white ape with a sword on his back thousands of miles away. How could Qin Pingan not be fascinated? The old man, who was familiar with the dusty medicine shop, suddenly appeared, crossed the threshold with a smile, and said directly, "Qin Pingan, it seems that you are about to leave Old Dragon City. I have something to discuss with you." Qin Pingan stood up straight, put down the wine cup and chopsticks, and said with a smile, "Sir, please go ahead." The old man gestured for Qin Pingan to continue drinking and eating. He walked to the counter, grabbed a few fried peanuts with his fingers and put them in his mouth. After pondering for a moment, he said, "Maybe it's a little hard for you and also a little offensive. But fate is unpredictable like duckweed. If you miss it today, you may miss it forever. If you shrink back and stick your head out, you'll be stabbed. I'll just say it directly. After that, little brother Chen and brother De Feng, don't make this old man unable to eat peanuts and sugar lotus slices in the future." Zheng Dafeng said angrily, "The 3 of us are open-minded people. Can't you say something straightforward?" The old man looked up, threw a piece of lotus root into his mouth and chewed. "Although Sui Yuyu is a pure martial arts master and reached the golden body state, in my opinion, the bottleneck is too big. It's extremely difficult to reach the top. At most, he'll be in the far travel state. If he's lucky, he'll only be a martial artist of the 8th state." Zheng Dafeng immediately said, "Only a martial artist of the 8th state? Old man, if you have the guts, go on the streets and shout these words. Let's see what the Earth Immortals in Old Dragon City think. Will they be so angry that they will slap your mouth?" The old man had a good temper and did not care about Zheng Dafeng's rebuttal. He smiled and said, "This is an exception. Actually, Sui Yu shouldn't have walked the path of martial arts." Zheng Dafeng slammed the table. "What did you say?" The old man quickly bent down and took Qin Pingan's wine cup, filled it with osmanthus wine, and raised it to Zheng Dafeng. "I said something wrong. I'll punish myself with 3 cups, 3 cups. He finished it in 1 gulp and was about to pour a second cup. Qin Pingan smiled and reached out to cover the mouth of the wine pot. "Old mister, just drink a cup of wine as punishment. We're so familiar with each other, there's no need to be so formal." The old man resentfully put down the wine cup, wiped his mouth and said regretfully, "This wine is good, but it's a pity that the taste is a bit bland. I can't taste it after 1 or 2 cups. Zheng Dafeng picked up a piece of shallot with tofu. "Brother Sun, if you have something to say, just say it." The old man surnamed Sun continued, "Sui Yuyu is an extremely rare innate sword embryo. She has the disposition of a sword immortal. That's not all, but the key is that her sword heart is pure and clear. In the future, as a nascent soul sword cultivator, the possibility of breaking through the bottleneck of the 5th state will be greater. I don't mind saying this at the table. As long as little brother Qin is willing to part with his treasure and allow Sui Yuyu to join our sect, in 100 years, or at most 20 years, I guarantee that Sui Yuyu will become an extremely powerful nascent soul sword cultivator." Qin Pingan smiled and did not say anything. He handed over the chopsticks and poured a cup of wine for the old man. Zheng Dafeng sneered, "Old man Sun, are you trying to swallow the sun and the moon like a toad? Aren't you afraid of bursting yourself?" Taking a step back, Sui Yuyu is already a golden body martial artist. You said it yourself that becoming a distant travel martial artist is not difficult. He just needs time to polish his body. You, on the other hand, want Sui Yu to give up all the things he has in his pocket for a Realm 8 martial artist. You want him to use up all his pure vital chi and spend another 100 or 200 years to pursue that illusory Realm 5 sword cultivator. The old man complained, "Didn't I say it earlier? It's a bit difficult, but Sui Yuyu has such an outstanding talent. If he doesn't turn to cultivate the way of the sword, it would be fine if I didn't see it. But now that I see it, I have to keep it in my stomach. It's really unbearable. I can't stand such a reckless waste of natural resources. Think about it, Sui Yuyu is such a pretty little girl. In the future, even if she becomes a martial artist in the distant travel realm, she'll still fight and kill with her fists. Punching and kicking, how much of a killjoy can she be? How can she compare to a female sword immortal with outstanding charm, her white clothes fluttering in the wind and her flying sword slashing enemies from 1,000 miles away?" Zheng Dafeng sneered, "It's easy to say. The higher the realm of a pure martial artist, the more dangerous it is to dissipate one's vital chi. This is especially true for the 3rd realm of spirit refinement. It involves the primordial spirit and soul. If you're not careful, Sui Yuyu might lose half of her life, not to mention her innate embryo immortal potential. Old man Sun, do you think you're an ascendant realm cultivator or an immortal realm cultivator? Besides, why would Qin Pingan give Sui Yuyu, such a beauty and half a personal maid, to an idle old pervert like you with both hands? The old man said seriously, I'm not vulgar. It's not for outsiders to know that. Brother Dafeng, you can humiliate me, but don't look down on yourself too. Zheng Dafeng gave the old man a thumbs up and picked up some food with his chopsticks. Brother's words are magnanimous. I can't find any flaws in them. The old man raised his cup and took a big gulp. Then he stroked his beard and smiled. I know, Brother Dafeng. You're a famous person of my generation. At the crucial moment, your words are firm, reasonable, and righteous. Qin Pingan picked up a peanut and chewed slowly. The old man did not dare to rush him. The success or failure of this matter would depend on the decision of this young man in front of him. Even if that old man treats you sincerely and is willing to accept you as his direct disciple and let you enter his sect's ancestral hall, how can I guarantee that others won't have evil intentions towards you? They won't hope to restrain you and force you into a dangerous situation at some critical juncture? A person in a high position has no choice. But I, Qin Pingan, am different. It's not that I'm kinder and treat you better, but at least I won't treat you as a commodity. No one will pay a sky-high price to buy you. Sui Yuyu stared at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan looked at him calmly. Truth? Sui Yuyu didn't say yes or no. Instead, he inexplicably changed the topic. That female Taoist nun of Mount Taiping is really beautiful. She's also a nascent soul sword cultivator. Qin Pingan asked strangely, and then? Sui Yuyu asked, You're not moved at all? Qin Pingan rolled his eyes and held the back of his head with his hands. He walked leisurely. There are so many beautiful women in the world. If they're beautiful, I'll look at them a few more times. They're pleasing to the eye. It's human nature. But why would I be moved? Sui Yuyu laughed for the first time. As a man, you don't even have the thought of hugging a woman. Are you, Qin Pingan, sick? Qin Pingan still held the back of his head and turned his neck. Languid, he said, Don't scold me. They walked back to the dusty drugstore in silence. Pei Qian, who was still awake, held a mountain walking stick at the door of the drugstore. She said that she wanted to show off her skills to Qin Pingan. She vowed that after Old Wei and Little White saw her swordsmanship and knife skills, they said that they were superb. As for the white ape-back swordsmanship and dragging knife style that Huang Ting taught Pei Qian, the four people in the painting pretended that they didn't know. They wouldn't steal it and secretly tempt Pei Qian to tell them the formula. On the one hand, he had to talk about the righteousness of Jianghu. On the other hand, Pei Qian, that clever little girl, would definitely agree and then turn around to sell them out to Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan would not be easy to talk to about this kind of thing. The four people, including Sui Yuyu and Zhu Lian, didn't dare to test Qin Pingan's bottom line with this kind of thing. Therefore, Sui Yuyu walked into the drugstore and went to the backyard to practice the sword furnace stance that Qin Pingan tacitly allowed. In the alley, Qin Pingan stood at the door and smiled. Give it a try. Pei Qian nodded with a straight face. With a light shout, she took a step forward, holding the mountain walking stick with both hands and waving it with the dragging knife style. Pei Qian didn't control her strength well, so the mountain walking stick flew out of her hand. Qin Pingan reached out and grabbed the bamboo stick that almost hit the wall of the alley. Otherwise it would have been destroyed. Pei Qian was dumbfounded. It was over. He felt that he was definitely going to eat chestnuts. On this night, the Yin spirit with the surname Zhao found Qin Pingan, who was sleeping on the floor. He said that the old man wanted him to pass on a message again. The Tong Yi sect had officially given the compensation. The golden elixir of the 12th level great demon had already been refined in the small cave of Wutong by Du Mao, who had lost his mind for the sake of immortal ascension. Therefore he used 2 pieces of 5-colored glass in exchange. They were as small as a thumb and as big as a fist. After the soul of a 12th level great cultivator decayed or disintegrated, it was possible that an immortal's remains would appear. Legend has it that after a great cultivator of the immortal ascension realm failed, there would be pieces of 5-colored glass-like golden body. This was the only thing that reduced the anger of the Tong Yi sect slightly after Du Mao destroyed the cave of Wudong, regardless of the life and death of the disciples of the sect. After Du Mao knew that he had failed to immortal ascension at the last moment, he controlled the pieces of glass that fell in all directions. 3 of them returned to the ancestor mountain of the Tong Yi sect. Only 1 piece was left in the ancestor hall of the Tong Yi sect, and the other 2 pieces were taken out. After the Yin spirit with the surname Zhao explained this important matter, He carefully handed Qin Pingan a palm-sized yellowish wudong leaf. He said that this was something that the Tong Yi sect had taken out together. The pieces of glass after the immortal ascension realm failed to pass the tribulation were placed inside. In addition, the old man also specially prepared 2 sets of mountain guarding formation for Qin Pingan. One set was an imitation of the offensive sword formation of Taiping Mountain, and the other set was an imitation of the mountain guarding formation of the Fuyao sect. The immortal money needed to hire the Mahist masters to build the formation was paid by the Tong Yi sect. It was all Guyu money and they were all placed in the Wudong leaf. However, the pivotal magic treasures of the 2 formations, such as the flying sword and the golden puppet, still needed Qin Pingan to find them by himself. In the future, whether he could buy them with money or by chance depended on whether he was fated to find them. Finally, the Yin spirit said, "You must carry the Wudong leaf with you," but the old man also said that it's best to wait until you return to your hometown town before looking at the various objects inside. Otherwise, once you open the closed object, it's equivalent to opening the door of the small cave for a short time, and it's easy to leak the secrets inside. After all, the pieces of glass of the immortal ascension realm cultivators are too rare. Any cultivator of the 5 realms will covet it. The old man also asked me to pass on one thing. The golden wine robe is a half-immortal weapon. It won't be a loss. Qin Pingan put away the Wudong leaf. After Yin Spirit Zhao finished speaking, his figure dissipated. He helped the old man twice and also gained a lot. Qin Pingan lay back on the floor, touched the white jade hairpin on his head, and closed his eyes to sleep. The next morning, when the sky was slightly bright, Fan Junmao arrived as promised and took Qin Pingan to the sea of clouds in the sky above Old Dragon City. The old man surnamed Sun had been waiting outside the shop for a long time. Before Qin Pingan said anything, Sui Yuyu opened the curtain and chatted with the old man outside the door. Sui Yuyu walked back to the backyard. The old man stroked his beard and nodded with a smile. Although it was not the best result, it was not bad. He just had to wait for a few more years. At that time, Yugui sect would have another nascent soul realm sword cultivator who had a chance to reach the 5 realms within 100 years. Well, when the time came, he would personally take her to Tongya sect and pay a visit to see if she could contribute to the rebuilding of the ancestral hall of his brother's sect. Cultivators had to be kind. The sun rose from the east and the rays of light were boundless. The top of the sea of clouds was beautiful. When the time came, heaven and earth would work together. The waterword seal that Qin Pingan refined this time was his first life item. Apart from the fact that it took an entire 10 years, there weren't many flaws. A mural appeared on the wall of Qin Pingan's Xiantian pellet chamber. A river was like a white silk, filled with mist, slowly flowing. At the moment of success, the golden necklace robe on his body became light. Even if Qin Pingan let go of his courage and loosened the golden necklace restriction, allowing the spiritual qi in the sea of clouds to flow back into his acupoints, it would automatically flow into a lake inside his acupoints. Only at this moment did the pure martial qi that was constantly being eaten away completely break free of its shackles. As if it had been granted amnesty, it crazily wandered around the small world of the human body. Qin Pingan slightly controlled it. The true qi in his body, the lake and the spiritual qi streams that flowed into the lake had more or less reached a state where they did not invade each other. Just like the officials of a country's imperial court, they could not be said to be complementing each other, nor could they be said to be fighting to the death. It was a peaceful coexistence. In the middle of the night, Qin Pingan and Fan Junmao returned to the dusty medicine shop together, quietly. The 4 people in the mural opened and closed their eyes and slowly fell asleep. The black smoke of Yin Master Zhao gradually disappeared into the wall. Jing Dafeng and Pei Qian were sleeping soundly. Qin Pingan sat on a long bench and drank a mouthful of medicinal wine. Fan Junmao stood at the side and asked, "If it was you, Qin Pingan, would you take out the sea of clouds that accompanied you for countless years, and exchange it for the deity position of the southern mountain deity in the Aquarius continent?" Qin Pingan said honestly, "I don't know." Fan Junmao, who was in a bad mood, said angrily, "Then what do you know?" Qin Pingan laughed, "I know, but I don't know." Fan Junmao tossed Qin Pingan a long sword that he had placed in the armory earlier. His face darkened as he flashed away. Early in the morning, Qin Pingan and the rest left the dusty medicine shop, and went to the Immortal Ferry on the west side of Old Dragon City. They took a ferry and set off towards Qinghuan country, which was in the southeast territory of the Aquarius continent. Fan Air accompanied them to the ferry, and complained to Qin Pingan that the next time they meet, he must not forget the porcelain and flower wine. 373. This ship to Qing Yuan was built by a Mahist mechanic. It was nothing out of the ordinary among the many ferries in Old Dragon City. Every time it carried 100 people, it was mostly transporting rare goods from the north of the Aquarius continent and the south of the Tonya continent. However, the goods that arrived in the hands of the merchants were the result of selection by the 5 major families in Old Dragon City. The quality of the goods was naturally average. Occasionally they would pick up a few goods and earn a few hundred snow coins, which was already worth celebrating. Qing Yuan was a little famous in the southeast of the Aquarius continent. It was famous for its many Taoist temples and temples. Various Taoist immortals and virtuous monks often held water and land Taoist temples and Luotian grand ritual with the support of the imperial court. In addition, Qing Yuan's sandalwood paper was extremely famous and was sold to many continents. This made Qing Yuan one of the richest rulers in the southeast of the Aquarius continent. Moreover, Buddhism was not popular in the Aquarius continent. The number of temples in Qing Yuan was the highest in the continent. The sound of Sanskrit lingered in the air and the walls were filled with the beautiful works of sages, writers and poets. In a brightly lit room on the top floor of the ferry, Qin Pingan was reading a book about the landscape of Qing Yuan. He bought it from the bookstore in Old Dragon City and specially asked Zhu Lian to help him search for it. Qin Pingan read while Pei Qian copied. The hardest thing in the world was at the beginning. After a long time, it would become a habit and it would not be difficult. Pei Qian was like that. Reading and copying became a daily habit. Even if Qin Pingan did not urge her, she would still persevere. However, Qin Pingan also knew that if he was not by her side for a long time, Pei Qian would definitely stop copying books. At most, she would feel guilty for 2 or 3 days and then she would go and play wildly. Qin Pingan divided the pot of Old Dragon Gold Core Nascent Soul Stage medicinal wine into 5 portions and gave 1 portion to each of the 4 people in the painting. This was one of the few lucky things that could happen to pure martial artists who could rely on external help to cultivate. Sui Yuyu was now at the 7th realm, the Golden Body realm. She also had the Dharma Sword Infatuation in her hands. Her killing power was actually not small, especially when it came to close combat. Qi cultivators below the Earth Immortal realm might not be her match once she got within 100 feet of them. The signs of Zhu Lian's bottleneck loosening were clear. Following closely behind Sui Yuyu, he was the second person to step into the 3 realms of martial arts. Wei Xian and Liu Baixiang did not have the possibility of breaking through for the time being. However, after Zheng Dafeng's feeding fist, and the death match outside Old Dragon City, they had pushed their peak realm 6 peak a little higher. The 4 people in the painting were not ordinary 7th realm and 6th realm martial artists. In this trip to the Aquarius continent, as long as they did not meet any crazy cultivators of the upper 5 realms, even if they faced a nascent soul earth immortal who was not a sword cultivator, they would still have the power to fight. As long as Wei Xian and the other 3 did not hesitate to die, perhaps Qin Pingan's side could still win. After the Battle of Old Dragon City, Qin Pingan regretted the most was the green sword suppressing talisman. Zhong Kuei wrote it with a small snow cone and gave it to Zheng Dafeng. Coincidentally, the sword that was trapped was the half-immortal weapon, Sword Immortal, that Qin Pingan was carrying on his back. Because the city lord of Old Dragon City, Fu Li, was not a sword cultivator and the sword was not a natal item, Zheng Dafeng used the sword-suppressing talisman to trap the sword. Even if it could not last for long, Fu Li admitted defeat. If he had a sword-suppressing talisman, Qin Pingan would not have to be too afraid even if he met a nascent soul sword cultivator with murderous intent. Instead, he could catch them off guard and catch them off guard. However, these gains and losses were not to the extent that Qin Pingan could not let go of them. What really made Qin Pingan disappointed was this talisman. Was it the last 2 talismans that Zhong Kuei wrote in the world as a person of the Yang realm? One of them. Compared to the cross-continent ferries that Qin Pingan had ridden and seen before, the ferry under his feet was really small. He could only stand at the window and admire the scenery, there was no viewing platform. After Pei Qian finished writing, Qin Pingan carefully checked it and found that there were no careless words that needed to be rewritten. He then began to practice the 6-step stance with her, at least 4 hours a day. In the past, Qin Pingan did not think that practicing the 6-step stance was boring and tiring. It was only after Pei Qian started practicing that he realized that although the mountain quaking fist stance was simple, it was not easy to practice it a million times. It was the same for both the body and mind. Even though Qin Pingan paid attention to Pei Qian's shortness of breath and the excess of physical strength, Pei Qian was always so tired that she was drenched in sweat. The hair on her forehead was plastered together and her face was deathly pale. Although she did not dare to complain, Chin Pingan watched from the side as her tan little face lost its smile or her thin body involuntarily trembled when she walked step by step. Although Chin Pingan was expressionless from beginning to end, he felt somewhat distressed when he saw her. On the first day, Pei Chin relied on the excitement of a newborn calf and endured 4 hours of 6-step stance. In the end, it was Chin Pingan who carried her to the next room. On the second day, she fell to the ground after only 2 hours, cramping incessantly. Her entire body was drained of energy. Chin Pingan did not insist on 4 hours. For the next few days he guaranteed 2 hours of continuous 6-step stance, only a little longer each time. Only then did Pei Chen grit her teeth and persevere. In the beginning, little Charcoal still had the energy to glare at Julien when he was mocking her from the side. Later on she really did not have the energy to fight for justice with Julien. 10 days later, after enduring the most arduous part of the journey, Pei Chen's face finally had a smile of the past. When she started walking, she once again began to swagger with Pei Chen's signature swagger. Otherwise she would jump and skip. Julien would say something like, "Young master, this old servant personally believes that Pei Chen's martial arts aptitude is extremely good. When tempering her body, her muscles and bones should suffer more so that her blood and chi can flourish. There's no harm in practicing 6-step stance for 4 hours every day." Pei Chen could already continue to glare at him. On this day, after practicing the 6-step stance, one adult and one child opened the window and practiced the sword furnace stance. Pei Chen was short, so she could only face the wall and reflect. After Chin Pingan agreed, she stepped onto a chair. It just so happened that she could overlook the sea of clouds outside the window with Chin Pingan. Chin Pingan said softly, "You have to believe that the hard times will end and the good times will come." Pei Chen was currently practicing the sword furnace stance, but it was just for show. The results were extremely small. Chin Pingan was also a little puzzled. After asking Sui Yuyu and the others, he was unable to get an answer. After enduring another day of hardship, Pei Chen was secretly happy in her heart. She thought of something and turned her head with a face full of longing. "When I roam Jianghu in the future, can I also have a sword? It would be best if I could be like Xiao Bai and have a saber hanging from my waist. At that time, my strength would definitely increase by a lot. I wouldn't complain about having too much or being heavy." Chin Pingan smiled and nodded. "As long as you don't slack off when you roam Jianghu alone in the future, I can promise you right now that in the future, I will definitely give you a sword and a saber." Pei Chen was a little embarrassed and said in a small voice, "Actually, I've already thought about it. In the future, if I have my own saber and sword, I will hang them on the same side of my waist. This kind of sword and saber hanging posture, I even have a name for it. Master, do you want to hear it?" Chin Pingan smiled. "Tell me about it. When it comes to naming things, I, Chin Pingan, have always been very good at it. For example, the 1st and 15th day of the lunar month, or the exorcism of demons." Pei Chen whispered, "Let's call it saber and sword together, because they are intertwined at the waist. Master, what do you think?" Chin Pingan smiled. "Pretty good." Pei Chen's eyes narrowed into crescents as he smiled. He stuck out 2 fingers and stuck them together. "With the sword that Master is carrying, I am already very happy." Chin Pingan leaned against the window and turned his head with a smile. "When we return, the ferry will stop at the shore. We will still follow the old rules and travel Qingwan on foot. When we see a bamboo forest by the side of the road, I will pick some older bamboo to make 2 bamboo sabers and bamboo swords for you. If you don't mind, you can hang them first." Pei Chen loudly said, "Make them lighter and smaller. It won't be heavy to hang them on my body." Chin Pingan smiled and agreed. He looked at the sea of clouds and casually asked, "Then what about the mountain walking staff?" Pei Chen said without hesitation, "It is the #1 general under my command. Alas, it has accompanied me for so long. I can't bear to just throw it away. I will allow it to retire and play with its grandchildren. When I return, I will ask Old Wei what kind of official title should I give it." He dropped a large bag of acid-toothed books. However, Chin Pingan nodded in approval and said softly, "That's right." In Old Dragon City at the Dusty Medicine Shop, Zheng Dafeng actually didn't have much luggage to pack. Other than some clothes, he only needed to bring the old tobacco pipe with him. It was as if this sloppy man, no matter if it was when he saw the broken wooden fence in Liju Grotto Heaven or when he came here, he had always been like this. There was nothing that he had to pick up and nothing that he couldn't put down. Tomorrow he would take the Fu family's ferry back to the Dali dynasty's Longquan County. 374. Apart from the one at the border of Shu Shui country and Songshi country and the one at Qingfu Square, Qin Pingan either came and went in a hurry or just strolled around without buying anything. Today he decided to take Pei Qian and the others for a good tour of the ferry. Qin Pingan gave each of the 4 people in the picture scroll a small piece of money and allowed them to buy whatever they wanted. There was a saying of thousands, hundreds and tens in the mountain. A small piece of money was worth 1,000 taels of silver in the secular dynasty. A small piece of money was worth 100,000 taels of gold and silver. Spiritual weapons and magic treasures were not an extravagant hope, but they could buy some rare items with interesting craftsmanship from the mountain and keep them in their pockets. It was not difficult to take them out for eye candy. After making an appointment with the 4 of them, they would meet at the most famous place at the ferry in 2 hours. Qin Pingan took Pei Qian to walk around and buy things at the ferry. In places like Qingfu Fang, where there were masters, the chances of finding something were very small and the prices were relatively expensive. Some of the people who did not have a place to stay were the best to try their luck and test their judgment. Most of these people were rogue cultivators who lived in the mountains and lakes. They liked to buy things from the descendants of the old rich families at low prices. Some of them claimed that their ancestors or masters had produced Jindan and Yuanying earth immortals. These were the ways to sell things and the buyers did not need to care about these. Qin Pingan had learned a lot from Su Yuanxia, the big-bearded hero who traveled around the world. Later, Yao Jinji explained that the caged pair actually belonged to this line of business. Pei Qian did not have much experience in the world, so he had a feast for the eyes for all kinds of strange immortal calligraphy and paintings, spiritual artifacts, spirits and mountain monsters. Pei Qian had one good point, which was that he was ridiculed by Zhu Lian as a little taotai. He liked to accept things and did not like to spend money, so he could not tell. Therefore, no matter how much she coveted the things, she would only take a few glances and would never open the small sachet that Madame Gue gave her. If she really liked it, she would take a few glances and treat it as her own. It was just a temporary store for her. Qin Pingan had never been extravagant. Therefore, after walking around with Pei Qian for about an hour and walking down a dozen shops, he did not take out a single copper coin. He saw Qin Pingan, who was wearing a white robe and carrying a white scabbard long sword. He followed him for 700 to 800 steps. He looked honest, but his speech was not clumsy. He said that his grandfather was a great general of Jing Kingdom. After the fall of Jing Kingdom, His Majesty the Emperor died during his escape. He lost one of the 17 treasures of Jiaotai Palace, the Qihu Jade Seal, which was brought to the people by his grandfather. Now, a great immortal master of Qinghuan Kingdom had already collected all 16 treasures and only this spirit treasure of condensing luck was left. In this industry, perfection was the most important thing. Therefore this treasure, which might even contain the dragon Qi of the kingdom, was priceless. The reason why the man followed him 700 or 800 steps away was because the young man beside him looked like a rich young master. He had a good temper and did not chase him away. Instead, he listened carefully. Secondly, the man was really worried that if he did not open his business he would suffer a lot. Last year he managed to get through the new year with great difficulty. It was related to 3 small sums of money, which was enough to buy him several lives. He had lived a miserable new year in fear. According to the rules, after the first month of this year, if no one took the bait, he would really be in trouble. Every country had its laws and every trade had its rules. People could really die. In order to sell some things to survive, the man could be said to be unscrupulous. As a third realm Qi cultivator, not only did he shamelessly follow the young master all the way, he even took the initiative to introduce the scenery of the ferry to the young master. The immortal ferry on the border of Qinghuan country was called Wasp Tail Ferry. It originated from when the ferry was first built. It was once a small town in the marketplace. In history there was a jade immortal who started from nothing here. With the identity of a mountain and lake cultivator, he relied on great perseverance and great luck to ascend to the upper 5 realms. All kinds of immortal deeds were spread across half the continent. He was extremely famous among all the rogue cultivators in the Aquarius continent. This person's ancestral home was located in an alley called Wasp Tail Alley. It was also coincidentally located at the end of the alley. Later on, this ferry was named Wasp Tail Ferry. Because the ferry was located at the border of 3 countries, in order to fight over the ownership of this alley and this ancestral home, Qinghuan country's Tang family and the 2 neighboring countries used pen and knife to fight countless battles on paper and on the battlefield. However, the 3 sides had a tacit understanding that the battles would not affect the ferry. For this reason, Lakeview Academy specially sent a gentleman and a sage to mediate this matter several times. Under the strong recommendation of the man, the fairy had a unique well wine brewed by immortals in the world. A snowflake cost a small pot. The high officials and dignitaries of Qingwan country liked to use it to show off their wealth. That young master really bought a pot of well wine from a street corner shop and asked for 2 white bowls from the shopkeeper. After sitting down, he actually smiled and gestured for the man to sit down and drink with him. The man originally wanted to stand on the side and act pitiful. Maybe the young master would feel pity for him and buy his tattered belongings. However, the wine in his stomach was really causing trouble. He sat down and drank the wine. As he drank, he complained that he couldn't control his mouth. He thought that if he drank too much wine, it would most likely spoil this deal. For a moment, all sorts of feelings welled up in his heart and he could only treat it as a bowl of wine. Chen Pingan clinked his bowl with the man's and asked with a smile, "Since this imperial jade seal is valuable and there is an immortal master waiting for it to complete the 17 treasures of Jing country, why not just come and sell it directly?" The man had already prepared a plan to deal with this kind of problem. Isn't it fake? We made a mistake and cheated some divine money from that guy? Pei Qian suddenly slapped the table with both hands and said with heartache, "This can't be tolerated." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "This is not the worst result. The worst situation is that we set up a badger trap for others. Not only will we be forced to buy and sell, but once we can afford the divine money, the other party will take a mile after taking an inch and simply kill us to rob us. Let's just talk about this person's character. After all, we're not familiar with him. Even if his nature is not bad, once he encounters a hurdle that he can't get over, such as owing a lot of debt, the person who owes the debt is weak and the person who demands the debt is ruthless. When the two are added together, then the pitiful person must be hateful. If we pity him now, who will pity us later?" Pei Qian thought for a moment. "We have a lot of people. Anyway, we're in the right. Why don't we beat them to death with 2 or 3 punches?" Qin Pingan chested. "When we're outside, if we only rely on our fists to reason, then Du Mao can meet us. Can't we meet others?" Pei Qian felt wronged. "But we're good people. Old thief Du is not an evil person. After being struck by lightning, being thrown into a frying pan, having his tongue pulled out, his heart cut open and red-hot iron poured into his mouth." Qin Pingan interrupted Pei Qian's nonsense. "Where did you learn all these things?" Pei Qian said with a lingering fear, "Last time during the Lantern Festival in Old Dragon City, there was a lantern festival that Xiao Bai said was warning the world and educating people, shaking off evil and promoting good. At that time I stared at it for a while and felt that it had nothing to do with me. But the book said that if there is something wrong, then there is something wrong." Qin Pingan's sword-nourishing gourd was now filled with a small amount of medicinal wine, so it was not appropriate to store the fairy's specialty immortal wine. He also had many jars of osmanthus wine given by the Fan family in his jade tablet. In fact, in the past year he had no shortage of good wine to satisfy his cravings, so he only bought 2 jars from the store. He planned to put them together with the osmanthus wine. When he reached Luapa Mountain, he would bury them together behind the bamboo house. Every 10 years, 1 jar would be raised. It could be considered one of Qin Pingan's rich family assets. On the other side of the Beetail Alley, he met up with Wei Xian and the other 3 who had arrived one after another. On this trip to the Beetail Ferry, Qin Pingan did not take a fancy to anything particularly interesting. He only bought Pei Qian a beautifully illustrated sage book. The engraving was excellent, and every word was full of spirit. Just as Qin Pingan was about to leave the ferry, a young man carrying an empty wine jug walked out of the alley. He was tall and sturdy, and there was a fine iron chain-like belt around his waist. How could he not like her? How could he not be willing to put her in his heart? The last time Old Dragon City drank with Fan Air on the roof of the medicine shop, Qin Pingan said, "The girl I like, she is already the most beautiful. But she is even more beautiful than the most beautiful. When I look at her and she pretends not to know, she turns her face sideways and her eyelashes tremble slightly." The story of quarrying stone. At that time, Fan Air was a little confused and asked him, "How much do you like that girl, Qin Pingan?" Qin Pingan was a little drunk at that time, but he was holding the blade-strengthening gourd and laughing foolishly. When Qin Pingan followed the route to find the real old well wine, the burly young man didn't want to bump into the young man who left Liju Cave Heaven again to avoid arousing suspicion, so he deliberately chose a different wine shop. On the way, an old man with restrained spirit quietly appeared, came to the young man's side and said a small thing. The young man laughed angrily and said, "These guys have water in their heads. They really value money more than their lives." Pass a message to the person in charge and tell them to stop. Don't let them be a feast for others. He wanted to say something else, to take the opportunity to teach Beetail Fairy a lesson, but when he thought of the difficult life of an itinerant cultivator, the young man shook his head helplessly. That's it. There's no need to deliberately knock them down. It's all their own good fortune. However, no one in Beetail Fairy is allowed to provoke the group of foreigners I just met. Also, take this opportunity to help old Lou pay off his debt in private. According to the rules, it's a small sum of money. After that, find a chance to scare old Lou again and tell him not to be a gambler anymore. His current wealth is enough for him to live comfortably for the rest of his life. The old man carefully asked, if Lou Gonzi can't control himself in the future, will he gamble again? The burly young man said, then he has only himself to blame. I can help him once but not forever. The old man wanted to say something but stopped. The burly young man shook his head and said, although that imperial jade seal is genuine, ordinary chi refinement warriors can't touch it. Master said before that we shouldn't underestimate the remnant luck of a fallen country. There are great blessings and misfortunes in it. After all, the Jiang family of Jing country still has a crown prince who is cultivating in the mountains. As for that guy who is bent on collecting the full set of Jing country's 17 treasures, he's on the path of dragon supporting technique. He's suitable, but we can't. If we can't control our greed, we'll be the same kind of people as old Lou. We might even be worse. It's unreasonable for us chi refinement warriors to cultivate immortality. If we continue to gamble with the heavens, we'll be tired of living. The old man obeyed the order and left. This old retainer who lived in seclusion at Beetail Fairy was the golden core cultivator who saw Chen Pingan's aura at first glance. The native people of the fairy would only come here to throw money and pray for blessings during the New Year or other festivals. Most of the passengers on the Beetail Ferry were merchants who were familiar with this place. They did not believe in such things and were not willing to spend money. Therefore, at this moment, there was only Chin Pingan and his group, along with a few groups of children who were playing with each other. Further away, a few children were flying kites. On the high branches of the apricot tree, there were a few kites that unfortunately had their strings broken. Chen Pingan looked at the apricot tree that was faintly flowing with spiritual aura and was about to leave. However, he found that the little lotus person had drilled out from the ground and was standing on the hollow abdomen of the apricot tree, which was like a door, sticking her head out and looking around. Soon, another head popped out from the pile of money and looked at the little lotus person. The latter climbed out of the pile of money, straightened her back and put her hands on her hips. She looked very arrogant, but she could not hide the curiosity and joy in her eyes. The little guy's clothes were luxurious and comical. He wore a cute, pocket-sized bright yellow dragon robe. There was an ivory jade tablet and a mahogany scabbard on his waist. Pei Qian pulled Chen Pingan's sleeve. Chen Pingan thought for a moment and took out a piece of snow and gave it to Pei Qian. He said with a smile, "Go. Remember to talk nicely to this little immortal. Don't offend her." Pei Qian ran over and squatted at the small door. After about the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Pei Qian returned with a full load. Chen Pingan did not know whether to laugh or cry. Without saying anything, he rewarded her with a chestnut. However, this time, the little lotus person unexpectedly stood on Pei Qian's side for the first time. She was dancing with joy and babbling. Pei Qian felt a little guilty. She turned around obediently and wanted to return the piece of grass in her hand. The G of soil as well as the pink sapling was returned to the apricot tree spirit. What a pity. She had even taken out 2 snowflakes to spend. This transaction could be considered a loss. The little lotus person was relatively stupid and did not know how to speak. The little thing dressed in fancy clothes was much smarter. It spoke the language of the Aquarius continent more fluently than Pei Qian. The little thing chattered with the little lotus person for a long time. At that time, Pei Qian did not understand. Then, the little lotus person knocked on Pei Qian's boots and pointed at the piece of snow in Pei Qian's hand. Pei Qian began to bargain with the apricot tree spirit. At the same time, Pei Qian also boasted to it that the spiritual qi in her home was much more abundant than here. It was as thick as water and she could drink until she was full with just one mouthful. He asked with a smile, "Didn't you discuss with the immortal masters here at Beetail Fairy to be a consecrated guest or something like that? After finding one of the 5 peaks and signing a mountain pledge contract, they should be happy to see one more king of the middle 5 peaks who can't run away." The little fellow sat on the top of Chen Mountain with a worried face and said in a childish voice, I also want to, but those stinky guys trust me but I don't trust them. This is a troublesome place. Bee's Tail Ferry is adjacent to the three countries of Qinghuan, Qingshan and Yunshao. The few forces at the ferry are intertwined and no one is willing to submit to anyone. For money, they would secretly beat each other's brains out for no reason. For the mountain pledge contract, which of the 5 peaks do you think I should choose? Even if I foolishly choose one, won't the other 2 hate me to death? Maybe one day they will secretly find someone to chop my body into pieces and burn it as firewood? Although now the incense is bleak and I have to eat 3 meals, but at least I won't die. Don't you chi cultivators say that a bad life is better than a good death? Well, there's also that saying that a dead Taoist is better than a dead Taoist. Chen Pingan pretended that he didn't hear the last sentence. He deeply agreed with the little fellow's worries. As an apricot spirit who had no one to rely on, if he wanted to break through the realm, he would need to sign a mountain pledge with the chi cultivators. But Bee's Tail Ferry was located at the border of the 3 regions and was not under the jurisdiction of any country. So this was really a big trouble. If Bee's Tail Ferry was a dominant force, it would be fine. Chen Pingan wanted to help but could not. The little fellow said pitifully, I heard from the little black girl that Immortal Master lives in a place like a paradise and absorbs aura like the mortals drinking water. Why don't you help me and bring this little sapling back? Once it grows, it can also help Immortal Master to stabilize the aura of the mountains and rivers. This is a mutually beneficial thing for both of us. Ordinary chi cultivators, not mentioning the merchants who only care about money, just the farmers and the Yao family, who wouldn't treat this as a blessing from the heavens. Immortal Master who is passing by, you must cherish it well. Chen Pingan put the soil and the sapling on the ground and smiled. Do you want to say, if you don't take what is given by the heavens, you will be punished instead? The little fellow was dejected and scratched his cheeks. The 2 little ones are easy to fool. You, the big one, are experienced in the pugilistic world. Sure enough, it is not easy to fool you. Once Chen Pingan planted this little sapling on his mountain, it was true that the sapling could help to stabilize the aura of the mountains and rivers. However, it was extremely limited. More importantly, it was constantly stealing aura for the ancestral tree. Therefore, it was definitely a money-losing business. Wei Xian did not believe in this and generally did not go in but just waited at the door. Julien also did not believe in this and only accompanied Chen Pingan and Pei Qian to walk around. Lu Baixiang only entered the temple to offer incense and was very pious. Sui Yuyu entered the temple to offer incense and was also very sincere. Chen Pingan reminded Pei Qian that it was okay to offer incense, but not to make a wish casually. Moreover, he could not kowtow and make a wish when he saw the bodhisattvas and deities in the temple. However, he also told Pei Qian that if one day he had a feeling and really wanted to make a wish, then he had to be serious and remember the content of the wish, as well as which temple and deity he was offering incense and kowtowing to. Once the wish was fulfilled, no matter how far it was in the future, he had to come back to fulfill the wish. Seeing Chen Pingan's solemn expression, Pei Qian was so scared that she did not dare to make a wish and only offered incense. Otherwise, when she thought of rushing from Longquan County to Qinghuan Country to fulfill the wish, she felt that if she did not die of exhaustion, her intestines would turn green with regret and she would cry half to death on the way. Moreover, when she went in to kowtow and offer incense, Chen Pingan also had a rule. He said that the money for offering incense could not be borrowed from others and must be paid by Pei Qian herself. Fortunately, along the way Chen Pingan had asked Pei Qian to run errands several times. The skinny little girl received quite a few silver taels. After changing them into copper coins, it was enough for her to offer incense at the temple. Pei Qian did not feel that Chen Pingan was stingy with these few copper coins. She increasingly felt that Chen Pingan was much more generous to her, his first disciple, than to Old Wei and the other 3. This made Pei Qian very happy. During the awakening of hibernation, in the wilderness of a small county in Qinghuan Country, even though they were more than 100 li away, Chen Pingan and the others could still feel the earth trembling and the mountains shaking. In the distance, dust flew up, covering the sky and the sun. There was a huge monster with a vague outline, as if it was in great pain, roaring towards the sky. For a moment, countless birds in the forest flapped their wings and flew away. Chen Pingan thought for a while, then let Wei Xian and Sui Yuyu rush over first to see if there were any innocent people harmed. Right now, his injuries had not completely healed, and he also had to weigh the compatibility between the lake of spiritual energy and the pure Jinqi. Although his martial arts realm was still at the bottleneck of the 5th level, his true strength was only at the level of the 4th level. Wei Xian held the sweet Du Jiaxi. Sui Yuyu carried the sword of infatuation on his back. Both of them were good at both offense and defense. Even if they were in danger, it would not be difficult for them to escape unscathed. Chen Pingan didn't deliberately hasten his pace. When Sui Yuyu and Wei Xian returned, they said that there was the so-called Earth Bull over there. A large group of cultivators from the mountains and lakes had somehow found this Earth Bull that had been hibernating here for hundreds of years. They wanted to kill it and obtain the heavenly materials and earthly treasures from its body. However, they were stopped by 2 meddlesome people. One was a young Taoist priest with a peachwood sword, and the other was a bearded man with a saber. The 2 sides did not come to an agreement and started to fight. There was a great disparity in strength between the 2 sides. Besieging and killing one side was inevitable. There was even a Jin Dan cultivator personally presiding over the situation. Chen Pingan patted the sword cultivating gourd and jumped up high. Flying swords 1 and 15 flew out of the gourd. Chen Pingan stepped on the flying sword step by step and hurried away like an immortal riding the wind. The 4 people in the painting looked at each other. Pei Qian held the mountain walking stick and looked left and right. What's going on? Sui Yuyu flashed away. Zhu Lian laughed heartily and followed closely behind. Another fight to fight, this feels great. Wei Xian carried Pei Qian on his back. Lu Baixiang followed silently. It was a little strange. Why did Chen Pingan forget himself like this? Was there an acquaintance over there? But Chen Pingan came from Lizhu Cave and lived in Mud Bottle Alley. Even if he was an acquaintance, shouldn't he be the 9th realm warrior Jing Dafeng, the 10th realm great master Li Er, the sword was Chao Shi and the lord of heaven Xie? Chen Pingan's hometown was full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. It was a little unreasonable. Even if an old monster of the Ascendant Realm suddenly appeared one day, Lu Baixiang and the other 4 people in the painting would not be too shocked. However, if a small character in the middle 5 realms suddenly appeared and said that he was Chen Pingan's friend, the 4 of them would not be used to it. Even if Chen Pingan had 2 flying swords to help him, he was still injured after all. His pure genuine chi was somewhat hindered, so his speed was still about the same as Sui Yuyu's group on the ground. In a huge call with countless broken stones, a yellow earth bull that was seriously injured and had to show its true form was lying in a pool of blood. In front of it stood the embarrassed young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman. The 2 of them stood back to back, surrounded by more than 20 chi cultivators like wolves. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a young man dressed in white came. It was unknown whether he rode the wind or the sword. He floated in the air like a real immortal. The immortal master in white fell quickly and landed on the ground. After taking 5 or 6 steps lightly, he walked to the front of the 2 people and raised his palms to them with a smile. The young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman were stunned and could not believe it. The young Taoist priest rubbed his eyes and then a smile appeared in his clear eyes. The young Taoist priest and the bearded swordsman each stretched out a palm and hit the young immortal master's palm heavily. There was no more depression on their faces. The 2 of them were in high spirits and were very happy. Chen Pingan looked at the 2 people. At this moment, his eyes were brighter than Pei Qian's eyes. He held the hands of the 2 friends and laughed. I knew it. In the world, only my 2 friends, Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia, are willing to do such a thankless thing. They hid their burning gazes, but some of the little tricks that LV Yangzhen figured out revealed his true thoughts. He would deal with them together with the Earth Bull and make a shocking deal, which was enough to make everyone on the scene rich overnight. At most, they would stay away from the Qingwan kingdom. They were rogue cultivators who were regarded as wild dogs by the immortals on the mountain. They were originally rootless duckweeds. Besides, even if the sky fell, there were still tall people to hold it up. Therefore, LV Yangzhen and the others subconsciously glanced at the golden core earth immortal a few times. The origin of this master was unknown. Half a year ago, he had roped them in and roughly explained that there was a great monster of the earth bull species in this place. It had been hiding in a broken dragon vein with a long history for more than 200 years. It had accumulated the cultivation of the Dragon Gate realm, which was equivalent to that of a chi cultivator. Once it broke through to the golden core realm and formed its gold core, the Qingwan kingdom would inevitably usher in a world-shaking tragedy. At that time, there would be countless casualties in the several counties and cities within a radius of 1,000 li. Therefore, it had to be suppressed and killed before it formed its gold core, so as to prevent it from bringing disaster to the country. LV Yangzhen and the other two unaffiliated cultivators who had temporarily formed a group to travel and search for treasures would have laughed out loud after hearing this righteous reason if they were not afraid of this person's cultivation of the golden core realm. The reason why he had temporarily formed an alliance with the other two and traveled together to Qingwan and Qingshan was because one of the siblings was a rare earthly cultivator. At this moment, the brother and sister had already quietly drawn closer to him. This time, LV Yangzhen and the female cultivator had contributed greatly to being able to get a share of the golden core cultivator's dish. LV Yangzhen was skilled in formations and was able to suppress the commotion caused by the Earth Bull's backflip, so as to avoid attracting the attention of the orthodox immortals. In the end, they had been busy for half a day fighting to the death with a beast, but in the end they had to work for someone else. The female cultivator's proficiency in techniques was an important prerequisite for the Golden Core Earth Immortal to be willing to recruit the three of them. This immortal had only roughly circled the hiding place of the Earth Bull. As for the specific location, he was still unable to find it. Therefore, this female cultivator who did not know how to fight came in handy. The woman was dressed in bright clothes and looked like a married woman. She was a fifth realm chi cultivator. Her talent could not be considered good, but among the unaffiliated cultivators she was not bad. She had a good impression of LV Yangzhen. This time she had participated in the scheme of a Golden Core Earth Immortal. At the very least, the two siblings and LV Yangzhen could be considered honest with each other. Using the ripples in her heart, she quietly asked, "He has come with ill intentions. He's clearly a friend of those two. What should we do?" LV Yangzhen wiped his face. "Let's wait and see." The woman nodded. In this encirclement she could be considered the most detached. After the curtains to the battle had been raised, she was even more leisurely than her brother and LV Yangzhen. It could even be said that she had nothing to do. This was because she was an earthly scholar from a side branch of the school of Yin Yang. The woman's brother was a muscular man of 8 feet. He held a broad axe in his hand and wore a set of green armor engraved with many talisman characters. His face was covered in blood, but fortunately, they were all external injuries that left his skin open. By chance, he had taken the path of a military cultivator, but it was only in appearance. He had only obtained a lost secret manual from a third-rate immortal that refined the body and consolidated the spirit. Coupled with the fact that he had spent all his wealth in his early years to purchase this set of spiritual armor, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. He was rather famous around the borders of the kingdom of Qingshan. However, the one who was truly making money was not this muscular man in armor with impressive battle prowess, but his earthly scholar sister. The chi practitioners in the mountains, especially those who did not have a teacher or sect, had a great deal of knowledge when it came to finding treasures. Other than the so-called chance of the great path that they had stumbled upon, they could also find clues from the local county records. In addition, there were maps hidden in the yamen. They needed to examine them on the spot and ask the local woodcutters, fishermen, and other common people who often traveled mountains and rivers. Only then could they find a chance to make a fortune. This required the help of magistrates and earthly scholars to open up the mountains and ask for directions. Magistrates were rumored to be able to see the face of the world clearly. They could use the stars to divine the fate of people and the fate of countries. Earthly scholars were skilled at finding dragon points. They were particularly sensitive to the minute changes in spiritual chi. Once they found it, they would have to pass through a hurdle. The heavenly treasures of the world were often closely guarded by ghosts and spirits. This had always been the most fatal obstacle for the earthly cultivators. Independent cultivators often traveled alone. They were not like those mountain sects with immortal dwellings. Once they found a location like this, they could move out in full force. If they really could not, they would find 1 or 2 immortals with whom they were friends, so it was very rare for them to fail. Once the independent cultivators were certain that they could not obtain the treasures by themselves, they could only find a partner. As for why they did not find the immortal sects on the mountain, wouldn't the chances of success be higher? Firstly, the benefits were too small. They were clearly the first to discover the heavenly treasures and ancient treasures, but they could easily end up with leftovers. Furthermore, there was an even more tragic ending, which was to be secretly killed by the immortal dwellings. One had to know that independent cultivators had always been despised and hated by orthodox immortal masters. They were lonely souls and wild ghosts among the chi cultivators, vermin of the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and scrupulous cultivators of the evil path. Why did the Jade Raw Realm Cultivator Senior in the history of Betel Fairy have such a high reputation among the independent cultivators of the Aquarius continent? It was because this senior had once spoken out the hearts of thousands of independent cultivators. I just want to stand and eat my fill. The names were recorded. One was in the sect's ancestral hall, and the other was in a certain imperial court near the mountain gate. This kind of chi cultivator was known as the immortal master of records. If they were not listed, they would be considered as independent cultivators. The imperial court and local officials did not like this kind of independent cultivators. They were fickle and easily caused trouble. They were erratic and often had to clean up their messes. In particular, the independent cultivators who had reached the middle 5 states were almost all decisive in killing. They were ruthless people who had forcefully opened a path in countless bloody storms. They were temperamental and did not care about worldly affairs. When they walked in the human world, they did things without scruples. However, it was certainly an exaggeration to say that all the independent cultivators were desperados who did not care about human life at all. It was just that the immortals on the mountain, the imperial court, and the righteous sects in the Jianghu were all so exaggerated. Therefore, year after year, the independent cultivators were like rats crossing the street. The independent cultivators who had some strength would ask for an identity from a certain imperial court, or get an identity that was very fake in a certain sect on the mountain. They would travel in the mountains under the name of the immortal master of records. LV Yangzhen's group of 3 because one of them was a formation master who was not good at attacking, one of them was a military cultivator who focused on defense, and one of them was a land warrior who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. They were quite steady. However, there was another group of 7 or 8 people. When they looked at the young immortal master, besides the implicit judgment of judging the situation, there was also a trace of ruthlessness in their eyes. Most of the people in this group were familiar with each other. They were unfamiliar chi trainers in the territory near the Qinghuan kingdom. Most of them took advantage of the excitement of the water and land Taoist field and the heavenly grand ritual to try their luck. This time they contributed a lot to the encirclement of the Earth Bull monster. There were military cultivators who were good at close combat, unorthodox Taoists who were proficient in talisman puppets, ghost cultivators who used a soul-summoning banner, and a strong man whose natal item was actually 3 rattan tokens, a tulip token and an iron talisman shield. He was responsible for defending his companions who could not dodge in time. There was an old sword cultivator who was still in the 5th state. After leaving the aperture acupoint, his flying sword condensed into a substance. It was completely black, more than 2 feet long, wrapped in wind and thunder, and had a strong smell of blood. Because he had not entered the cave-dwelling realm and really opened up a mansion, his Reiki was not enough to support the flying sword for too long. Usually, he would return to his natal aperture acupoint to be nourished after a successful attack. He would spend a lot of money to replenish the Reiki of his aperture acupoint and wait for the next attack. Half of the fatal wounds on the yellow earth bull were caused by the flying sword of this old sword cultivator. The leader of this group was an old man in a black robe. His mount was a huge black fox with 5 tails. The old man turned his head and looked at the Jindan cultivator who was hiding his head and tail. His meaning was very simple. You are the guy who used the Reiki to exchange for the treasures of the earth bull monster. Previously, everyone had put in a lot of effort and did what should be done. Now, a sword cultivator with unknown origins came to cause trouble. You have the final say on whether to fight or to retreat. If you want to fight to the death and provoke this young sword cultivator, the reward will not be the small amount of money before. If you want to retreat, anyway you have already paid the deposit before, so the 2 sides went their separate ways. The Jindan cultivator who was hovering in the air with the wind did not use telepathy to inform the 20 or so individual cultivators. The earth immortal whose face was covered by the mist of mountains and rivers looked at the white-robed young man and directly said, "Do you really want to cut off people's path to wealth? I can promise you that as long as you are willing to withdraw from the call and not interfere in this matter, I will take 10% of the treasures that should belong to me from this yellow earth bull and convert it into Reiki. After the matter, I will personally hand it over with both hands." After Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia's explanation, Qin Pingan already knew the general reason of the matter. The yellow earth bull in the pool of blood behind him was a monster of the earth bull species in the world. It was born with a gentle temperament. The so-called earth bull turning over in the marketplace had nothing to do with it. It had been hiding here for more than 200 years because it wanted to repair the broken ancient dragon's vein and use it as a place to open a mansion in the future. For so many years, it had been lying in its true form. Its body was like a mountain range piled up with mountain rocks, and the mountain had long been covered with lush trees. The real earth bull turning over was the turtle fish, mole cricket, earthworms, and giant frogs hibernating underground. These mountain spirits and water monsters liked to be quiet and did not like to move. With their innate talent, they liked to connect their huge bodies with the roots of the mountain and slowly absorb the spiritual energy of the earth. They were afraid of spring thunder. Once they reached the cave-dwelling realm of the middle 5 realms, or when they formed the golden core, they needed to swallow the spiritual energy of the world. Because they had been hiding underground all year long and nibbling away at the luck of the mountain roots, once they broke through, it involved the opportunity of the great Tao. Their nature would often burst forth and their ferocious nature would be revealed. Therefore there was the saying of the earth bull turning over, and the turtle fish turning over, which led to many tragedies of earthquakes. Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia were previously the targets of recruitment. However, although Zhang Shanfeng's cultivation was not high, he was proficient in the origins of many mountain spirits and ghosts. He was also very familiar with the roots and nature of the yellow earth bull, so he rejected the other party's invitation. How many small snow coins could they earn in a year? Now that I've said the good words and done the good deed, it's time for me to talk about something more practical. Chen Pingan looked around and said indifferently, money doesn't just fall from the sky. I do have some small snow coins with me. If you're interested, you can take them with your own abilities. But if you can't take them away, then I'll take your lives. The Golden Core Earth Immortal suddenly put away the 50 small snow coins and asked with a smile, aren't you worried that I'll just walk away? I can't carry a yellow earth bull and parade it through the streets, but with 50 small snow coins I can come and go as I please. The Golden Core Earth Immortal asked again, aren't you afraid that I'll buy your lives with the 50 small snow coins I've already got? Everyone, including me, earned twice the amount of money. Why not? Chin Pingan stretched out a hand, just walk and buy as much as you want. As long as you're happy. I've been annoyed with you for a long time. Please run away or commit murder so that I can kill you. The Golden Core Earth Immortal was silent, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. All the wild cultivators were waiting for the Golden Core Earth Immortal's decision. At this moment, the severely injured yellow earth bull spoke in human language and looked at the back of the snow-white robe. Immortal Master, why do you have to do this? Chin Pingan did not turn around. He reached out to hold the blade-strengthening gourd at his waist and said softly, I think you're more human than most people. It's that simple. From now on, I hope you can continue to cultivate well. In the future, there will be another kind Golden Core Earth Immortal. 6. (376). The Jindan cultivator suddenly laughed, so you're from the legalism school, no wonder. Chin Pingan did not know why he misunderstood. The Earth Immortal, who should be familiar with the world of Qinghuan, smiled and said, then it's time to learn from each other. The atmosphere in the valley suddenly became tense. The wild cultivators were used to the scene of falling out with each other. People die for wealth and birds die for food. Who would not be willing to earn an extra 50 small coins? If they could earn clean money, of course they would earn it. When had they ever earned dirty money? For those itinerant cultivators who were recruited by the imperial court, or those who asked for the title of Reverend of Immortal Fuji, the stepping stone to help them ask for the amulet was most likely to do some shady business first, such as helping the imperial court to assassinate the generals and ministers of the enemy states, or helping Immortal Fuji to solve the grudges and vendettas that were not suitable for him to do personally. The Earth Immortal looked around leisurely as if he was inspecting the battlefield. Chin Pingan asked, do you know that once a bull chooses to turn over, it will affect the earth veins and bring disaster to tens of thousands of people? The Earth Immortal hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and said frankly, at my level, of course I know this. The wild cultivators were not too surprised about this. Only the formation master Lu Yangzhen frowned, but he hid it very well. Chin Pingan asked again, then can you control the earthquake? The Earth Immortal did not give an answer directly but smiled and said, this is not easy. Either according to your friend, by burning money, we can set up a large-scale array to stabilize the earth veins and reduce the earthquake, or we need a chi cultivator to have a natural spiritual treasure similar to the pearl and refine it into a natal item to stabilize the earth veins. Seeing that Chin Pingan did not ask any more questions, the Earth Immortal looked at Chin Pingan carefully again. See you later. The Jindan cultivator seemed to have given up on the idea of learning from each other. He looked at the backbone of the few rogue cultivators, such as the black-robed old man who rode the five-tailed black fox and the formation master Lu Yangzhen. They told each other the location of the loot distribution, through telepathy, paid the rest of the payment and then flew away. All the individual cultivators left with the Earth Immortal, but the direction was slightly different. Presumably, the Jindan cultivator would pay the immortal coins to the 4 groups at different times and places, so as to avoid the unequal distribution of the immortal coins. Zhang Shanfeng lightly punched Qin Pingan and joked, "Not bad. You're treating the summer money like snow." Su Yuanxia has already stood up, sheathed her saber and combed her blood-stained beard with her fingers. "We're safe for now. I'm just afraid that this Jindan Earth Immortal is a local snake with bad intentions. If we can't handle it, we shouldn't wait for the debate between Buddhism and Taoism in the capital of Qinghuan Kingdom. We should leave as soon as possible." Zhang Shanfeng hesitated. "Qin Pingan lent me the True Four sword and that dagger of yours. Don't tell me you're going to leave them in the governor's estate?" Qin Pingan corrected. "I'm not lending them." Although Su Yuanxia's heart ached, she still looked determined. Such a big governor's estate doesn't have legs. We'll have a chance to get it back in the future. If the governor's estate is the mastermind of this siege, we'll be walking into a trap. The emperor of Qinghuan Kingdom has always been arrogant and unruly, and the governor is the emperor's confidant. We'll easily become the target of public criticism. Moreover, we won't be able to defend ourselves. Zhang Shanfeng used to be a stubborn person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have abandoned Confucianism and become a Taoist priest in the mountains. This time, he traveled south from the North Continent and traveled to the Aquarius continent. He had seen a lot and gained a lot. After listening to Su Yuanxia's explanation, he no longer insisted on his opinion. Qin Pingan pondered for a long time before he came up with a reasonable explanation. It could not only prevent Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia from being involved in his treacherous affairs, but also allow them to go to the governor's estate without worry. "I had a chance encounter in an academy in the Tongya continent and obtained a jade pendant. It can be used to save our lives at a critical moment. Although Qinghuan Kingdom is filled with all kinds of people and we can't let our guard down, but with that jade pendant, it's equivalent to the academy's gentleman's presence. Ordinary Jindan and Yuanyin cultivators wouldn't dare to kill us. Therefore, it shouldn't be a problem for us to take back the True Four sword and the dagger." Treating people with sincerity was indeed important. However, if one were to put people in danger because of this and encounter a calamity similar to Qin Pingan's encounter with Du Mao, then it wouldn't be sincerity. It would be heartless and ignorant of worldly affairs. Pei Qian and the other 4 people had already approached. They were very curious about the identity of the young Taoist priest and the bearded ranger. It seemed that they weren't from Qin Pingan's hometown, but were friends that he met on his travels. The 4 of them could see that the young Taoist priest was only a qi cultivator of an ordinary realm, while the bearded swordsman was a martial artist of the 5th realm with a decent foundation. Was that all? Pei Qian had been secretly sizing up the 2 people. At this moment she was holding a walking stick in her hand and the bamboo blade and sword made by Qin Pingan were hanging from her waist. She stood beside Qin Pingan and smiled, "Hello Taoist brother, hello Uncle Swordsman. I'm Pei Qian, my master's first disciple." Su Yuanxia laughed heartily. She had gained seniority for nothing. Although Zhang Shanfeng's shoulder had been pierced by the sword cultivator's life-bound flying sword, his face was still somewhat pale after applying the wound medicine. However, seeing this skinny girl who claimed to be Qin Pingan's first disciple, the young Taoist priest's lips curled up. He smiled and greeted the little girl, "Hello Pei Qian. How old are you?" Pei Qian smiled and said, "I'm only 7 years old. That's why I'm only this tall." Qin Pingan gave her a chestnut. Pei Qian, who was willing to suffer for her pride, immediately said with a sad face, "I'm actually 11 years old." Qin Pingan turned around and squatted down. He turned to look at Su Yuanxia. "You're so heavily injured. What should we do?" Su Yuanxia and Zhang Shanfeng squatted down together. The bearded man stroked his beard and muttered, "Let's not talk about that sneaky Earth Immortal Jindan. Let's just talk about that group of wild cultivators riding the Black Fox. They have bad temperaments. If we leave Earth Ox alone, we'll die sooner or later. What you said earlier was true. No one's money falls from the sky or is blown by the wind. Let's send Buddha to the west and let it follow us in its true form for the time being. When its injuries are better, we'll find a place where it can hide and it won't be too late to separate. However, in this way, Qin Pingan, the burden on your shoulders will be heavier." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "How long has it been since we last met? You're already treating me as an outsider?" Su Yuanxia laughed and said, "It's not like you're spending my money to be polite." Pei Qian was like a chick pecking at rice. She deeply agreed. It really didn't cost her money to be polite and flattering. This bearded uncle could be considered as her kindred spirit. Compared to Pei Qian, the four people in the picture scroll saw more and thought further. The four people on Wei Xian's right and Sui Xiong's right had never seen Qin Pingan ask for other people's opinions. Moreover, he naturally listened to them. It should be known that along the way the four of them had fought and killed many times. Sui Xiong's right had died many times. Qin Pingan's various performances had unknowingly displayed an extremely tough, tenacious and opinionated side. However, at the same time, he had given sufficient respect to the four people. Even Wei Xian had to admit that the so-called overlord's potential, that he had flattered Qin Pingan, was actually not a big exaggeration. If it was during the chaotic times of the Lotus Blossom Blessed Land, perhaps Qin Pingan would be his opponent on the battlefield. Qin Pingan looked at the yellow earth ox and said, "Can you appear in human form? If I remember correctly, after reaching the Sea Viewing Realm or the Dragon Gate Realm, you should be able to transform into human form, right? I have a bottle of healing pills. If you consume it in human form, the effect will be even better." Before leaving Old Dragon City, Madame Gouet had sent someone to bring a treasure chest made of cinnamon wood. There were 12 bottles of pills inside. She did not spend a lot of money. Every bottle was needed by an Earth Immortal. Instead, it was the most cost-effective for each step of the middle 5 realms. After hearing Qin Pingan's question, the Dragon Gate Realm monster that had injured its Dao Foundation shook its head. Zhang Shanfeng explained, "Compared to ordinary mountain spirits and water monsters, it is more special. Just like a water dragon, the purer the 5 elements, the harder it is to transform into human form. For example, it needs to reach the Golden Elixir realm." Qin Pingan suddenly understood and nodded, "It's okay. This time, when we go to the Governor General's manor, we will try our best to avoid the big cities and choose the scenic paths." Zhang Shanfeng smiled and said, "We are familiar with this. In these 2 years, we have visited many places in Qinghuan and Qingshan Kingdom." After Qin Pingan took out a pill that was suitable for Qi cultivators of the Dragon Gate realm, the yellow earth ox could already struggle to get up after consuming it for half an hour. Although it was still covered in wounds, it could walk without hindrance. After all, the earth monster in the world was known for its tough physique and amazing endurance. Furthermore, the Dragon Gate monster had confessed that it had refined a green glazed landscape vase as one of its natal items. It could store the spiritual qi of the world. Qin Pingan knew what it meant, so he directly gave all the pills in the vase to the yellow bull. He allowed it to store them in its natal green glazed vase and slowly absorbed the medicinal qi to heal its injuries. After the yellow earth ox stepped on the ground, its eyes were actually filled with tears as it stared at the young man in a snow-white robe in front of it. "Immortal Master Gaofeng, how do you repay me?" it said guiltily and uneasily. "I have been cultivating here for more than 200 years. I only took a fancy to the dragon vein here. Previously, I obtained 2 spirit weapons and dharma treasures by chance and have already refined them into my natal items. Other than that, I did not plunder any other treasures of heaven and earth. Immortal Master has saved my life and even continued my Tao." Pei Qian sighed. "It was all my fault. How come he had just left Old Dragon City and he had already become a loser? At Beatail Ferry it almost lost 2 snowflakes. At this call, it was even more of a loss." Qin Pingan said with a smile, "It's okay. If you really want to, after your injuries have healed and formed your golden core, you can travel around as a human. In the future you can go to my hometown. The scenery there is beautiful and the spiritual qi is abundant. You are welcome to be a guest." When Qin Pingan said this, Su Yuanxia said with deep meaning, "Why wait until you form your golden core? After your injuries have healed, you can go directly to your hometown. Maybe you can form your golden core there. With the saint overseeing the destiny, you don't have to worry about the earth ox turning over." The yellow earth ox's eyes were confused and seemed to be puzzled. Qin Pingan carefully considered whether this was feasible or not. Su Yuanxia already said with a smile, "No hurry. We can still walk a long distance. Let's see if your temperament is right before making a decision. If your temperament is not right, it's better to leave a good impression. If we are fated to meet again in the future, it's better than being together all the time and then having a bad relationship. A good relationship would be wasted." Zhang Shanfeng said in agreement, "It's feasible." Qin Pingan had no objection. The group walked slowly and left the valley, heading towards the famous governor's office in Qinghuan Kingdom. Qin Pingan, Zhang Shanfeng, and Su Yuanxia talked about some of their travels. The 2 of them also told Qin Pingan about their Jianghu stories after they parted ways at Qingfu Square. The royal family of the Tang family of Qinghuan Kingdom had always been titled as kings but not vassals. The princes and princesses all stayed in the capital and had their own mansions. Moreover, these mansions only had the right to live but not ownership. Once they lost their titles, they would be taken back by the imperial clan court. There were 5 governors' offices in Qinghuan Kingdom. Other than the 4 borderlands and 4 mansions, there was another one in the central region. It had great power and was in charge of transportation, salt and iron, as well as many other vital affairs of the country. Ordinary monarchs were afraid of the danger of having a powerful official in their hands and the worry of having a separate government. In the hundreds of years of Qinghuan Kingdom's history, the country was prosperous and the people were at peace. Moreover, it had always been a performance that outsiders couldn't understand even if they cracked their heads. Could it be that none of the high officials of the border who were far away from the emperor had ever had any ambition? Each and every one of them was conscientious in their duties and worked hard for the emperor of the Tang family until they died. No matter what, the Qinghuan Kingdom located in the southeast of the Aquarius continent was like a paradise, a pure land. Especially after the war in the central region was in full swing, it caused many scholars to move south and abandon the north. The 3 countries of Qinghuan, Qingshan, and Yunshao absorbed tens of thousands of descendants of powerful families who moved south. Among them, the Qinghuan Kingdom had the most people. Of the current 5 governors of Qinghuan Kingdom, the 4 closest to the border all relied on their military exploits on the battlefield or their status as relatives. Only the governor's office in the middle had always been surnamed Wei. The current owner relied on the inheritance of his ancestors and passed it down from generation to generation. Moreover, for the past 300 years, the family's bloodline had always been supported by a single seedling. It seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but it just didn't fall. It had been an iron-cropped governor for over 300 years. The current governor Wei, the one who had asked Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxiao for the Jinwu sword and dagger, after the inheritance was passed down, he no longer traveled around the mountains and rivers. Instead, he lived in seclusion. However, relying on the various deeds and rumors from his early years, his reputation in the 3 countries of Qinghuan was not small. He was skilled in Qingzi, cursive writing, annotation of Buddhist scriptures, and painting of Buddha statues. Especially the latter, there was a saying that it was unparalleled for a time. It was difficult to obtain it. Regarding this Governor Wei, who was in the prime of his life, his reputation in the scholarly and literary circles was extremely good. He was praised as having a graceful bearing, a candid and honest person, solemn as the wind at the foot of a pine tree. Among the noble ladies and young ladies of the capital, there were even more favorable comments. It was rumored that when this governor was traveling, he had entered the mountains with several good friends to visit immortals. He was mistaken by a woodcutter as a banished immortal and kowtowed to him, exclaiming that he was an immortal. This time, the capital of Qinghuan Kingdom was holding a large-scale debate between Buddhism and Taoism. Governor Wei would head to the capital to be responsible for the safety of the capital. He was allowed to bring 6,000 elite soldiers up north to be stationed in important areas around the capital. From this, it could be seen how much the emperor of the Tang family relied on and trusted him. It was to the point that there were some groundless rumors in the Jianghu, saying that the ruler and official were homosexual. It should be known that for this debate between Buddhism and Taoism, the 2 rulers of Yunshao country and the He family of Qingshan country would both come to the capital of Qinghuan Kingdom. Furthermore, for Governor Wei to bring soldiers up north was something that the 2 rulers of other countries did not regret. This was even more strange. On this day, a tall and sturdy young man came to visit the governor's manor. He did not disturb any outsiders. Governor Wei Liang was receiving guests in his study. Wei Liang was only 30 years old and had a handsome appearance. Wei Liang was in a high position, but he was very casual with this young man. It was not a slightly distant politeness, nor was it a deliberate warmth. The tall and sturdy young man was clearly an old acquaintance of this governor. He did not sit across from Wei Liang. Instead, he stood under the bookshelf, flipping through things. Wei Liang smiled. Jiang Yun, it seems that the family favors you and is willing to hand this matter over to you. This way it will save me a lot of trouble. When the time comes, I will be in the light and you will be in the dark. I trust that this debate between Buddhism and Taoism at the end of spring will not cause too much of a disturbance. The tall and sturdy young man was the one who lived at the end of the small alley at the Beetail Ferry. He had probably left half of his hometown and used a camouflage technique on the metal chain belt that he had refined into his natal item to avoid attracting attention in the city. The young man called Jiang Yun casually flipped through a book. There were many side notes, densely packed. Furthermore, there was a mixture of black ink and red ink. Clearly, Governor Wei Liang had read this book more than once. Jiang Yun turned his head. "Old Wei, you must not let your guard down. Your emperor has made such a big mess. Right now, the situation is very complicated. Other than me, there seems to be other people hiding in the family, and their cultivation is definitely not low." Wei Liang smiled but did not speak. Jiang Yun was somewhat helpless. A tiny Qinghuan kingdom dares to hold a debate between Buddhism and Taoism, and purposely make such a big scene. The emperor of the Tang family does not understand the danger of the conflict between the three religions, but do you not understand? Our Yunlin Jiang family, how did we migrate to the Aquarius continent? This time when I left the B-tail ferry, I purposely picked some lively places along the way. It is not an exaggeration to say that the streets are now filled with Qi refinement warriors, not to mention your capital. Are you really not afraid? Wei Liang placed a wooden box on the table. After opening it, a cold light filled the room. He took out a literary knife from the wooden box and smiled. "Because of your master, you will have sympathy for the uncultivated cultivators. However, I will not be like that. Before the end of spring, as long as it is an itinerant cultivator with a criminal record, regardless of whether he committed a crime within the borders of Qinghuan Kingdom or elsewhere, I will catch him several times. Whether he is dead or alive, I will act according to the rules. Even a rat's feces can spoil a pot of porridge, let alone a nest of rats that have entered the country." Although the literary knife of an elegant scholar was a small item, it was regarded as the weapon of a gentleman. In the wooden box on the table in front of Wei Liang, there were nearly 10 ancestral literary knives, neatly placed. "377. They actually found a bamboo hut that had been abandoned for many years by a lake in the mountains. The original appearance of the hut was still vaguely recognizable. Presumably when it was first built, it was very exquisite. It was most likely built by a rich hermit who liked to fish. The group settled down here each with their own tasks. Chen Pingan went to cut 2 slender old bamboo poles, one long and one short. When he returned, Zhu Lian had already lit a bonfire. Chen Pingan squatted beside the bonfire and slowly smoked the bamboo poles to increase the toughness of the fishing rods. Otherwise, if something big in the water came into contact with light, the bamboo poles would break with a slight tug. Chen Pingan handed the short bamboo pole to Pei Qian, asking her to learn from him. Inside the bamboo hut, Zhu Lian was exchanging knowledge with the bearded man. The two of them sat a little far away from the others. Zhu Lian seemed to be showing off the immortal book that the old man surnamed Sun gave him. The man and woman fought, sweating profusely. The young Taoist and Liu Baixiang sat on the ground playing chess. Wei Xian squatted at the side, still waiting for the outcome to be revealed. The yellow earth ox was keeping watch in the forest near the bamboo hut. Facing the beautiful landscape, Sui Yuyu left the bamboo hut while there was no one around. He took off his boots and sat on the edge of the bamboo raft-like foundation. He put his snow-white feet into the water and placed the infatuation sword across his knees. His hands pressed on the 2 ends of the scabbard as he looked into the distance. The fresh air of the mountains refreshed his mind. Chen Pingan swung the 2 fishing rods a few times to test the size of the arc. Pei Qian stood beside him and imitated him. The 2 of them, one old and one young, came outside the bamboo hut. Chen Pingan began to tie the fishing line and hook. Pei Qian followed suit, but if she missed some details, Chen Pingan would help her retie the line and tighten the hook. Then he took Pei Qian to the lake in the distance and lifted the rocks, looking for a kind of aquatic insect that looked like a mole cricket. In the end, Chen Pingan did not fish, but let Pei Qian fish alone. He put the long fishing rod into the jade pendant that Zheng Dafeng gave him. Inside the jade pendant, there were not only old but not discarded straw sandals, fishing hooks, fishing lines and other inconspicuous common goods, but also the slightly more valuable wine that the immortal in the well had brewed. There was also the yellowed parasol leaf, which was said to contain 2 sets of protective formations that originated from Taiping Mountain and Fuyao sect, as well as a large pile of money that the Tongya sect had repaid for the Guyu. Pei Qian was not a patient person by nature, but with Chen Pingan by his side, plus the fact that he had been copying books and practicing calligraphy for such a long time, he had more or less become impatient. He just stared at the water quietly, wishing that he could drag a big black fish that weighed more than 100 pounds ashore in the next moment. Chen Pingan was thinking about the 4th style of the mountain shaking fist manual, which was named Heaven and Earth Stance. It was a boxing stance with a big tone. In addition to the detailed introduction of the operation of genuine chi, the posture of this boxing stance, which combined movement and stillness, was really strange. The three realms required the later generations who studied the mountain-shaking fist to practice it upside down, using their palms, fists, and a finger as supporting points and then walking. As for the heaven and earth stance, the book said, "A man of indomitable spirit who learns my boxing skills must turn the world upside down with my fists." No wonder the barefoot old man, after reading the mountain-shaking fist manual, said that this boxing stance was mediocre, and that it was useless except for its big tone. Chen Pingan gently patted the ground, flipped his body gracefully, and used one palm to support the bamboo raft on the ground. When Pei Qian turned her head and saw this scene, she wanted to laugh. Chen Pingan, who was standing upside down, pointed at the water with his free hand, indicating for Pei Qian to focus on fishing. Pei Qian obediently turned her head. Chen Pingan changed his palm into a fist, using his fist to support himself, and then using only one finger to support himself, he slightly raised his body. Using the operation of the mountain-shaking fist's genuine chi from beginning to end, there was no difficulty at all. Chen Pingan closed his eyes. Aside from using one finger to support himself, 2 fingers of his other hand were pressed together in front of him. Of the 18 stops of sword chi that Alliance had taught him, he was about to break through the final bottleneck between the 12th and 13th stops. Chen Pingan had originally not been in a hurry. He had only taught Pei Qian the 18 stops in the dusty medicine shop in Old Dragon City. Not long after leaving Beetail Ferry, Pei Qian had told Chen Pingan, saying that she had only earned 2 or 3 copper coins. She was a little excited but didn't think it was anything special. She had already told Chen Pingan that she could freely circulate her genuine chi up to the 12th stop. This made Chen Pingan feel a little helpless. He could only continue to remind Pei Qian to avoid being arrogant and impatient, and to be down to earth. Chen Pingan couldn't help but feel a little anxious or perhaps worried. If Pei Qian continued to climb the martial path at an astonishing speed, there would be a day when this joking disciple of hers would walk side by side with her master Chen Pingan. In the future she would walk further and further away. She would climb high alone and look down on the world. A disciple doesn't have to be inferior to their master. This was what Chen Pingan had said to Zheng Dafeng. And the student surpasses the master. This was a classic point in Lord Wensheng's persuasion. Chen Pingan didn't care that Pei Qian's martial path was further and higher than his own. Chen Pingan, however, was worried that he was Pei Qian's teacher and protector. If Pei Qian went astray one day, what would he do? Just like how the flood dragon that threw the snake gall stone at the young flood dragon indifferently said, "If it's an ill-fated relationship, I'll cut it off with my sword." Could Chen Pingan do that? Taking a step back, even if he had such a cold heart at that time, Pei Qian's martial arts would be so high that Chen Pingan might not be able to catch up to him. How could he cut it off? In the lotus flower-blessed land, under the guidance of the old Taoist of Donghai, they had traveled through thousands of mountains and rivers. She squatted there and stared at her master's brows. Could it be that her master realized in hindsight and now began to feel sorry for the 50 small summer coins that had been wasted? Chen Pingan opened his eyes and looked at the black charcoal face that had not yet turned white from the wind and the sun. He asked with a smile, "What's wrong?" Pei Qian thought for a moment. "Master, is there something worrying you? Tell me about it." Chen Pingan slightly exerted force on his wrist and turned his body upside down, returning to his normal standing position. Then he sat down cross-legged, somewhat hesitant. The matter was too far away and the reason was too great. Wasn't Pei Qian a little too young now? Would his words and emotions be like a heavy boulder that pressed down on her shoulders? Chen Pingan took off the blade-strengthening gourd and drank a mouthful of medicine wine. The cool breeze of the mountains and rivers gently caressed his face, which made Chen Pingan's state of mind slightly relaxed. One who was less than 100 years old often had worries for 1,000 years. After drinking the wine, Chen Pingan smiled and narrowed his eyes, mocking himself in his heart. Was he a bit like a scholar now? He turned his head and said with a smile, "It's related to you. Do you want to hear it?" Pei Qian swallowed her saliva and immediately began to reflect on what mischievous things she had done along the way. She probably already knew that it was not a small matter, so she said with a bitter face, "Can I not hear it? Wait until I'm a little older and can remember more things. Master, can you tell me more about it?" Chen Pingan touched her little head. "It's not about anything good or bad. It's just some words from my heart. You don't have to worry about being pinched by the chestnut." Without any burden, Pei Qian immediately sat up straight and faced Qin Pingan, who was sitting sideways. Her eyes were smiling. She held the 2 bamboo sabers and swords at her waist and pretended to say, "Master, please speak. I'm all ears." Qin Pingan smiled and turned slightly to sit down. The two of them sat facing each other. He asked, "If one day your saber art, sword art, and fist art are all better than Master's, and then you encounter something where Master says it's right but you think it's wrong, what would you do?" Pei Qian said without hesitation, "I'll listen to Master. What else can I do?" Qin Pingan smiled, "Think about it carefully." Pei Qian began to scratch her head and said with a bitter face, "But I just think that what Master says is right, and what Master says is wrong is wrong." Qin Pingan was silent. Pei Qian had to continue to think about it blindly. Anyway, Master didn't seem to be in a hurry. Pei Qian suddenly asked with a smile, "If one day I'm more powerful than Master, how powerful will I be?" Qin Pingan said, "For example, the old thief Du mentioned by Huang Ting and Du Mao of Tongyi sect. Both of them are in the ascendant realm." Qin Pingan added with a smile, "For the time being we will only talk about cultivation, not good or evil." Pei Qian opened her mouth wide and exclaimed, "Oh my God, if you're so powerful, you must have a mountain of gold and silver at home. Can you count the money? It's too tiring to count money, but if you don't count it clearly, you will be afraid that someone will steal a few. Alas, when can I have the troubles of the rich?" Qin Pingan looked at the tan little girl who was getting more and more worried. He couldn't help laughing, leaned forward and patted Pei Qian's head gently. "In my hometown, there is a military sage, Master Ruan, who is good at forging iron and swords. In retrospect, there is one thing he did very well. When it comes to accepting disciples, Master Ruan will not only look at the aptitude, but also look at whether the person is of the same mind and can walk the same path. He will not find some disciples who are very talented but have different temperaments, or some disciples who will only stand up and fight when their master has a conflict with others." Pei Qian wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, she didn't say anything. Qin Pingan continued, "Back to the original question, if you have a dispute with Master, what should you do? Don't always think that Master is right. Master is not a saint and will make mistakes. We should do what we did today. You and I should sit opposite each other and talk about what is right and wrong. We should listen to the one who is right and wrong. I, Qin Pingan, will not use my identity as your master to suppress your reason. If you are very powerful at that time, you can kill me with a punch, but you can't rely on your high cultivation to do whatever you want regardless of the reason I, Qin Pingan, told you." Pei Qian's tears were glistening. In fact, she didn't quite understand, but she always felt that it was a very sad thing. Especially when Pei Qian heard Qin Pingan say, "Kill me with a punch." Pei Qian was almost sad to death. Pei Qian felt so wrong that he turned around and sat down. He secretly shed tears and didn't look at Qin Pingan, who was talking nonsense. Qin Pingan sat back in his original position, facing the lake. The spring breeze rippled the water surface. He stretched out his palm and raised it again and again. Reason is actually divided into high and low, just like the circle of flowers on the mountain peak. Master once met a little fox demon in a place called Colorful Clothes Country in a rundown temple. She liked to read novels about scholars and beauties and cause trouble to people. She never really harmed people but instead helped to shelter them from the wind and rain. This time we met that yellow earth cow who would rather die than turn over. Then, does this mean that when the demon race attacks the Great Wall of Sword Chi, we can skip the heroic sacrifice of the sword cultivators who have been at the tip of the sword for thousands of years to the south, pity them, and question why the sword cultivators are so cruel? Are there no good people in the demon race? Pei Qian's back was still facing Qin Pingan. She sniffled and said, "I know this. These people don't distinguish between right and wrong, and don't distinguish between reason and size." Qin Pingan drew the biggest circle with one hand, and raised the other hand above his head. "But Master Wenxing and Master Bai, who is rumored to have helped the human race forge the cauldron and draw the mountain map, I think they are the ones who are qualified to talk about the righteous reason. We are far from it." "But why would they be imprisoned in the forest of merits and virtues, and imprisoned in the Xiongjian Tower? Is it because of this that we feel that reason is useless? Is there no good and evil karma in the world?" Pei Qian turned around and sat beside Qin Pingan. She lowered her head and said, "But some bad people live better than good people." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "So in the capital of the Nanyuan Kingdom, the old monk of the Temple of Heart Reflection said that the world will always be in debt to good people." Pei Qian asked softly, "What should we do?" Qin Pingan did not drink the medicine wine in the blade-strengthening gourd. Instead he took out a bottle of osmanthus wine, opened it and took a sip. He smiled and said, "It's probably in the book waiting for us to find it." In the distant forest, the yellow earth ox was prostrating on the ground, deep in thought. Although Sui Yuyu's expression was indifferent, he had been listening attentively. Pei Qian wiped her tears and said with a smile, "Master, not long after we left Betail Ferry when we were cooking, how did you hum that folk song in your hometown? How come there are no lyrics? Hum again, I really want to learn." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "That was taught to me by my best friend. You can make up whatever content you want. In my hometown you can use it to ridicule and scold people. You can use it to relax while working. You can also use it to accompany wine." Qin Pingan drank a mouthful of osmanthus wine and began to hum in a low voice. He pointed at Pei Qian with a smile. "Waiter, I've read some books and learned a lot of words. I've accumulated a lot of knowledge, but I can't sell it for much." "Oh." He was talking about her, Pei Qian. Pei Qian was overjoyed and could not help but blurt out, "Stinky tofu is delicious, but I can't afford it." Qin Pingan smiled knowingly. "There are demons and monsters in the mountains and water ghosts in the lakes and rivers. I was so scared that I turned around and found that I had been away from home for many years." Pei Qian echoed, "Eat stinky tofu." Qin Pingan drank again and pointed elsewhere. Unfortunately, it happened to be Sui Yuyu's side. It did not matter. Which family's little girl has the fragrance of orchids on her body? Why is her face covered in tears? Don't you think it's pitiful? Pei Qian nodded vigorously. "It's so pitiful that you can't eat stinky tofu." Qin Pingan squinted his eyes and smiled. He pointed up and hummed softly, "Teacher, what should we do? There's a little paper kite basking in the sun on a tree branch." Pei Qian held her stomach and laughed, "Eat stinky tofu smells good." Over at the bamboo house, Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia looked at each other and smiled. Julien closed his eyes and smiled, shaking his head. Lu Baixiang patted his knees lightly. For the first time, Sui Yu was not angry. Instead, he covered his mouth and smiled, his eyes narrowed. Wei Xian rested his chin on his hand and tilted his head. He was already squatting at the entrance of the bamboo house, looking at the back of the little girl, Charcoal. Master and disciple, singing the same tune, amidst the green mountains and clear waters. (378). 20 days later, Qin Pingan and his group passed by a mountain that was as steep as a woman's eyebrows. After entering the boundary of the earth, they had already met two groups of men and women. One group had a dozen or so people with a noble aura. Most of them were from the government. There were a few retainers and guards, all of whom wore standard long swords. There were men, women, old and young. The other group had a Jianghu aura. There were a total of 6 people. 4 of them were about 50 years old. Their breathing was steady and they walked silently. They were undoubtedly the top martial artists of Qinghuan Jianghu. The leader was an old man with an aquiline nose. His eyes were sharp. Beside him was a round-faced girl. Although her appearance was not outstanding, she was born with a pair of bright eyes. The two groups of people were going up the mountain. Previously, when Qin Pingan met the officials, he took the initiative to ask about the scenery here. After they introduced it, Qin Pingan found out that there was a gold osmanthus temple at the top of Qingyao Mountain. There were immortals cultivating in the temple, but they often closed the door to visitors all year round. Last winter, the temple sent word from the woodcutter that they were going to accept 9 disciples. As long as they were under 16 years old, their background was not important. Therefore, recently there were no less than 300 people, each of them young men and women from their families, pouring into Qingyao Mountain in an endless stream. Qin Pingan was thinking about the Zhenwu sword and short sword that were still in the governor's office, so he did not want to join in the fun. Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia had traveled extensively these past 2 years, especially after seeing Qinghuan Jianghu's Taoist temple and Qingshan Jianghu's Luotian grand ritual. They were not very interested in the opening of a mountain to accept disciples. As for whether the gold osmanthus temple's Taoist priests were real immortals or fake masters, the group did not care too much. In the Aquarius continent, an earth immortal of Jindan was already an unattainable existence. After all, there were many hidden dragons and crouching tigers like the Dali dynasty. Even in the vast world there were not many. As the Song clan's cavalry stepped not far to the north of Lakeview Academy, apart from the official name given by the academy, Dali had, in reality, taken over half of the state. The calls for Dali to be regarded as the 10th great dynasty grew louder and louder. When they met the second group of people, The shock in the round-faced girl's eyes never stopped. There was a young man in a white robe who carried a bamboo chest on his back and a vermilion wine pot on his waist. There was a little girl with charcoal riding on the back of a yellow ox. There was a beautiful woman with a bamboo blade and a bamboo sword hanging from her waist. There was also a young Taoist priest and a big bearded swordsman. It was really a strange traveling group. Could it be that this was the mountain and lake wild cultivator that Grandpa had mentioned before? Fortunately, although the black-clothed old man didn't look like a simple person, he was still willing to abide by some old rules as a veteran of the Jianghu. He quickly stopped the girl's unbridled gaze. Not only that, he also nodded to Qin Pingan in greeting, probably as an apology on behalf of the younger generation. Qin Pingan cupped his fists and smiled in return. In the Jianghu, most people would meet by chance like this. However, two groups of people who should have been strangers were reunited by a sudden rainstorm. The rare storm made the mountain path particularly muddy and difficult to walk on. The spring cold was already bone-chilling. The mountain wind whistled past and the rain was extremely gloomy and cold. Pei Qian was directly hit by the soybean-sized raindrops, causing his face to burn with pain. Soon, his lips turned pale and his whole body trembled. This was Pei Qian's physique after practicing martial arts. If it had been before, it was estimated that this short period of wind and rain would have been enough to make Pei Qian sick. Qin Pingan had Zhu Lian scout the way to see if there was a place to take shelter from the rain. The hunchbacked old man's body was like an ape's, twisting and turning among the trees and rocks. He quickly returned and said that there was a naturally formed large rock cave not far ahead. Immediately, a group of people had settled down there and started a fire to warm themselves. Qin Pingan carried Pei Qian on his back and held up the Tong Yi umbrella from the Lotus Blossom Happiness. He also took out a straw raincoat, trying to reduce the impact of the wind and rain on Pei Qian as much as possible. Zhang Shanfeng almost couldn't open his eyes. Walking beside Qin Pingan, he loudly reminded, "There's something wrong with this rain." Qin Pingan nodded and took out a piece of yellow paper talisman made of relatively ordinary material. It was the lowest-ranking Yang Energy Light Lighting Talisman in the True Alchemy Works. Qin Pingan would use this talisman to open the way in mountains, rivers, dilapidated temples and unmarked graves to check the density of yin qi in the water and soil. Qin Pingan twisted the talisman with 2 fingers and gently shook it. After pouring his genuine qi into it, it was instantly ignited. Fortunately, the light-lighting talisman at his fingertips did not burn quickly. It was much slower than the time when he broke into the city god temple of Tsai Kingdom alone. Out of caution, Qin Pingan did not extinguish the light-lighting talisman. He used it to open the way in case there was a trap ahead. During the battle at the call, not only did he form a grudge with an earth immortal of Jindan realm, but he might also attract the covetous eyes of those rogue cultivators. He had to be careful. Not only that, Qin Pingan also asked the yellow earth ox whether it knew that there was a big demon that was the king of the mountains in this area. Although the yellow earth ox had not transformed into a human form, it could speak human language and shook its head. In the 500 years since I've been enlightened, not to mention the recent 200 years of hibernation underground, I've never heard of any mountain spirits or ghosts causing trouble in the Qingluan kingdom. However, 300 years ago in a Buddhist temple 300 miles away from here, I saw a scene where a monk was talking about Buddhism and the scene of osmanthus seeds falling like rain. It was very magical. At that time, it was said that the golden osmanthus seeds that fell all over the temple came from the osmanthus trees on this Qingyao mountain. Su Yuanxia stretched out her hand to support her bamboo hat and laughed loudly. Zhang Shanfeng and I have been to that Buddhist temple long ago. It's too famous and we had to go. However, other than the inscriptions on the wall, we didn't see anything else. The ruins of a few famous Buddhist cases had long been cordoned off and no pilgrims were allowed to enter. The two of us wandered around for half a day and saw a scene that I wrote down in my travel notes. In the twilight, there were 2 young Buddhist monks who were responsible for carrying the merit chests. They probably felt that there were few pilgrims around and there were no outsiders, so the 2 young Buddhist monks stood on their tiptoes and reached out their hands to randomly grab money. After half a day, the young Buddhist monk who took out a silver coin laughed loudly. The 2 of them carried the merit chests on their shoulders and the young Buddhist monk who took out the silver coin walked in front. When Zhang Shanfeng and I saw this, we were very amused. It turned out that the merit chest had to be carried to the back and there was a long flight of stairs to climb. Naturally, the one in front would have the advantage while the one carrying the burden at the back would suffer. Qin Pingan didn't know much about Buddhism. Buddhism wasn't very popular in the Aquarius continent. It could even be said that it was the continent with the least number of pilgrims. So much so that when Qin Pingan was in the lotus blossom blessed land, he often visited the temple of Xanxiang adjacent to the Xingyuan alley. Only then did he come into contact with some Buddhist teachings. He was puzzled. Didn't they say that monks don't touch money? Zhang Shanfeng laughed. There's no such rule in the world that cannot be broken even by thunder. Su Yuanxia joked, you didn't waste your time visiting those temples. These words are very meaningful. Yellow Ox rarely spoke. It would only speak when someone asked it a question. At this moment it fell silent. But it clearly remembered that the ancient Buddhist temple was built at the foot of a mountain. At that time, it was already at the level of sea viewing. When it looked at the temple, because it didn't dare to get too close to the incense of the mortal world, it was afraid of disturbing the mortals and even more afraid of provoking the disgust of the immortals. It could only see a young monk in a snow-white kasaya in the distance. Under the eaves of a hanging iron horse, he stretched out his hand and golden osmanthus seeds fell like raindrops onto his palm. Qin Pingan, Zhang Shanfeng and Su Yuanxia chatted and laughed. Their footsteps were swift as they put away the remaining half of the light-raising talisman into their sleeves. They had already arrived at the cave that Zhu Lian had found. It was quite large, like the ancestral hall of a rural village. It was large enough to accommodate 30 to 40 people. Along the way the young light-raising talisman burned slowly. And the further they went from the mountain path, the slower it burned. This true rain was most likely caused by the qi cultivators who were targeting the Golden Osmanthus Temple's recruitment. The first group to arrive at the grotto were all women. There were 7 or 8 of them. The oldest was a white-haired old woman, and the youngest was a budding girl. Because of the heavy rain, the hedge used to cover their faces seemed cumbersome. They were placed beside their feet together with their bamboo hats, umbrellas and straw raincoats. At this moment they were warming themselves by the fire. When they saw Qin Pingan and the others their eyes were cold. Some of them moved closer to the fire. Obviously they didn't want to have too much interaction with Qin Pingan and the others. Qin Pingan couldn't help but turn and glance at Zhu Lian. The latter's smile was simple and honest. These women, who were from the same sect, must have entered the grotto when it rained and collected the dry branches early. Now the wind outside the grotto was strong enough to flip the roof. Qin Pingan and the others could only watch helplessly. As a qi cultivator, although Zhang Shanfeng's realm was not high, it was not difficult for him to use some entry-level techniques to start a fire. However, it was a taboo for cultivators to casually use supernatural powers outside. Qin Pingan helped Pei Qian set up the cowhide tent. Then he took out her clean clothes from the bamboo box and asked Sui Yuyu to help Pei Qian change into them. When Pei Qian walked out of the tent energetically, the group of Jianghu people they met earlier also returned to the grotto to take shelter from the rain. This rain was really so heavy that even the heroes of Jianghu had to bow their heads. When Qin Pingan saw the old man with an aquiline nose, he nodded his head to greet him. The latter also nodded his head as a form of greeting. Since Qin Pingan was so courteous, Zhu Lian and the others changed their seats and quietly cleared out an empty space. The round-faced girl, who looked like a drowned rat, was already surrounded by the retainers to block the view of outsiders. After all, her clothes were soaked in the rain and the girl's curves were exposed. After the group of Jianghu people sat down, the round-faced girl began to size up the women again. Her eyes lit up and she asked, "Don't tell me you are the aunties from Rouge Building in Yunxiao country?" Previously, the girl had only sized up Qin Pingan a few times and the black-clothed old man had already dissuaded her. But this time, the girl's words were so disrespectful and almost provocative that the old man still closed his eyes and rested, turning a deaf ear. On the other side, a young woman with sharp eyebrows turned her head and said angrily, "Impudent." The round-faced girl was not afraid at all and asked back with a smile, "May I ask, how am I impudent?" These women were from Rouge Building, one of the top Jianghu families in Yunxiao country. The youngest of them was a budding girl with a chin as sharp as a goose's egg and a beautiful face. She opened her eyes wide and curiously sized up this boastful girl of the same age. There were only a few people who dared to provoke Rouge Building in the Jianghu and Yunxiao country. Then it should be some big sect in Qinghuan country or Qingshan country. The sharp-chinned girl subconsciously stretched out her thumb and rubbed the inscription on an exquisite dagger at her waist. It was a yellow bamboo scabbard with a round and pleasant color. The words Zwar were engraved on the bamboo. Her senior sister from the same sect, the young woman, had a pair of mandarin duck knives at her waist. At this moment, she held the hilt of the knives and her face was as cold as ice. She said in a low voice, "Then let's exchange blows and see how strong I am?" Exchanging blows was a relatively elegant way for people in the Wolin to learn from each other. It was more civilized and less likely to see blood. Because as long as the loser saw blood, it was still an unfair victory. It was not something to be proud of. The round-faced girl made a face at the woman. What kind of heroine are you to bully a junior just because you are older and have learned martial arts for decades? The young woman was very angry. She was not even 30 years old. What did she mean by learned martial arts for decades? The white-haired old woman was graceful and graceful. She said to the woman beside her softly, "Why are you angry with a junior? If you don't cultivate your chi well, your martial arts achievements won't be high." The young woman obviously respected the old woman very much. She immediately lowered her head and said, "I will remember." Not far away, the round-faced girl smiled charmingly. Only an old woman like you knows etiquette. In fact, it was still a compliment that was not pleasant to hear. Chin Pingan stayed out of it. He only felt that the round-faced girl's ability to poke a knife into other people's hearts was not small. The old woman did not care about this kind of offense. She shifted her line of sight and looked at the old man with the aquiline nose. "Are you the leader of the great swamp gang Zhu Lao?" The old man in black opened his eyes and said with a smile, "I haven't gone out for nearly 30 years. Unexpectedly, there are still people who know my name?" The old woman smiled slightly. Even after another 30 years, the Jianghu will still remember the name of Zhu Lao. After the old woman revealed his identity, the expressions of the women in the Rouge House changed slightly. The old devil of the great swamp gang Zhu Fengxian could be said to be infamous. 30 years ago he liked to ride a bright red carriage and travel far and wide. He galloped through the martial arts circles of several countries and stained countless people with blood. The number of righteous people who died under his hands, if not 100, was at least 80. Zhu Fengxian also had 8 disciples under his command. They were known as the 8 Kings of Hell and were awe-inspiring in Qingwan country. However, 30 years ago the great swamp gang suffered heavy losses and Zhu Fengxian began to cultivate in isolation. Half of the 8 disciples died. Originally there were 5,000 to 6,000 people in the gang, but most of the birds and beasts left. In the past 30 years, the leader of the Jianghu who once commanded the heroes in Qingwan country fell silent. Just as Zhu Fengxian was about to close his eyes and cultivate his qi, the old woman who always gave people the impression of being very elegant suddenly said, "But today is different from the past. Compared to 30 years ago, the Jianghu is much deeper. When you are not in your own territory, you should toast less, kowtow more and speak less." The round-faced girl suddenly widened her eyes, feeling as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world. She stared at the white-haired old woman, wanting to know if this old woman had gone crazy. Zhu Fengxian said indifferently, "If I remember correctly, your Rouge House has been a second-rate sect in Yunshao country for more than 200 years since the founding of your grandmaster. You have been living a very cowardly life. Why, in these 30 years, did you girls have someone above you?" Chin Pingan felt a headache coming on. How could he encounter such an inexplicable Jianghu feud when he was just taking shelter from the rain? Previously, Pei Qian had complained that after leaving Betail Ferry and walking for such a long distance, he had only bumped into a yellow earth bull. After that, he had not encountered any demons or ghosts. Pei Qian listened carefully. This was the Jianghu. He would also have to leave in the future. Now he needed to see and learn more. Julien nodded to himself. Zhu Fengxian's words were indeed interesting. Only by becoming a direct disciple could one practice the secret arts of the mountain and the inheritance of the ancestral hall. Pei Qian squatted beside Chin Pingan and listened with great interest. She felt that this kind of battle of words was the most interesting. It was more interesting than watching women scratch each other on the streets of the capital of Nanyuan country when she was a child. Chin Pingan was a little worried. Both sides were not easy to deal with. He was afraid that they would fight if they didn't agree with each other. The grotto was so small that there was nowhere to hide. Swords had no eyes. Did he have to remind them now to let the Great Swamp sect and the Rouge sect fight outside? Chin Pingan sighed and stood up. He walked straight through the 2 groups of people and walked to the entrance of the grotto. He pinched out the half-lit talisman hidden in his sleeve with 2 fingers and burned it again. A small golden flame, even in such a heavy storm, was still swaying leisurely like the grass in the warm spring breeze. Then Chin Pingan turned his head and smiled. This rain is strange. This unusual evil aura has been continuous since the beginning of the rain. It is very likely that it was done by the Qi cultivators hiding in the dark. Looking at the situation, the immortals of the Gold Osmanthus Temple have not taken action for the time being. Therefore you must be careful on the way to the gold osmanthus temple. You can put aside the grudges of the pugilistic world for the time being. After all, the path of cultivation for the two ladies is close at hand. It is more important. Once you climb the mountain, you are almost on the path of cultivation. Qin Pingan looked at the two ladies and said slowly, "Why should the path of cultivation become narrower and narrower? If you don't see eye to eye with each other, the path is so wide. You can just walk your own path." Zhu Fengxian smiled and nodded. This young master is right. I hope that in the future you will have the opportunity to visit my great swamp sect. I will definitely prepare a big banquet to welcome you. Although it was just polite words, these words were personally said by the old devil Zhu Fengxian. At least in the pugilistic world of Qinghuan country, it was still worth a lot of gold and silver. The white-haired old woman glanced at the yellow talisman in Qin Pingan's hand and said with a smile, "Our family's Qingqing will definitely remember young master's priceless advice." The oval-faced young lady smiled sweetly at Qin Pingan. The yang qi lit talisman on Qin Pingan's fingertips had already burned out and the golden flame was extinguished. Qin Pingan rubbed his fingertips and smiled. Someone said that in the pugilistic world, one's fist is not strong enough. As an immortal, one's skill is not strong enough. The round-faced young lady smiled and asked, "May I ask, young master, which expert said that?" Qin Pingan replied, "A friend." The round-faced young lady who called herself Wan, gave him a thumbs up and clicked her tongue. "I'm convinced." The oval-faced young lady named Morning, was somewhat curious about the young man's identity. Zhu Fengxian and the old woman from Rouge House looked at each other. They were both experienced in the pugilistic world and didn't need to say anything. The small conflict between them was not worth mentioning compared to the cultivation of their juniors. Even if they held grudges before they successfully ascended the mountain and entered the golden osmanthus temple, they really had to mind their own business. Even if there was danger on the road, the great swamp sect and Rouge House might have to sincerely cooperate and help each other. Qin Pingan turned his head and looked outside. The heavy rain was still shocking. What season was it in Lotus Blossom Blessed Land? Who were the current 10 people of the world there? However, Imperial Tutor Zhong Qiu, Lake Mountain Sect leader Yu Zhini, and Bird's Eye Peak Lu Fang were definitely among them. I wonder if the houses in that alley have brand new door gods and spring festival couplets pasted on them? Qin Pingan sighed softly. After taking down the bamboo chest, Qin Pingan was only carrying the half-immortal weapon, Sword Immortal, that the Fu family of Old Dragon City had given him under the guise of Fan Jun Mao as compensation. Qin Pingan raised his head and looked at the pitch-black sky above the curtain of rain. Back then he was ignorant. He remembered that there was a guy who wore a bamboo hat and led a donkey. He boasted that his swordsmanship was impenetrable in the heavy rain. Now even Qin Pingan could do it. He just didn't know when he could become a true sword immortal. With this sword immortal on his back, Qin Pingan temporarily had difficulty even unsheathing it. When he thought of this, he took off the blade-strengthening gourd and drank a big mouthful of wine. However, he forgot that the wine in the gourd wasn't osmanthus wine or well-immortal wine, but the medicinal wine that Fan Jun Mao had refined. Qin Pingan immediately shuddered. His face flushed red and he coughed incessantly. He could only cover his mouth with the back of his hand and turn around. With a slightly apologetic expression, he resentfully walked toward Pei Qian. For a moment he didn't look like an immortal anymore. Baishui Temple was located in the south of the central part of Qinghuan. Inside the temple, there was spring water that flowed from the ground like rolling pearls. It was important to brew tea. As a result, scholars from Yunshao and Qingshan would often come here to drink tea from the spring. The Baishui Temple's incense was at its peak. Thus, it was on par with the North Mountain Temple in the capital. However, compared to the North Mountain Temple's active monks, the Baishui Temple's monks didn't seem to like showing themselves in public. Furthermore, in the past 100 years, there hadn't been a dazzling Zen master. Thus, in this grand debate between Buddhism and Taoism, the North Mountain Temple was in the limelight. On the other hand, the Baishui Temple, which had a history of 1,000 years, still didn't have a single monk who announced that they would attend the meeting to decide the order of the 3 religions. Recently, there had been continuous spring rain. Many temples in Qinghuan stood in the misty rain. Today at dusk, there was a young monk wearing a snow-white cassock walking slowly inside the Baishui Temple. The Baishui Temple had already closed its doors for almost a month, causing the sincere and kind men and women to suffer. The young monk's face was cold. Along the way, the old monk and the young novice monk greeted him, but the eye-catching young monk in the cassock ignored them. Everyone was used to it. The young monk came to the railing of a small pond with dark green water. This unremarkable pond had the reputation of being a dragon's pond. It was rumored that in the small but bottomless pond, there lived an old turtle. It was released by the monks when the Baishui temple was first built. Every time the monks of the Baishui temple gave a wonderful lecture, the old turtle would come out of the water and appear in the world. Regarding this matter, there were detailed records in the official history of Qinghuan. No one questioned it. The young monk continued to stroll casually. He walked along the long corridor behind the Hall of Great Strength. Step by step he climbed up. Under the eaves hung a string of delicate bells. When the young monk climbed up the stairs, there were spirits called iron horses under the eaves, that were born and lived in the bells. At this moment they all flew out of the bells. They had a pair of transparent wings and began to shake the wind chimes. The young monk didn't seem to like the quiet and peaceful atmosphere of the ancient temple. He frowned. Those small and exquisite spirits immediately hid back into the bells. The young monk turned his head and looked down at a small square behind the Hall of Great Strength. That was the place where the eminent monk preached, "Heavenly Maiden Scattered Flowers," in the history of the Baishui temple. He remembered that there were many golden osmanthus seeds that fell that day. The monk who preached and the monk who listened to the teachings both sat in the pile of osmanthus seeds. The monk who preached was not used to the fragrance and even sneezed a few times. The monk who listened attentively felt that he understood and thought of many things to say. Then he wrote them down one by one on the stone tablet of the Baishui temple. After walking up the stairs and reaching the top, he went around the hidden scriptures tower and walked to the side of the abbot's room. There was a yellow mud wall that was half the height of a person, enclosing a small space. There was a well, and beside the well there was a stone table and stone benches. The young monk pushed open the small door made of bamboo and walked to the side of the well. The mouth of the small well had been sealed for many years. In the early years there was a famous Buddhist case that happened here. It was said that even the Central Plains had heard of it. This was the reason why the Baishui temple didn't have any eminent monks in the past 100 years, yet it still stood tall. Regarding this case, the Baishui temple had argued for hundreds of years. The various temples of Qinghuan country had argued, the Buddhists and Taoists had argued, and even the scholars of Buddhism and Taoism had argued over this case. Just based on the various walls of the temple, there were more than 40 eminent monks and scholars from all over the world who had written their opinions on this case. The Baishui temple's hidden scriptures were abundant, and its unique good books were complete. It was the best in Qinghuan country. However, this young monk who was standing beside the well in a daze hated that place the most. He had never set foot in it even once. The scripture of Li, it was said to be demonic. Buddha's head was covered in feces. He sat on the mouth of the well that was like a round stool after it was sealed. He had a question that he couldn't figure out all these years. He remembered that in the Buddhist scriptures, there was a Luohan who became a Buddha in the future. A heavenly demon appeared and threatened him. The Luohan was terrified and went to the Buddha. Then, the Buddha gave him a dharma and the heavenly demon was eliminated. When the young monk read this for the first time, he didn't think too much about it. He only woke up in horror one day and then fell into endless pain. He had an obsession in his heart. The old woman smiled bitterly and said, "An earth immortal who has formed the golden core is beyond the world. Why would he accept disciples? He just needs to focus on cultivation and go straight to the great way. If it were Zhu Fengxian, would he be willing to pick up money in the mud? Even if there is gold and silver in the mud, we Jianghu people want it. We still have to bend down and touch the mud. Would the immortals on the mountain care about it? However, it is true that Temple Master Zhanggua has the talent of an earth immortal. Zhu Fengxian need not doubt it. It is only a matter of time. Your granddaughter has Zhanggua as her master and cultivates in gold osmanthus temple. Her future will not be bad." Zhu Fengxian nodded and his expression turned slightly better. Zhu Fengxian, as a martial artist of the seventh realm, would be wary of a Dragon Gate cultivator, but he would not be afraid. The number of cave realm and sea viewing realm cultivators who died in his hands could be counted on one hand. However, Zhu Fengxian was willing to pay enough respect to a Dragon Gate Taoist who had the potential to become an earth immortal of the Golden Core realm. He was qualified to be his granddaughter's teacher. Every year, the Great Swamp Gang would take out a sum of silver and send it secretly to Gold Osmanthus Temple on Mount Qingyao. Zhang Shanfeng sighed in his heart. It was not that the people on the mountain did not know about the matters on the mountain. The immortals in the eyes of Zhu Fengxian and the old woman from Rouge House were too high up in the void and did not touch the mud. So what if they were earth immortals of the Golden Core realm? They also needed to be cautious and conscientious in accumulating their wealth. Cultivation was the biggest bottomless hole in the world. However, most of the earth immortals, except for the mountain cultivators who were used to living in seclusion, had no need to take care of their own affairs. They would have connections with people in their sect. They only needed to concentrate on cultivation. In this way, the old woman from Rouge House was half right. At this moment, in the distant mountains in the rain, there was a sudden flash of lightning and thunder. The earth trembled and the wind and rain tilted. There was also a loud sound like a lion's roar, one after another. After a while, the strange phenomenon stopped. There was only this storm left in the world. After about half an hour, Zhu Lian and Zhu Fengxian, who were on the right of Sui Xiong in the grotto, raised their heads and looked out of the grotto at almost the same time. Zhu Fengxian's expression was normal, but his heart tightened. Among the retainers of that young immortal master, there were two people who had keen intuition no weaker than his. One must know that he was one of the four great grandmasters of Qinghuan, Qingshan, and Yunshao. Zhu Ziang glanced at the exquisite dagger on Lu Qingqing's waist from the corner of her eye. The bamboo sheath was inscribed with the word, Zua. She smiled and asked, "Your dagger is quite nice. Let me take a look?" Lu Qingqing shook her head and said timidly, "This is a relic of my great ancestor grandmother. I can't just give it to others." Zhu Ziang still wanted to pester her, but Lu Borui smiled and said, "Zhu Ziang, don't force people. If you cultivate with the same sect in the future, you have to be careful." Zhu Ziang had a good impression of this handsome Taoist priest, who was one of the direct disciples of Abidin Zhanghua. Soon he might be his senior brother in Gold Osmanthus Temple. Therefore, he let go of the soft-tempered Rouge House woman beside him. Lu Qingqing gave the Taoist priest a grateful look, but the latter laughed it off. Looking at the two young girls who were about to become cultivators on the mountain, Qin Pingan naturally thought of the encounter in the colorful robes kingdom. There was a young Qi cultivator with a bell who once fought side by side with Chen Pingan to eliminate demons. Although her cultivation was not high, she did not make things worse. She was a very chivalrous girl. Later, she became the envied disciple of the Divine Grandeur sect. There was also the suffering brother and sister whom he first met in the woodshed. Now the two children could be considered half-cultivators. The mystery of the world was in drinking and pecking. When they arrived at the Taoist temple, the two lucky girls, Zhu Ziang and Lu Qingqing, were led by the Taoist priest to the collapsed area. The little Taoist boy and his senior brothers went to place the osmanthus umbrellas. These items were very precious. If they were willing to sell them to people at the foot of the mountain, they could be sold at a sky-high price of thousands of taels of silver. They were indeed the Moon Palace osmanthus branches that were cut from the ancestral osmanthus tree. The little Taoist boy was daydreaming. If a single osmanthus branch umbrella was so valuable, then if 6 osmanthus trees were sold at a discount, wouldn't his Mount Qingyao become a huge mountain of gold and silver? Su Borui led Qin Pingan and the others through the small quiet Taoist temple and went straight to the back door. After the rain, the view was clear and open. They could already see the ancient and tall osmanthus trees with lush branches and leaves. The one in the middle was especially tall. Every old osmanthus tree had its own name. Su Borui introduced them one by one. Which expert on the mountain said some witty words under which tree? Su Borui said one by one. It was concise and to the point, but it did not lose its humor. Between the osmanthus trees, there was a crisscrossing bluestone road. Under the shade of the trees, there were stone tables and stone stools. The stone table under the ancestral osmanthus tree was carved into a chessboard by the Taoist temple. Su Borui stayed there for a while and touched the chessboard with his finger. He joked that the chessboard was not carved by a knife, but by a foreign sword immortal who had traveled here. He spat out sword chi and used the sharp sword chi to measure the chessboard. The Taoist in the temple once used a ruler to measure carefully and found that the horizontal and vertical distance was not even a millimeter off. Therefore, the sword immortal must be at least a gold core sword cultivator, or even a nascent soul sword immortal from the Aquarius continent. Speaking of this, Su Borui was in high spirits. He smiled and said, "A long time ago, there was a senior in our temple who insisted on getting to the bottom of the matter. He traveled thousands of miles to the Wind Snow Temple, Jinwu Mountain, Jinyang Mountain, and the Wind Thunder Garden in search of the sword immortal. He met many famous sword cultivators and finally came to a conclusion. Not only was it about bridges but it also introduced buildings, attics and other buildings. Chin Pingan was also entranced by it. Most of the houses in the village were connected together, so the corridors were often very long. After the brothers separated, they were still adjacent. Chin Pingan walked out of the corridor and walked along the bluestone road until he reached the side of a pond. He stood there for the whole night. In fact, he didn't think much. He was just in a daze. The next day he was asked to stay by the old patriarch who couldn't refuse his hospitality. Although Pei Qian didn't speak the local dialect, she still played with a large group of people of the same age. That day when he called Pei Qian for dinner, the group of children were playing eagle-catching chicks. Pei Qian wanted to play with Chin Pingan. Chin Pingan smiled and hooked 2 fingers. He raised his hand and made a gesture of hitting a chestnut. However, he couldn't resist Pei Qian's pestering. Chin Pingan became the old hen protecting the chicks, and Pei Qian became the eagle catching the chicks. Pei Qian couldn't catch the chicks at the tail of Chin Pingan's group. Thus she swapped places with her peer. In the end, Pei Qian laughed the loudest. A young Taoist priest stood in the distance. He smiled and waved his hand, indicating that he was waiting for the master and disciple to come to the table to eat. Almost all the children dispersed and went home. Accompanied by the smoke and the afterglow, there were also elders at the door of their own homes, shouting the names of their children. Chin Pingan held Pei Qian's hand and walked towards Zhang Shanfeng. When the 3 of them walked in the alley, a short old Taoist with a brandy nose suddenly appeared in front of them. He was dressed in a black Taoist robe, with a lifelike bright red fire dragon embroidered on his left and right sleeves. Zhang Shanfeng was stunned on the spot. Chin Pingan held his breath and focused, as though he was facing a formidable enemy. Pei Qian only took a few glances before hurriedly turning her head away, not daring to take another look. Zhang Shanfeng quickly walked forward and asked in puzzlement, "Master, why are you here?" The elder glared and said, "If I didn't come to bring you back to the mountain to cultivate, were you going to marry and have children outside and have children?" Zhang Shanfeng turned his head and smiled helplessly at Chin Pingan. The gist of it was that his master was like that, so there was no need to take it to heart. After the young Taoist priest turned his head, the elder looked at the slightly pale Zhang Shanfeng in a daze. He then looked at his disciple's shoulder that had been pierced by the intrinsic flying sword. He stomped his foot and said angrily, "Who dares to hurt you? Tell me your name and I will stab his scarecrow." Zhang Shanfeng wiped his face with his palm. Having such a master, he was too ashamed to face Chin Pingan. A mouthful of pure true qi inside her body surged up and down, rushing through her qi mansion aperture and acupoints along the way like a huge wave slapping against a stone cliff. Su Yuanxia hurriedly circulated her qi to regulate her breathing. With great difficulty she finally digested that surge of energy. She burped and spat out a mouthful of turbid air that had been accumulating for a long time, which she had been unable to purify. She wiped her mouth, her eyes shining. Chin Pingan was not in a hurry to take back the blade-strengthening gourd. He crossed his arms and said with a smile, "Do you think everyone is like Su Yuanxia? Can you drink the small refined wine in this gourd?" The bearded man laughed and did not stand on ceremony with Chin Pingan. He drank another mouthful of the medicinal wine to help cleanse the turbid qi in his pure genuine qi. In the end he was not satisfied and drank a 3rd mouthful. He sat cross-legged for a long time like an old monk. When he opened his eyes, he handed the gourd back to Chin Pingan. "Okay, you can't do it more than 3 times. I finally have some hope in my life. I hope to be a martial artist of the 6th realm. 3 mouthfuls are enough. If I drink more it will be too much. The foundation of a martial artist is not good enough. I can't bear this kind of good wine. But let's make it clear in advance. When I break through the last bottleneck of the 5th realm, I will ask you for more wine." Chin Pingan was puzzled. "Then take the wine. It will save you the trouble of asking me for it." Although Qin Pingan needed a small amount of medicinal wine to nourish his body and spirit, his martial arts cultivation had been on the right track. If he did not drink the medicinal wine, it would only slow down the rise of his cultivation. It was not like the timely help that Old Dragon City had given him after he received the sword-swallowing boat, which was the icing on the cake. However, for Su Yuanxia, this pot of medicinal wine, which could not be bought with money, was more significant. In the small countries of the Aquarius continent outside the Dali dynasty, the difference between the fifth realm and the sixth realm was one realm. The treatment of the martial artists of the fifth realm and the sixth realm was very different. In the small countries in the corner, a martial artist of the seventh realm might be involved in the martial arts fate of the country. Then, a martial artist of the sixth realm who had a chance to reach the golden body realm would naturally be a treasure in the hearts of the kings of the small countries. Su Yuanxia glanced at Qin Pingan. This medicinal wine can improve one's cultivation without any side effects. Of course it is a good thing. But it may not be a good thing for a martial artist who wants to break through to the next realm to train his mind. With the medicinal wine, it is inevitable that he will feel lucky. When he practices martial arts in the future, his hands will not be slack, but his mind will be slack. Qin Pingan, do you think that all the martial artists in the world, whose cultivation is close at hand and can clearly improve by drinking a mouthful, can really resist drinking a drop of wine? Su Yuanxia looked into the distance and sighed. Even if I know that it will eventually hinder the opportunity to break through to the next realm, I, Su Yuanxia, admit that I usually cannot resist. Besides, I am a drunkard. When my addiction to wine reaches my head, I don't care about the bottleneck. I will drink first. In terms of the determination of the mind on the path of cultivation, Su Yuanxia admitted that she was not as good as Zhang Shanfeng, and even worse than Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan nodded. Then when Brother Su ascends to the sixth realm, I will give you more wine as a celebratory drink. It was said that the incense could bless people and make them rich, which was very effective. Therefore, how could the incense not be abundant? During the day, the noisy military temple was much quieter at night. The civil and military temple was not like the other temples in the area. Normally it was not closed at night. That day, Qin Pingan, who was resting in the county, took Cui Dongshan to the civil and military temple under the dim light of night. He asked the 4 people in the painting scroll to stay in the inn to protect Pei Qian. The 2 went to the Confucian temple first. In the history of the Qinghuan kingdom, a civil official with the posthumous title of Duke Wenzhen was worshipped there. He was once an official in the local county and did good deeds. Therefore, all the Confucian temples in the area were worshipped there. The reason why they visited the Confucian temple at night was that Qin Pingan had been overlooking the county from a distant mountain ridge. If he looked into the distance, he could vaguely see that 2 places in the county were covered with dark clouds. Evil qi rose and slowly spread around the county. After Qin Pingan noticed the abnormality, Cui Dongshan casually revealed the heavenly secret. The civil and military temple has been harmed. It has been used as a bridge for cultivators to steal someone's fortune and fortune. If people in the county were born with some talent for cultivation, they might see the statue of the civil and military saint shedding tears when they went to burn incense there recently. Otherwise, they might have been warned by the 2 local gods in their dreams. However, after Qin Pingan and the others went to the Confucian temple, the gods did not show up except for the strong yin qi. It was just a clay statue with few incense sticks. When they left, Cui Dongshan explained with a smile, "After all, we are outsiders. We have never burned incense in the Confucian temple. The local gods have weak spirituality and are dying. It is difficult for them to show up and talk to us. Moreover, they are suspicious of us. We might as well hide and wait for death. It is better than leaving the golden body and being caught by the Qi trainers with evil intentions. We will be bound by the soul arresting and God arresting techniques. We will end up in a worse situation than our golden body being destroyed." When he arrived at the Guanlin temple, Qin Ping's heart tightened. Although there were no more incense sticks lit by the commoners in the temple, Qin Ping could still see the flourishing sight of incense sticks curling up in spirals. However, there was a chilling aura in the seemingly flourishing sight. Adding oil to a raging fire was not a long-term solution. Not only that, Qin Ping went to the large incense burner to take a look at the remaining incense sticks. He pinched out a piece of it, and it quickly turned into ashes at his fingertips, releasing a faint stench. Chui Dongshan had already stepped into the main hall. He put his hands behind his back and stared at the 10-feet-tall statue carefully. After all, it was a martial temple in a small county. There were not so many gold leaves to decorate the temple. Therefore, the clay statue would not be too tall. At this moment, the god who was deep in the mud was in a deep sleep. He was either talking to the local people, parents, and officials in their dreams, or dealing with the contamination of the incense sticks with evil origins. After Qin Pingan walked into the main hall, Chui Dongshan waved his sleeves and smiled. "Mister, you can take this opportunity to see the manifestation of the martial arts fate in this world." As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Pingan heard a ding-dong sound in the lake in his heart. Looking up, a golden drop of water fell from above and finally fell into the incense burner at the foot of the statue. There were ripples.